Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Let Us Head Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku and All Men Were Quirkless. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Flying was pretty amazing. The sensation of gravity giving up on you. The view, the view was amazing. He could imagine what it was like to not be a midget when he flew. A shame he only flew when people threw him, usually into things. This time it was a wall. The air left his lungs as he collided and he dropped like a sack of rocks. Hands under you, Midoriya. Get those hands under you and that chin up. His hands did go under him, but there was no strength in them. Slowly, he managed to pry himself off the ground. He propped himself up with one arm, breathing heavily. What the F you doing, runt? I think he might be trying to look up our skirts. Bam, another kick. It was a mystery how he hadn't broken any ribs. They were twice his size, for God's sake. Outnumbering him was quite unnecessary. He couldn't even take one girl in a fight. Get off him, you hags. Bam, Kaken landed beside him with a thud, immediately getting stomped. You talk a big game for a boy, Izuku. Come on girls, let's leave these failed abortions before someone thinks we're associated with them. Technically, harassing them every day was a form of association, just not a pleasant one. No one would think badly of the girls. After all, this was elementary school. Everyone harassed them here. I think you scared them off, Kaken. Course I did. Who do you think I am? A beat-up boy. That's not what I meant. Right now, 97% of the world have quirks. Coincidentally, over 97% of the world is female. Midoriya and Kaken realized this simple fact at the age of 4. From there, the two boys stuck together, being the only other male they had met. You'd think, now that they were rare and all, people would be more worried about them. Without them, humanity would end. But nope. Time for harassment. Mass suicide. Male baby. More like aborted baby. F the future, let's laugh at the short guy. In addition to getting quirks, women also grew bigger. It sounded nice, but it really wasn't. Sure, right now it made them faster and stronger, but there had to be massive reconstructions worldwide to accommodate the new common height of 10 feet. Huge waste of money. And if it kept going, women would grow themselves to death, growing too large to be functional creatures. Midoriya couldn't wait. Women became slower too. Not just physically, but to the point where even boys like Midoriya and Kaken could outpace most of them. They were quick, so quick that they could evade most of their problems and still take a moment to share a juice box the size of their head. I think you were pretty cool, Kaken. Course I was. Kaken laughed off his injuries, standing up with a smile. Who do you think I am? Katsuki Bakugo doesn't bow to any hag. Guess I'll be leaving you here then. Kaken's mom rolled her eyes, leaning against the wall. Not you, those other hags. Then what am I? Katsuki, a good hag. Kaken didn't even flinch at saying it, earning him a fist across the top of the head. A bad hag. The worst hag. AGH. Kaken and his mom ran in circles, both shouting at each other. She might be over 10 feet tall, but Kaken and Midoriya had learned how to bolt. I'm going home. Later, Kaken. Midoriya adjusted his bag, waving goodbye before scurrying off. He avoided people like a ghost, fighting through the crowds like a rat. The steps to Mom's apartment were huge, but he had gotten used to them. It was like rock climbing, except sometimes fellow climbers would step on him and punt him down. He knocked on the door, too short to reach the doorknob on his own. Though I'm home. The door opened and he saw Mom. She looked tired, but her face made him break out in a smile. She opened the door, putting on a fake smile. She wasn't very good at it. He'd make sure she could smile someday, but with real smiles. They ate in silence, both used to ignoring the bruises that covered most of Midoriya's body despite how obvious they were. They smiled, pretending everything was fine, and broke off after the food was gone. At least having a son meant some extra money, a paycheck from the government out of sympathy. Plus, he was way cheaper to take care of than a girl. He still used a toddler's bed, since it was the only size small enough for him. No one made things for men anywhere. Not anymore. He passed out, dreaming of a world where he and Kaken did have quirks. A world where people looked up to him. A world where heroes respected him. A world where he and Kaken were heroes. Bam, that the best you got. Seriously, Midoriya spat blood, flipping off the ground onto his feet. What the hell is with you, punching bag? One of the girls laughed. You just keep getting up. And I thought this would be boring. How else am I supposed to look up your skirts? Bam, this kick made his head twist, but his head immediately asked back, smiling, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Just being honest. Wouldn't want you getting bored, now would we? Bam. The kicks couldn't even knock him off his feet anymore. Girls couldn't punch him, effectively that is. The height difference was too big in middle school. He learned to roll with the punches, flying higher than ever, and now with a smart-ass grin on his face. You don't know when to give up, do you? Said the raving beach to the victim as she didn't give up, and kept on kicking him in the Bam! He barely stumbled, shifting his body in the same direction as the kick to negate most of the force. He also blocked with his shoulder and backpack, turning the kick into a shove. He barely even noticed the pain. He didn't bother checking for injuries. He could just feel them these days. He was fine, nothing serious. Bruises were practically permanent tattoos with how often he had them. Finally, they gave up and pissed off. Damn beaches. He wished he'd be around to see women go extinct. F those men who donated sperm and continued this sit. Hey, how you holding up? Midoriya rubbed his shoulder and glanced at his best friend, who was currently spread out on the ground, still smiling like it wasn't sit. Never better. These beaches can't hit worth sit compared to the hack. Katsuki flipped off the ground. You got anything going on after this? Midoriya started picking up and sorting their books back into their bags, marveling at all the scattered papers. I forgot all about this homework. Well, I'll ace this, then try bar surfing. Wanna come? Women had no effing clue what the difference between a grown man and a middle schooler was. If they didn't ID them, they could get some nice drinks. Can't? Hag's suspicious. Get me a bottle to go. Midoriya nodded, giving his brother a pat on the back. Don't die. Katsuki looked into the future, like a general seeing a battle he couldn't win. I'll do my best, but I can't promise anything. Katsuki SCD together his things and walked into the sunset, waving goodbye to Midoriya until the two couldn't see each other anymore. Midoriya watched him bail, then hit the road himself. He went to their hideout, switching out of his uniform for a big ratty coat and hat, then went back to street surfing. No one paid attention to the homeless bums or expected them to have an ID. Made getting a beer in this hellhole a step easier, a trick taught to them by the fourth man they ever met. His gallivanting was cut off by villains, chased by heroines, the coolest women in Midoriya's book. He knew all about them. It was how he wasted his free time. He wasn't much of a drinker but wanted to seem cool to Katsuki. He'd have to steal him a bottle on the way home. The heroines ran down the street, pulverizing the villains. They pulled civilians from the fight to keep them safe. He didn't care as much for the fighting. Some of the girls at his school were better at it than the heroines. It was the saving people that he liked. He took notes quickly, glad to be unnoticeable. People would see a rat before they saw a homeless guy. He finished his notes and faded away, taking the streets he knew his way so well around. Moving through this maze of legs and concrete was the easiest part for him. Mothers pulled daughters close at his approach. Businesswomen scoffed and snarled at him. When everyone hated you, moving through them was easy. He got shoved and jostled, but it didn't matter. He didn't have anything to steal on him, and he was used to random beatdowns or police harassment. Eventually, he made his way home. He had gotten used to jumping to open the door and strode on in. No welcome home, but he didn't give it F. At least, he learned not to show it. When was his last hot meal? Irrelevant. He cut down his introspection. He was the smartest guy in school, well, smartest student in school. Smartest guy was a 50-50 shot. Midoriya focused on grabbing some food and headed to his room. He didn't need anything, so he didn't bother the woman he shared a house with. He now lived entirely off the extra money the government gave to people caring for cripples like him. He never spent it all, saving constantly for the day he could move out. His room was always empty, except for the computer he saved 2 years for. It wasn't recent even when he bought it, but it was small enough that he could use it. The small size suited him. He opened it up, checked his VPN, then checked the news. The only things adorning the walls were the things he made. Pictures he drew of hero merchandise. He'd gotten pretty good and could run a knockoff scheme if he wanted. But right now, he was focused on his notes. Once he was finished with that, he started working on his little mysteries. Small things that caught his eye. All Might's secret quirk. JJBA Part 13. Quirk Singularity. Only one of those was about fiction, but it was his favorite. JJBA Part 13. The hypothetical final part of one of Japan's most famous series. Curse 13, The Forgotten Part. JoJo's bizarre adventure had ended on a cliffhanger. Part 11 ended with a world where everyone gained stands, destroying the secret world of stands and stand fighting. Everyone thought Part 11 would be the end, but it wasn't. Many strange things had happened in JJBA. Vampires had been hit with solar-powered punches. Jesus had uppercut the devil to clear the devil's name. The president was ended by a cripple because God told him to. Its story was so strange, one had to wonder what fever dream inspired the whole mess. All of these were outdone, in some people's opinions, in Part 12. A single volume with its main character, the Nameless One, and their stand, Weird Al. Weird Al was a close-range artificial humanoid stand that had only a single situational ability. Its body was immune to the effects of all other stands. Part 12 was a race against trying to reset the universe. The Nameless One, Michael Jackson, and the Devil on probation all came together to stop. An egg, a literal effing egg, and it only got weirder from there. At the end of the volume, TNO, MJ, and the actual devil from hell used their stands, Weird Al, Smooth Crime, and 3DG to defeat an egg in a race to the North Pole, but instead got effing NUKED. Then the egg used its stand, dreaming on, to negate part of the nuclear blast and position itself at the North Pole, then use the energy from the nuclear blast, the sun, and the spin of the planet to forcibly reset the world. If it sounded like it didn't make any sense, then you heard it right. TNO was the only one to survive by cloaking itself in its stand, forcing itself into the next world without changing. The volume ended on TNO alone in the North Pole, but the volume didn't just end. The entire series ended because Araki, the series creator, died of a heart attack 2 hours after he submitted the volume. There are no notes on what came next, nothing to give fans closure. This hypothetical end, the book's final words, the terrible time of passing, all of it wrapped up into a mess of confusion. Usually, Araki had to take notes over what came next, but this time, nothing. People theorized his books had been a metaphor for something, a meaning he hid in the absurdity. However, after 200 years, everyone who still cared about the series had given up on that mystery. The age of heroism had not been kind to Araki's work, which was a shame because of how good it was. This strange roller coaster of pacing, characters, and powers. Midoriya had managed to get all the books, both physical and digital copies, over years of saving and searching. He saved it on flash drives and worked his theories all over the place about this mess of a finale. Was TNO a JoJo, or did the main cast of Part 12 lose because they had no JoJo? It was infamous for not having the word JoJo appear once in its chapters, or it would have been if it weren't infamous for so many other things. Was it a metaphor for something? Probably, but regardless, it seemed the meaning had been lost to time. Only the man himself, Araki, knew what it was about. If only he had the notes over it. If only he could publish so much as the first volume of the 13th part. Araki had said before, 13 was the last part. Whatever the case, it was fun to mull over. It was pointless but gave him something fun to think about. Midoriya turned off his computer and fell into a restless sleep. His whole body ached, but he wasn't sure he could remember a time when it didn't. Midoriya figured he liked JoJo so much because everything eventually turned out alright. People died. People who were loved by the fans died. But in the end, the world was set right almost every time. And Midoriya was pretty sure that these days, he'd be willing to take a bullet so Katsuki could live in a world that was even a single % less sick. He closed his eyes, drifting off into sleep. The only sounds were his breathing and their hearts beating. They beat as one, even unaware and asleep. Soon, though, they would awaken. Midoriya rarely took punches. He was just too small. At 5'0", he was already short for a boy. In his first year of middle school, he was under half the height of the girls, and so most of the time all he got was kicks to the dome. It was only when someone lifted him off the ground to punch him that he got to appreciate how bad they were at it. No style, no form, just hammering. It made him smile, which made them hit him harder, which hurt their hands and made him smile more. "Why are you slapping me in a fight?" He smiled, carefree as ever. The girl scowled and clenched her fist before driving it into him, but the punch being as effective as throwing a brick at someone 1 inch from you. The punches had the weight, the right hardness, but not enough momentum. She was too close to her target to give good punches. It sure did wind him though, literally making him burst into laughter. His smile was a trademark now. He never seemed upset, his hollow eyes staring everyone down. That it. You did so much better last time. Another 2 punches for that one, then she dropped him. The girls walked away as he sat on the floor, smirking and wondering if that fall broke his ass. That part right there hurt the most out of the whole fight, if you could call that a fight. Katsuki came over and tossed him a cold drink. He pressed it into his face, glad for the relief. The food was great. They always ate like kings, since women were so big. Being bigger required more energy, so more food. A perk of being worthless, food was plentiful. We could hit back. Midoriya watched them walk away. His thoughts had been darker and darker by the day. It probably wasn't healthy, but he didn't care anymore. He gave Katsuki a real smile. A jump rope around the ankles, a brick in hand, she'll be crying for mommy. 10 seconds flat or your money back. Katsuki looked like the meaner one between them, but he really wasn't. He always looked angry, but he never did anything about it. No, they'll just come for us harder next time. Midoriya was a real monster though, the kind Katsuki looked like. That constant smile, those eyes, people said it was just a matter of time till he snapped. What only Katsuki knew was that Midoriya snapped a while ago. He was just good at hiding his real thoughts. Even after all their years together, he couldn't tell what was on his mind anymore. If she's conscious long enough to know who did it, we can make it look like an accident. Calculate her height, position the brick, then just pull the jump rope and Midoriya didn't need to finish the sentence. He just smiled. Katsuki wasn't worried when around him. Midoriya never picked a fight with him, but his ideas. If the girls knew what he thought, he'd be shot on sight. They might have made him like this, but his confident smile wasn't confident for nothing. The kid had plans within plans. Midoriya was trying very hard not to cry. His face hurt, and he wanted to hit someone. Why did they never get to do anything back? Why did they just have to take it? It wasn't fair. He looked at the other bedroom. She was in there. He could try talking to her, but she had slowly shut down. They didn't know each other anymore, and he wasn't sure he minded that. They only came together when it required both of them, like picking up the money or signing his papers. He buried himself in comics. Not just JoJo, anything. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Daredevil. Anyone would do. Berserk, Gundam, anything that wasn't real. He hated this world, and so he loved the fake ones. This is how he found his love of villains. Funny Valentine, Venom, the Joker, Lex Luthor, Kingpin. Those who rose to challenge and change their worlds, unsatisfied with their fates. Zion's rebellion, Griffith's hatred. He could feel it all and loved every second. Batman always was a favorite, because of just how few superpowers there were. Just men and women, fighting for their beliefs. Scarecrow harnessing fear. Joker stealing and twisting laughter, and Bane. A combination of intelligence and strength, the dark reflection of the hero. The same calculating mind, the same natural crushing strength, but taken in different directions. One had everything handed to him and rose above. The other had to take what he wanted and learn to power through it. He'd never admit his love of villains, outside of JoJo. Katsuki read it too, and so they could take about that. A boy siding with the villains was a sure way to get thrown off the building. And those beaches wouldn't even get a slap on the wrist for it. He scowled and put his phone away. He even had to pay his own share of the electrical bill these days. Pissed him off. Didn't she have a job? Wasn't she getting paid to take care of him? They didn't even speak these days. He got into bed, snarling for a moment before calming down. Someday, eventually, maybe a heroine like the ones on his phone would come. She'd save him. That's what the heroes in his comics did. The real ones would do it too, wouldn't they? Midoriya was quite the runner now. He could always use his small size to go through the tight fits, but he got good at moving around like those beaches. Thought they were hot sit with their long legs. He could be just as fast, and it didn't take him a century just to realize when someone was running. He led them away, laughing. Climbing had become second nature in this effed-up world where nothing was built for him. The world wasn't made for him. Then he'd break it down until it was his size. He scaled boxes and hopped walls, laughing all the way to give away his location. He used exits that ensure the girls could keep close, but with plenty of places to make sure he could get a lead. His steps echoed in alleys, and his uniform was a mess of patches. Didn't matter to him. He had bigger things on his mind. Those women chased him, beaches that they were. His smile almost broke, but he put it right back. Midoriya judged the distance and decided now was time to disappear. He faded away, looking over those girls chasing him. They ran right past, slowing down. Where'd that freak go? They were out of breath. Should have done some cardio. Who knows? Where are we? Midoriya smiled as the girls became nervous. Shady people were everywhere. The girls started to realize they weren't in the best part of town by a long shot. Let's go. He'll probably get ended like the boy he is. They left, clearly uncomfortable. Some people followed them. Those girls probably wouldn't be going home with their wallets, and that was if fate was kind to them. He watched them leave and headed back a long way, going at a light jog. He needed to be quick, but rushing didn't do anything good. Didn't want to end up on the news as the next victim. If the police even bothered with another dead guy, they dropped like flies. And the quirkless percentage of the world was already down to 2%. He came back to where he led them away from and picked up Katsuki. They definitely hurt his ankle. Hey, I can walk. No, you can't. Midoriya's eyes softened. His only friend had gotten the worst of it this time. Remember, your mom might be nice, hey. Might be less of a piece of shit compared to mine, but we've only got each other. You help me, I help you. You support me, and right now I support you. Don't be a beachagoo. That got a laugh out of him. All right, Mother Faya. That hag will at least take me to a doctor. With hatred and a song in their hearts, they hobbled away. Katsuki might not think much of it, but this was the moment that stopped Midoriya. Stopped his restraint, at least. A base bat to the shin, then a brick to the skull. She'd never seen it coming and had been hit from behind. When she came to, she wouldn't even be able to tell them who hit her. It was such a petty crime they wouldn't investigate it. Investigating meant exploring the landmine of abuse the two boys at the school had gone through, and no one wanted that. Not the teachers who ignored it, not the students who did it, and not the boy who was so black he made the night look blinding. He didn't even need to hide the tools, he gave them away. Midoriya's smile was wide despite the bruises as Katsuki came back in for the next day of school. Hey, what happened? Sue takes a brick to the head day after she breaks my ankle. What? God feeling generous. Katsuki phrased it like a question, but he knew the answer. Yes, I suppose Dio does feel a little generous. Maybe he'll spread out the beat down a little. Midoriya laughed it off, showing a bit of a genuine smile. Don't worry, it was self-defense. Just belated. Katsuki nodded, and Midoriya grabbed his face to make eye contact. Listen up. I'm sick of getting pushed around, aren't you? Come on, admit it. He didn't phrase it like it was anything big, but he gave a girl a concussion. It wasn't quite sure when he first did it if she'd be alright, but Midoriya didn't give a F anymore. Beach had it coming. Alright, so she did. We start throwing hands with every beach that crosses us. Midoriya's smile became genuine again. See, you do get it. He patted him on the shoulder. Anyone who FS with me FS with you. And anyone who FS with you will pray to Dio they didn't. Katsuki nodded, adjusting his leg. Had to wear a brace. Well, he was supposed to. They didn't give him one, and he had to make it himself. Midoriya pushed him when he was at his weakest. And Katsuki gave in. I think I could do that. Yeah, Midoriya nodded along, smiling. Besides, it's just self-defense. They had kicked Katsuki in the ankle after he was injured. What were they trying to do? Make him a cripple? Who was to say? Who washed and waxed the flooring in front of the stairs? But only for 3 inches. They slipped, especially with a little motivation from off-camera. Didn't want to show the director in the movie he was making. Nothing lethal, but they weren't alright. It gave him a little smile as he walked in from stage right. Then called for the teacher. Someone had thrown Midoriya out of his chair. That girl got off easy when she tried to stomp on Katsuki and only got flipped face first into a desk. Katsuki had his signature smile, the serial ender one, on when he jumped on her and showed her what a real punch was. At first, the class just watched. Then she started to spit blood. And someone tried to pull him off. They both got a suspension, but Katsuki smiled happily. He had taken Midoriya's drug, and he wasn't sure he minded being addicted. Halfway through the year, and they stopped filing suspensions anymore, and they'd have to investigate his behavior. And that would bring up all the neglect and abuse he went through. And once again, nobody wanted that. Katsuki fought tons. Anytime someone thought they could F with him or Midoriya, they got a beating. Didn't matter how many there were. He'd drag himself up off the floor over and over until they stopped moving. Mercy wasn't something he gave a shit about when all it did was getting him to get a free surprise attack to the back. Midoriya fought rarely. Anytime someone actually managed to beat Katsuki, they wished they didn't when they got to meet the smaller boy in the hallway. He was all smiles as he played with his food. He'd let them chase him sometimes and would let others do the fighting, letting them beat the shit out of each other for him. Windows broke, mystery messages appeared in houses, and things went missing to be turned up in places thought safe. He didn't have to get physical to beat his opponents. Anyone strong enough to beat Katsuki wasn't smart enough to beat Midoriya. The demon and the devil. They couldn't prove Midoriya did it, because that'd require authorities looking into him, and once again, nobody wanted that. Midoriya fed off it. While he didn't run the school going into their second year, nobody in their grade would still F with them. They still got sit, but nobody tried to fight them. Katsuki was fine with that, but Midoriya wasn't settling. Come on, if we don't settle this, all the new first years will F with us, and soon everyone else will follow. Midoriya sat with his legs in the small stream, staring at the sky. I know, but this is clearly a chance to beat us up. Katsuki waved an invitation, or more accurately a call out. They wanted them to go for a meeting. And after a little detective work from ace burglar Izuku Midoriya, it turned out it was going to be a whole bunch of people who wanted them to eat shit. But if we shy away now, it will undo all the work we've done so far. They both knew they were right, but didn't want to admit it. Look, let's start some shit with the girls on the list. They were told not to F with us, but no way they'll do it if we present ourselves. I'll take a few out in advance. You take a few out in advance. I'll go with you in person to deal with the rest. ... It's 20 girls in 2 days. The F are we going to do? Katsuki was the more violent of the two, funnily enough, but he knew when he didn't think he could win. It was why he didn't want to fight for so long. They both pretended to be tough badasses, but they were 13 for God's sake. What were they going to do? They want to play dirty. Midoriya pretended to think about it, then nodded. All right, then we'll play filthy. Midoriya tried to sell himself as enjoying what he did. But you could call him Kira since all he really wanted was a quiet life. He'd beat them to win the fight, then break them to win the war. He wouldn't have done it if it wasn't so effective. Katsuki had to deal with the same people over and over. Midoriya never had a repeat customer, or at least, not a willing one. Now they stood in the midst of 40 women, and Midoriya was glad that they managed to shave 4 off the list. Though, who let some boys into our meeting? There were third and first years here, and they looked excited. The duo avoided people as much as possible, so this might be the only chance they had in a while to beat them up. Not a clue sis, who wants the first piece. However, there was a second reason Midoriya kept doing this. Katsuki clearly needed him too. These girls and Katsuki might all be good at fighting, but who other than him noticed that the door they just walked through was still open and unguarded? Midoriya nudged Katsuki to stay in place while he surveyed the room. Some girls were angry at them. They or their relatives had gotten beaten up by the fighting couple. Some were just excited for a fight and had no connection other than they went to the same school. Lastly, some had no interest at all. He liked those kinds of girls best. They didn't bother him if he didn't bother them. Those kinds of girls are the type of people from who he ripped his personal philosophy. I think we'd all love to. Girls started getting up, but before they could finish, Midoriya bolted, dragging Katsuki behind him out of the school. Hey, Izuku could fly when he wanted. He wasn't as strong as Bakugo, but he was hella fast. He slid down the stairs by the hand railing and forced Bakugo to stay at his pace. Izuku hit the ground running, and Bakugo followed as best he could. It was harder than he'd admit, but Izuku slowed down and hid with him in an alleyway. There was a camera there, and they were banking on it. 12 girls ran straight past them. It was obvious the people on the street sold them out. Then the slow people came along near the end, the people Izuku was fishing for. Bakugo made it obvious where he was in view of the camera and made himself look tired. He was the bait, and Katsuki Bakugo was no. A little pain was worth a victory. Aye, we found one. Where's your buddy? There were 3 of them. It'd be hard to reach their ugly mugs, but Izuku would pull it off. Tell us where he is, you effing freak, and we might make this quick. She used her quirk, stretching out her fingers and grabbing him by the head, then lifting him off the ground. This could count as a case of assault, and it was now in his legal right to beat the shit out of her. She also made a threat against Izuku, so he could beat her up too. Izuku took off straight into her leg, shoulder-checking her leg while Bakugo suddenly lurched his entire body, sending her tipping over. Her eyes widened, and the other girls began to move. She dropped Bakugo to try and catch herself but found out why Izuku loved this alley so much. Hand met shattered glass, and she screamed. But that was only the beginning. 2 girls approaching fast, and they weren't that far away to start. Izuku slam-dunked her head into the ground, smirking confidently. She tried pushing him off, but he pulled her backward relative to himself, what would have been straight up for her, by her hair, dragging her through the glass. The girls both went for Izuku. He was the one who was causing all the trouble, so why not? Neither noticed Katsuki grab a brick, then slam it into the lead girl's shin. She collapsed into their glass wonderland too, leaving the last one to almost trip over her body. Izuku gave the first girl a few more kicks to the head, smiling when he heard her nose break. You still want to fight? We're in a great mood, so why don't you run along? We'll forgive you for trying to ambush us. Even he was scared of Izuku sometimes. Right now, when he was in his element and smiling like a pleasant dream, was one of them. The girl shrieked a little, stepping back, then ran the other way. That was easier than I thought. Katsuki was right. This really had been easy. Fantastic. Let's enjoy the saved energy and beat it. They showed up, beat 3 of the 40 girls, 7 if you counted the people they beat up early. Anyone saying that they didn't try to socialize was a lying beach. The reason he wanted to run was all the screaming. Even the dumbest beach of the pack could figure out where they were just by listening to the girls screaming so much. So it was time to make tracks. Midoriya and Katsuki left the alley straight into 6 more girls, wearing the same school uniform. Looks like we found you. We were starting to get worried. Why don't we head back to class? They were at least smart enough not to beat them up in broad daylight on a public street. The cops might be useless, but they could get sued if they didn't do their jobs. Japan had to pretend it wasn't rotten, after all. Katsuki was smart enough to start running on his own this time. They made tracks, using the crowd as an obstacle course. They could duck between people easily and had to almost every day. The people on the street became restraints, slowing the bigger people down while the smaller people slipped away. They ran and ran, stopping under a train crossing. Since it required so much work, the underpass hadn't been updated for the new height. It served as a gateway when the trains ran, impossible for anyone to cross easily other than men. How many miles do you think we've run today? Midoriya opted for a joke, smiling. Katsuki leaned against the wall, sitting down and breathing hard. He was doing so good, even if he didn't know it. Who knows? Damn beaches. Think outnumbering us will stop us. Midoriya laughed, leaning against the wall but stayed standing. They both watched the sky. You know, when we leave, where you want to go? I'm thinking Canada. Lot of guys in Canada. And show off how bad my English is. Pass. Katsuki was at least catching his breath. Midoriya nodded. A cabin would be nice, away from society. We could work online jobs and only need to see people once a month. You'll stick with me, right, Izuku? Till the end of the line. Katsuki looked at him, focusing in on him. That was a movie quote he usually used. How dare Katsuki use his own spells against him? Till the end of the line, Katsuki. Midoriya laughed, but Katsuki's head dropped as he thought it over. A hero. Midoriya blinked. A what? Speak up, dude. Midoriya strained his ears for Katsuki's response. I want to be a hero. Not some sit-rescue hero in the mountains either. Whoa. Why was he looking so passionate? What got into him? You showed me that we can stand up for ourselves, but I think we can go further. You and I can be the greatest heroes in the world. What? We can inspire men around the world. Show these beaches what we're really capable of. Katsuki stood up, clenching a fist dramatically. We don't just defend ourselves, that we can fight as good as the rest of them. But they couldn't. The only reason they ever won was the girls they fought were stupid as F. You said you'd follow me. You remember what we did in school today? Midoriya did not. He wasn't paying attention. This was supposed to be his last year in civilization. After this, it was online classes all the way. In 2 years he and Katsuki would move out. They had this sit plan since 3rd grade. And now their plan was going up in smoke. We got our future plans. No, don't say it. Don't even think about it. We can sign up to go to UA. Midoriya rubbed his face. UA, the top hero school in the world. People came from every country around the world for a chance of going there. Sure, they opened their doors to men, but that was just for the press. There had been 2 men to graduate from UA, ever, and they were in the general course. The entrance exam alone might end us, you know. No one would even bat an eye at it. And we'd probably be separated. He might have done a little research when he was younger and much, much more naive. We couldn't help each other. And people would be delighted to see us die. UA wouldn't even have a press conference if both of us died in the exam. Realism had broken the dreams of his childhood. Where he once waited for someone to save him, he now realized the truth. The world wanted him dead. No one gave a shit about them. And they'd fight tooth and nail to keep living. That included not making terrible decisions, like going to a murder ground. How do you know if we never give it a chance? Said the guy who didn't even want to fight back against the girls in their class. We can bring stuff, so we learn some martial arts, bring some weapons, and at least give it a shot. 12 men have taken the UA exam. One was just to prove it was physically possible. And that was obviously bullshit. They rigged it so he could. Everyone else, dead or maimed. He finished rubbing his eyes. We could try, but, bang, both boys looked over from their minor debate at the flying sewer cap. And the strange sentient wave of slime that surged upward. 2 eyes opened from within the sludge. Hello, boys. The boys watched the slime continue to rise out of the sewers, but they were used to lethal threats. They were supposed to be anyway. Get a move on. Midoriya stepped between it and Katsuki, pushing him for a few steps before he also started running. He shoved Katsuki forward, edging him on without a glance backward. Something grabbed onto his backpack, but he let it slip clean off. His homework wasn't worth getting eaten by a sentient puddle of piss. The 2 boys took off, barely a glance back between the 2 of them. Midoriya constantly hurried them on, urging Katsuki to go a little further. They ran for minutes, putting the better part of a mile between themselves and the slime thing before Katsuki gave in. Sit. Think we lost it. Katsuki had his hands on his knees and was breathing heavily. They had just finished running but had to do it all over again. Why wouldn't we? Midoriya was barely phased. One beach trying to end him was the same as the rest. All he had to do was be fast enough to outrun his problems. And suddenly they weren't his problems anymore. We barely looked at it. I still don't know what it is. I also really don't care. Sit, try, not to get too in. Give me a sec. Bakugo straightened out, breathing deeply for a minute. Try not to get too energetic there. I don't remember where I was going with this. Midoriya patted him on back, laughing it off. It probably wasn't healthy to think about all the times they nearly died in one day. This wasn't the most times they nearly died in one day. And that was probably sad. He didn't get it anymore, but oh well. We could go to your house. After that, hell no. He stretched his legs, groaning. How do you do this so much? The adrenaline rush helped in the beginning. Now the boredom helps me practice. Midoriya checked the street, hoping to possibly hit a bar or something for drinks. You feeling anything? Nah, we should call the heroes about what we saw. Midoriya could feel himself mentally checking out but forced himself to smile and nod. Sure thing, they wouldn't do set. The villainous would be long gone. And they didn't care. What were we talking about again? The biggest mistake of your life. If you don't remember, couldn't have been important. He laughed it off, pushing Katsuki away from his thoughts. He loved the guy, but some bad ideas shouldn't be given the time of day. He walked away, pushing the boy along with him. Come on, let's go at least get some kicks in tonight. Yeah, let's. Katsuki smiled, walking away. No one reported any arrests of the villain, but some whackjobs thought All Might was chasing her. What would the #1 heroine be doing in a shithole like this? Midoriya didn't want to admit that he still checked the hero news as he sat beside Katsuki, who was just nursing his bottle of Coke. What was the point of buying beer if you don't drink it? F you. It's the principle, damn it. Katsuki started chugging like it mattered, leaving the frazzled boy chuckling. They sat on the edge of a beach covered in trash, admiring the god-awful view. Do you think we might have died today? Katsuki asked, leaning on the bottle as large as his arm. Midoriya blinked a couple of times, then laughed it off. Why specify today? Midoriya leaned against the 6-pack of beers neither of them wanted to touch. The fact we haven't keeled over is a miracle. Do you know only one guy was born in Japan last year? Rest got aborted. Sit, try not to be too positive. Katsuki lightly punched him in the shoulder, the two sharing a brief smile before facing the sunset. We're F-ed, aren't we? Society, he seemed to think, but they both knew the real answer. Probably. With birth rates like that, unless humanity figures out that whole cloning thing, we're all F-ed. But for me and you. He smiled like he knew something. He seemed to radiate an air that he knew what was going on. Always a step ahead. Does it really matter? We won't be around to see everything go tits up. You're not answering the question, Mother Furia. Midoriya could dance all he wanted. Katsuki had focus if nothing else. You think we got any chance? Midoriya could lie, but he respected Katsuki a little too much. He thought it over, picking his answer, when something slithered from the sewer access. Finally, free of that beach, Midoriya covered Katsuki's mouth, but both could see something slither from the sewers. It was large and slightly transparent, but entirely green, save for yellow eyes and tombstone-like teeth. Thought she'd never leave. Katsuki. Midoriya grabbed the six-pack. Probably weighed 30 pounds. We're leaving. Right now. Neither argued, until the rush of slime caught up with them. What? Didn't think I'd notice. Hey, I recognize you too. A beer clocked it in the eye. I said we're leaving. Don't stop running, idiot. The two boys took off, taking turns pelting objects at the thing behind them. Bakugo followed Izuku, who ran ahead even carrying the beers. He'd stop periodically to lob another can, but kept telling Bakugo to run. He'd catch up every time, smiling like it was nothing. He could see how tired his friend was, but they kept on moving. Now, however, they could hear something coming towards them. Izuku never even took a glance at it, and Bakugo followed suit. Izuku put on his bravest face, trying to smile but not quite managing to fake it. Not to Bakugo. There was no one around. Of course, there wasn't. This was Takoba Seaside Bay. They came here because no one ever came. It was gaining on them, but Izuku kept pushing them on. Now he could see the flicker in his best friend's eyes, weighing it up. He was wondering something, and whatever it wasn't good. All right, Katsuki, you keep going while I slow it. You sentient sit pile. Bakugo grabbed his mostly empty soda bottle, shattering it and turning. He stopped, letting Midoriya run ahead. He'd slow the FR down. Then Izuku could get to safety. Effing die. He might not make it out of this. So what? It was no beach. He ran forward like he intended to wrestle, lobbing the glass into its eye. The bottle spun true, stabbing it in the left eye. Its charge fell apart and became more like a sloshing wave. Bakugo felt a strange heat, like a bomb was trying to blow out of his chest with every heartbeat, as the beach nearly crashed into him. But as he was about to be crushed, something got an ironclad grip on his shoulder. I said, "Don't stop running." Izuku pulled him along, the two running further away from the screaming thing in the middle of the abandoned streets. He thought as he moved further away, his heart would calm down, but he could still feel the heat. Midoriya dragged Katsuki along, swearing with every breath out, "Your hag would effing end me." The F were you thinking? Hey, I'm fine. They were fine this time, but it was looking worse every step. Now they were witnesses, and that thing was looking pissed. Was there anything he could use to beat it? Midoriya was running out of breath now, and Katsuki couldn't be much better. They weren't even within 3 minutes of a police station yet, and nobody patrolled around here. They just had to keep running. Midoriya could see Katsuki starting to slow down. Nobody could run forever, after all, and they'd done quite a bit of running already. It felt like he had two hearts hammering in his chest, with how hard his heartbeat was. He looked at Katsuki. He had his usual toothy grin, but they knew this might be it. A weird thought. For all the shit they put up with, someone they only met twice might be what did them in. He could hear the thing behind them, screaming and moving closer. Would the heroines notice in time? Would the police? Could he rely on someone else? No, such thoughts were stupid. You didn't wait for someone else to do important shit, you did it. Midoriya and Katsuki turned a corner, but Midoriya stooped down to pick up a rock, turning and stopping. If he gouged out the other eye, it couldn't see anymore. Hopefully, it couldn't hear well, and then it wouldn't be able to track Katsuki. All he had to do was smash the last eye, and at least Katsuki would be safe. Oh, that's what you're going to use. Katsuki and Midoriya exchanged glances. Katsuki held a piece of pipe with a sharp end, a little longer than Midoriya's rock. Don't suppose I can tell you to run. Nope. What do you think I am? Some beach. To the end of the line is 2 ways. Midoriya nodded, then gave his best smile. Still was worth much, but he tried. Well, this should be fun at least. The sludge monster rounded the corner, right into the 2 boys. They stepped forward, screaming as they moved. The rage in Katsuki, his desperation, and his desire to win finally formed at this moment where all 3 were finally united for a single reason. The fire inside him opened its eyes, reborn. The shattered patience, the crushed dreams, and the hatred within Midoriya stirred within his murderous fury, given a form. It didn't have eyes, but for what it was about to do, it didn't need them. Midoriya threw the rock as hard as he could. Katsuki jabbed with the spiked metal, but the eye had learned. It retreated into its own slime, safe, and instead of grabbing the boys as it intended, something grabbed its eye. The pressure was intense, and she could faintly hear 2 things whisper. She could feel 2 arms inside of her, each grabbing her eye from one side, but she couldn't see what was holding her eye. Die. She could only hear the words as a reverberation through the slime, and not in the air. It didn't matter. The pressure became more intense, until with a splat, her eye was crushed. Midoriya and Bakugo both stood there, a few feet from the writhing puddle of slime as it screamed, flailing blindly to try and crush everything near it. They should have backed away, now that the villainess's ease were both gone, but instead, they were stuck staring. Not at the puddle of piss that nearly ended both of them, though. They stared above it, at two disembodied arms that floated mid-air, one a muscular metallic arm, completely devoid of detail, and the other a mix between a grenade and an arm, smoke gently trailing off as it hovered mid-air. Those arms just crushed the villainess's eye but were now floating in the air. They took a step back, and the arms moved back with them. With another step, they moved again, two boys and two disembodied arms that seemed to follow them. Their first reaction was to scream, followed a split second later by their trained instinct to run, booking it down the street as something even weirder than a slime monster chased them. You could explain a slime monster with a quirk, but disembodied flying arms crushing eyes and following kids around, that was just as effed up, if not. The two boys ran to the police station, telling the cops their story in exasperated and exhausted tones, pointing and shouting, but no one took them seriously. They left out the part where they tried to gouge out the monster's eyes with a pipe and a rock because no way would these guys let that shit fly. But otherwise, they were as honest as politicians. In the end, their case was set to be investigated in due time, while they sat bewildered, side by side on the police station's curb. Hey, the F happened. Bakugo stared blankly forward, beside a blinking Midoriya, neither really understanding what just happened. Not a clue. Was it a heroine that helped them, that crushed the monster's eye? Where was she? Why were her arms mismatched? Why were the arms so short? Why was she flying? Why could they only see her arms? Why did all their questions turn into more questions? Bakugo's mom came by to pick him up and made sure he was fine. Midoriya was brave enough to admit he was a little jealous. Are you going to be fine too, Midoriya? Mitsuki Bakugo looked him over. They both were dirty and tired, but she was at least looking out for both of them. He had to hand it to her. She might seem crass, but she was a good person at least. Yeah, don't worry, ma'am. She nodded, but she clearly didn't believe him. They made their separate ways, Bakugo and his mom arguing about his manners even though they had the same level of manners between the two of them. They wore their similarities on their sleeve. They could have been twins with how similar they were. Midoriya sighed and stretched in front of the police station, watching them walk away as a blonde skeletal person ran past him, talking quickly to the woman at the desk. The slime villain was taken down, right? Who did it? Well, the police mostly. It seems to have outrun All Might, but she did at least smash its eyes so it couldn't get far. Scared some boys, but practically no harm done. Midoriya could feel his anger building. All Might didn't do shit. That villain was fine and dandy when it found them, and she didn't even injure the thing. She did. Oh, thank you for the information, miss. Are the boys still here? Midoriya strained his ears, then started wondering how he could hear this. There was a wall in the way, after all. Just left. You can catch them, a blonde one and a green one. Weren't they supposed to have a little confidentiality? Jesus, what the F? Midoriya was seething with rage and no end to it. He wanted to hit something, to scream, to have something to pour the rising anger into, but he wasn't getting the chance. As his jaw clenched, a ghastly arm reformed, gripping the wall and slowly powderizing the bricks in its hand, crushing the wall as it shook. The woman exited the police station, shaking her head before noticing Midoriya. She took in his image, then faced him head-on. She sounded vaguely familiar, like he heard her once or twice before. Were you in the sludge villain incident? Sunken blue eyes, blonde hair. She was tall, even for a girl, but unhealthily skinny. He didn't have a clue who she was. She bowed at the hip toward him. I'm sorry what you had to go through. If All Might caught the villain earlier, you wouldn't have had to deal with any of this. The way this tall skeleton of a woman was talking about All Might, she sounded like she was in charge, other number one heroine. That probably made this skeleton All Might's manager. Her words sounded nice, but that was what hero managers were supposed to do. She was just following protocol, and what's worse, she was right. There was no reason that sentient booger shouldn't have been crushed by All Might. I heard its eyes were smashed. Do you know how? Nope. He turned and started walking away. It would have ended me if it didn't, though, so I'm grateful however it happened. You're All Might's manager, right? Tell her thanks for smashing the eyes. Midoriya put on a bit of a cheery attitude as he spoke, but he really wasn't feeling it after nearly dying so many times in one day. Maybe he could find something to hit on his way home, but walking was weird. His head swam, the world seeming to split into two for a moment before returning to normal. TT was like he could see everything twice. The double vision threw him off, making him stumble as he tried to walk away. Are you alright? You can apply for aid if you've been inconvenienced by a villain attack and try to imply All Might F'd up. No way that would slide. Didn't this moron of a manager know who All Might was? You could only get aid if a hero F'd up in some way. And even if All Might ended an entire city, no one would blame her. She was the #1 hero in Japan, top of her charts after all, the most popular and successful hero they'd ever seen. No way in hell could a guy get aid claiming that she F'd up. I'm fine, Midoriya spat it out, forcing himself to straighten out as he leaned against the wall for a moment. She didn't seem to see the ghastly arm that formed, striking against the wall, but she did hear the impact. Goodbye. He pushed off the wall, rubbing his head as he walked off. He didn't notice how anyone who got too close to him was struck by a phantom fist that no one seemed to be able to see. When he closed his eyes, he could still see. It was confusing at first, then annoying and disorientating when he started testing it on his way home. Waving his hand in front of his face and seeing it move, seeing people around him in the dimming light, it was surreal. He rubbed his eyes, keeping his real ones closed, but still seeing the world through. This double vision was strange and so incredibly random. How'd he get it? When did he get it? How did it work? Was this a quirk? Was this his quirk? Was he the first man in the world to have a quirk? He was vaguely aware of his surroundings at all times now. It was more clear than his own eyes. Did he hit his head? Was this a hallucination? Was his body actually drowning in that sludge? And these were his last thoughts before he died. His headache was getting better, but it was still a headache. People shoved him around, and he just wanted to snap at something. Anything would be fine now. The hand rubbing his face drifted away, clenching into a fist. But then a second, slightly larger fist materialized on his right side. It was the arm from earlier. Well, this was the right arm. The last time had been the left arm. It looked metallic, shining in the street lights. It was a bright gray and riddled with muscles, making it not just longer but bigger than his in every way. An arm was attached to the fist, branching off from him. He looked at it and slowly made the fingers move. It was a weird feeling, watching the phantom's fingers move. He had to move his right hand too at first, but slowly separated them by holding his right hand with his left, keeping those fingers in place and testing the new parts of his body. It was strangely easy to learn. Shouldn't you get a move on, you effing runt? God, a boy staring at the ground. Think he realized how useless he effing is? Staring at the ground. He was staring at a third arm, for God's sake. That was pretty weird since boys couldn't have quirks. Unless this wasn't a quirk. He began to wave the third arm around, checking to see if anyone noticed or reacted in any way to some guy having 3 arms. No one batted an eye. The arm reached out as he walked, touching a few people as they went. Those people looked around, seeming to see that something touched them, but they looked straight past the floating arm waving at them. It didn't look like anyone could see it. He'd need to check, to test his theory. He'd need to run it past one person. The only other person who might have the same thing happening to them. The other person who was with him when weird things started happening. He walked home faster, jogging lightly. He needed to test some things, as quickly as possible. Neither Katsuki or Midoriya had a phone. They stopped making any big enough for men forever ago, so whenever Katsuki needed one he'd borrow his mom's. Whenever Midoriya needed one, he gritted his teeth and pressed on regardless. He could send emails, though. Midoriya had his own computer, and Katsuki used a smartwatch as a phone. He emailed Katsuki now, as he grabbed some cereal and milk with his ghost's hand. Hey, are you still seeing that disembodied arm? Mother Furia. Ichigo, nope, why something happened? What's up? Close your eyes, and try to look around your room, Mother Furia. Ichigo, holy said I can see still. You're doing this too. Hold your hands up and clench them. All your hands. See how many hands you have. Mother Furia. Ichigo, I have 4 hands. The disembodied hands are back. I think I did that thing to that beach. Yeah, you and me both. I'll need to see you tomorrow to confirm something. Can I hang out? Mother Furia. Ichigo, prob. Hag says I'm not going to school. She'll prob let you though. Midoriya got off his computer and then stood up. He had his computer set up on the floor since tables weren't made for him these days. But if what he thought was happening was right, who effing cared? Midoriya tried to think of a name, then burst out laughing. Was that his stand's name? Stands were named usually by the user and named to be appropriate to the stand's appearance, their abilities, or the stand user. The name he thought of made no sense. Could it really be the sound he heard when his stand attacked? It could all make sense. He had his stand hit the ground. Pep. He still couldn't see the body as he said the first letter. Both hands were metallic, but the left was a deep blue rather than gray. He had a feeling he already knew what the stand looked like before he summoned it in front of himself. Oh God, do I have to shout it out? He laughed. His mom would think he was crazy, but he and she no longer had anything to do with each other. He laughed harder, then slammed his foot down as he took a confident pose. Come on, Pepsimin. It stood a little over 6 feet tall. Most of its body was blue, with its right arm and head being gray. A chain made of soda tabs wrapped around its neck like a necklace. The signature logo was emblazoned on its chest. There were no facial details, but it stood with the strangest confidence, like this idiotic ability owned the world. This thing was Izuku Midoriya's stand. This thing was Pepsimin. Midoriya didn't get excused from school, but he didn't want to be. He wanted to experiment more, test the boundaries. Limits were meant to be pushed, rules to be broken. He got a welcoming beating, without his friend there to serve as backup. They weren't afraid of just one of the effing disgusting boys and enjoyed taking some stress out on him. He sat in the back of the class, smiling as Pepsimin floated around. He'd done some observations on his own and deduced a few things. No one could see his stand. In JJBA, only stand users could see stands, with the exceptions being specific stands that broke this rule, not people who could break this rule. No one here, though, seemed to be able to see his. He deduced that when he started nicking wallets to pay back for the beers he didn't get to drink yesterday. Never a lot, just a couple of yen here or there. Pepsimin could move a little under 3 meters from him in any direction, from a central spot in his body, probably his heart. If Pepsimin only had to be within 3 meters of his body, for example, Midoriya could extend his arm, and his stand could extend 3 meters from that. However, that didn't change the range, so it seemed to be based on a fixed point on or in his body. He smiled as he dropped more stolen coins into his bag. He didn't have a clue how he got it, but he was enjoying every second of Pepsimin, even if he did look dumb as F. Wasn't quite sure how Pepsimin was a stand. Most stands were based on a song, but his stand was just Pepsimin from the Pepsi commercial. The same appearance, and his stand cry could be Pep. A pretty dead giveaway. It was just stupid. He kept his eyes closed like he was taking a nap, reforming Pepsimin. Even without eyes, his vision was sharper than normal. He floated over his real body, looking around the room to see who was looking before punching a girl in the back of the head. Oh, her head snapped out and she looked around, but there was no one but the flying Pepsimin there. She looked straight through him, though, searching the room for what did it, then slowly got back to her work while rubbing the back of her head. He had to try smothering his smile in his arms as he made chaos in the classroom, enjoying the power of Pepsimin. Was this compensation for all the city put up with until now? He kinda liked it. Most stands had a signature ability they could do. Ender Queen's bombs, D4C's dimension hopping, the world's time stop, every single one had some trick to them. Problem was figuring it out. Midoriya was satisfied with what he had for now though, especially when doing the math. Stands were invisible to most people, were indestructible to anything that's not a stand, and overall, total bullshit. Just the flying punchy ghost being invisible would have made it a great quirk. The additional superpower made it god tier, and the indestructibility was over-end. Midoriya practiced with it, keeping his eyes open now while using it. He needed to take drugs to deal with nausea from the double vision, but Pepsimin helped him steal some from the nurse's office. Now, he honed his talent by sitting in the nurse's office with his back to a wall, eyes open, but using Pepsimin on the other side of the wall. Everyone that passed got messed with as he tested Pepsimin's speed. Poor range, but good speed. Not as amazing as what was described in Part 10 as a tier, but above D tier. Maybe it could get faster with practice. The accuracy was great, even if the speed wasn't. The enhanced vision helped him hone in on targets and drive into them. He needed another stand or something that could hurt stands to test the final stat, durability. No way to know Pepsimin's potential, after all. He could feel through Pepsimin, like the sensation of hitting someone in the stomach and leaving her wheezing on the ground. He floated above his victims, wondering how many people had seen him like this. Pepsimin floated 16 feet in the air, his limit, watching the people to find some new way to test his powers. Throw something, lift someone off the ground, stand in the way of a quirk to see what they did to stands. Midoriya couldn't help but smile. With his new powers, he could take what he wanted, do what he wanted, and finally be free of this shithole. With our new powers, we can be heroes now. Midoriya stared blankly at Katsuki like he was from Mars. You want to use our powers to help people, like the people we've been around our entire lives. What dimension did Katsuki fall from? It was a bad idea last time they talked about it, and one day wasn't going to make it any better. Even their new powers didn't make it any better. Yeah, see, I knew you'd get it. Oh, he got it all right. Problem was the two looked at the same information and came to opposite conclusions. We could already fight, but with this, we can take on anybody. We don't have to worry anymore. Yeah, they could take on anyone. So if they decided to become criminals, the F would heroes do. Invisible bank robbers, indestructible serial enders. The villains would pay top dollar for their help, and if Katsuki had a long-range stand, he wouldn't even need to ever show up in person. They could get back at the world that wronged them and get rich in one blow. Maybe if they were good enough, Midoriya could see the end of humanity. You said we'd die in the entrance exam, but with these powers, we'll be fine. Midoriya wished he had something to relax with. He'd rather deal with this sit-face than sober. This optimism was ending him. Now, you and me go take the entrance exam. Come on out on top, graduate from UA, and go on to be the top heroes. King Explosion Murder and, what do you want your hero name to be? Whoa, they're speedy, let's just slow down for a second. Midoriya held his hands up to calm him down. We don't even know anything about these powers yet, let alone how we got them. Are we sure they're stable? Midoriya ignored that he was pretty sure he knew almost everything about the powers, even if he didn't know how his worked. That didn't help his argument. We need to test things first. Take this slowly, Katsuki. Not rush it, you get me. Alright, I'll tell you what I know about my thing. He laughed and stood up. By his attitude, his stand didn't have either an embarrassing name or appearance. M&M. It was the same size as Katsuki, with his muscles underneath the layers. It wore boots up to its calves, then baggy green pants. Grenades decorated its belt, then a black undershirt. There was a red X of molten something across its chest and nothing on its shoulders. Each arm ended in a large grenade-like gauntlet, then hands made of fire. Topping the mess off was its head, a fire with dark spots to show its eyes and mouth. Die, die, die. It laughed, clawing at the air like it wanted to rip someone apart. It at least spoke like Katsuki. Katsuki leaned forward, smiling. And watch this. He pulled a hair off his head, then tossed it up. M&M seemed to have less precision, moving more clunkily than Pepsiment, but managed to grab the hair and boom. Midoriya snapped back away from the explosion. Katsuki laughed, pointing. That ability's called kamikaze. Cool, huh? Still think we don't got the stuff to be heroes. It seemed Katsuki didn't know that what they had were probably stands, and could totally be the best superpower in the history of ever. If you really wanted to be a hero, All Might be a little better actually, but hey, play in your own league. How do you know to do that? Did you just try grabbing things until it happened? Seriously, exploding hair was weird. Guess it really was a stand. Try it with one of mine. Midoriya placed a strand of his own hair on the floor, then stepped back. Katsuki looked confident as he grabbed the hair with M&M. He held it up. And, yeah, nothing was happening. So you can't make people's heads explode. Darn, just your own. Guess it wouldn't be a kamikaze if you didn't end yourself to use it. It was a bit funny, imagining this invisible ghost running around making heads explode. That'd be an ultimate assassin, since the only way to beat it was to be bald. And what woman would be caught dead with that haircut willingly? He had to suppress his laughter though. Does it work with any other part of you or just hair? Huh, Katsuki wasn't dumb. But Midoriya made it his business to tear everyone he met apart until he understood them. That included quirks, and some quirks were as weird as stands. Kamikaze might affect more than just hair. Like, you got scissors, cut a fingernail, and see if you can blow that up. He was a little interested in how Katsuki's kamikaze worked. Maybe a lot interested. But he was more interested in derailing all this hero talk. Seriously, why would anyone sane want to help those FRs? I didn't try that yet. Check over there. Katsuki took the bait, and they searched for scissors or nail clippers. Midoriya and him scanned the room until they finally found some safety scissors, then sat back and watched the magic. Alright, M&M, kamikaze. The flaming hand picked up the fingernail, then, boom, another blast. M&M's hands and face were on fire, and when the fire covered the item, it exploded. Was the fire the secret to activating it? Like how Ender Queen needed to do a button-clicking motion to detonate his bombs. KATSUKI. The F are you doing in there? Playing games, hag. What? Keep it down. Sounds like you're gonna blow this apartment up. He got a chuckle out of that, then thought to ask, that's pretty cool. You showed your mom yet? The hag. Before you. F no. Katsuki didn't even let the thought stay for a moment before punting it to the curb. What's yours due? You messaged me how to find mine. And right after that, I found out all this stuff. Sit. After that he had gone to sleep, waking up early for more tests. Had he slept through his tutorial? Oh, mine. Pesm. What? Speak up, dude. Pepsnum. What? Dude, just say it. Pepsiment. He formed in the air, showing off his sculpted body, and looking as stupid as the last time Midoriya saw him. Katsuki managed to restrain himself for 3 seconds before erupting into laughter, pointing. The F is that. Huh. Iwahaha. Katsuki nearly fell over from how hard he laughed. Effing Pepsiment. Yeah. And he can't do anything that interesting. Just usual, stand stuff. That caught Katsuki off. He wasn't as avid of a fan, but he had still watched it all, even if only because Midoriya forced him to. Like, JoJo. Midoriya nodded. There was no point in denying it. Might as well help move it along. No one seems able to see Pepsiment but you. I messed around all of school with him, but no matter what I did, no one noticed him. He did a brief catch-up on his tests, like maximum distance, top speeds, and how hard it could hit. You should test these things yourself, so you can find out what your stand's limits are. So JoJo's real. Holy shit indeed. It seemed they still shared some thoughts. This raised a lot of questions that he'd need to answer, but not right now. Yeah, rest up, and tomorrow you might be able to go outside. Then we can find out what these things are really capable of. Pepsiment disappeared, and Midoriya stood. I'll be seeing you at school, but keep adjusting. It's a little confusing at first. Yeah, see you soon, Mother Furia. Later, Bichigo. He did have tons of questions. Millions. But Katsuki hit the central one. JoJo was real. This meant that JoJo wasn't just some story. It was a history that the world forgot and that he had to engrave into his memory. Tales of people long gone, of worlds that no one could ever see again. All the things he just thought were just entertainment could help him now and create the complete picture. Midoriya sat in his room, thinking back over his newest greatest mystery. All Might's quirk, anti-quirk drugs, irrelevant to him. Now, only part 13 mattered. It could be deduced that Araki was someone who survived the last world when the egg reset it, which is why he was the one writing all the stories. When someone reset the world in JoJo, the people who weren't alive were changed, but anyone alive would be the same, usually with their memories intact of the last world. Thing was, most people didn't know when a world was reset. It just happened and could be happening at that very moment. However, memories couldn't have carried over this time. Otherwise, everyone would remember stands, so it could be reasoned that, if Araki was immune to the effects of the world resetting, he still had his stand, or remembered his stand. JoJo was then him writing down the events he witnessed and learned of throughout his life. He even could guess who Araki was. The nameless one in his stand, Weird All, should have survived the reset. It made sense though that no one else did when you remembered the goal of the egg. The egg, in part 12, was carrying a super virus. The problem was having a stand made you immune to it, so the egg was trying to reset the world and get rid of stands. If you thought too hard and had a calendar handy, you could figure out what disease the quirky egg brought. The name wasn't even subtle. The quirky egg's super virus was quirks. Probably the gigantification and the culling of the male population as well, but definitely quirks. He thought of it a few times, but it did make a little sense. Quirks showed up before Araki wrote part 12, but were very rare. It was just a year before part 12 that the glowing baby showed up, after what could have been considered the virus incubation period. If you followed the logic, it explained a few things. People with stand potential, or enough stand potential, couldn't get quirks, regardless of gender. It just stuck out more when they were male. It probably turned anyone who didn't have the potential to be a stand user or those who didn't have enough potential into women, made them huge, and gave them a quirk. Being huge might have been an unavoidable trait since Midoriya hadn't heard of any women his size in years. Well, there were some, but that was because of their quirk. They were still bigger, but they stopped aging or something at a certain age. Quirks made it weird, and it was already confusing. So, Araki comes over from the last universe from part 11 and 12, then writes everything down to explain the mess of a history. Why? What was part 13 going to be about? Resetting the world again and canceling the effect of the quirky egg. It was irrelevant, at least for now. Because if JoJo was true, he had some things to look up, research to do, projects to undertake, what some with dwindling sanity might even call his glorious work. In JJBA, there were many stands. There were many ways to get stands. Being stabbed by alien metal arrows, fusing with the dead body of Jesus Christ, staying in space for 2 minutes, being naturally gifted, all had their own methods. But one thing they all had in common was getting a stand didn't have to be the end. If you only focused on stands, there were many methods to acquire power. There were the stand arrows, forged from a meteor that landed around Cape York, Greenland. They could grant stands when stabbed, but if the user was strong enough, could grant a second ability when stabbed into the user. Additionally, if you could get the body of someone with enough stand Hammond Ripple magic bullshit, they could grant stands and gave more power the more parts of the body you had. You could get a second stand if you got the entire body, and that was just focusing on stands. F. Hammond breathing, the golden ratio and the perfect spin, the pursuit of the truth. If all of it could be combined, he could become practically a god. There are still the 2 final evolutions of a stand, but he couldn't even consider them yet. He'd need stand arrows before he could get a Requiem stand. And even with all his research, he didn't understand how to reach Dio's heaven. He'd start with the one the fans had longer to look into, Hammond breathing. Maybe with enough research and following Zappelli's path, he could achieve Hammond. He set about indulging himself in research. Maybe he could find some information if he looked up those monks. Midoriya researched and took notes over hundreds of techniques, ready mix and match while comparing to JJBA. With enough work, he should find the techniques to lead to Hammond. Right now, he was in school though, and Katsuki wanted to demolish everyone. Come on, with our new powers, we'll get dissected or something. Midoriya yawned, looking tired while Pepsiman floated about, working on his notes. He worked with his stand constantly to get as much control as possible, refining his mastery bit by bit. He kept his real eyes slightly open to get 2 different visions, slowly becoming accustomed to the double vision a bit at a time. You want to go to the entrance exam for UA. You got alive long enough to attend. Calm down, but I'm sick of getting picked on, just use the old method. But that's annoying. Midoriya wasn't sure himself why more people didn't have stands. Even if it was guys only, they were pretty young. How did nobody older than them have the stand potential, unlock it, then try to be a hero? No man in any country had ever done it in recorded history. Maybe the government did know about stands, but then they should have done something about it. If they didn't, they might try to dissect 2 boys with quirks. Midoriya wanted a little security before that. Just bear with it, Katsuki. We've gotten this far. They had a little under a year to get used to their stands before the UA. exam if, and a big if they decided to take it. It still seemed like a giant waste of time to Midoriya. If they wanted to go to heroism, just go to some quiet school in the middle of bump nowhere and get the license. Avoid attention, not attract it. Let the guys with martyr complexes get the attention, then die to villainesses. But you are basically saying we're going to UA. Katsuki smiled, showing a little teeth. The UA exam, Katsuki, not. We're gonna get in if we do. 2 guys with superpowers. They'll beg for us to come. It seemed he wasn't the only one thinking about it. Katsuki sat in his chair as school started, summoning M&M to hit anyone who pissed him off. Midoriya shook his head, then continued with his notes on the ceiling. Writing notes through a stand was a great way to build coordination, it seemed, judging by his rapid improvement. I'm Mother Furia. Check this out. Katsuki spat. Then M&M made it explode. Pretty cool, huh? Midoriya couldn't help smiling at that. Yeah, Bichigu. Hey, you tried blowing up skin yet? Ugh, you want me to die. At least be more subtle when you try to end me. Midoriya laughed again, shaking his head. You know dust is mostly skin, right? Try using kamikaze on some dust to see what happens. They were at the beachside right now, chilling with drinks. Midoriya had been adjusting his notes relentlessly, burning through methods until he was sure he was on the verge of a breakthrough on learning Hammon, the vampire hunting technique from JJBA Parts 1 and 2. Yeah, we should have our stands fight again. Katsuki smiled confidently, M&M pulling itself out of him and floating in the air, laughing. That'll be good training. It would be good training. But the problem was it wasn't a very hard fight for Katsuki. His stand might be less precise than Pepsimin, but it was stronger and more durable. It was hard to know how durable their stands were without a third point of reference. They now knew which one was more durable, but they couldn't tell how durable that actually was. Have you tried juggling with M&M yet? That might be good practice. He was pretty close to a breakthrough and was watching Pepsimin, who sat in front of him doing all the motions to show off what it looked like so far. It was good, but not quite there. If he figured out Hammon, which helped you heal faster, he'd be much less retrained about fighting. I can't juggle. How's my stand supposed to? Come on, Katsuki begged. Not even Mitsuki got to see Katsuki beg. Just 3 rounds. All right, I'm not getting any progress today. He pushed off the wall, taking out part 2 to give it another read. Maybe he could find the final piece there. Midoriya sat behind a thrown-out refrigerator as he read, dividing his attention. That made his fighting worse, but he rarely needed complete focus. He wasn't trying to win after all. He was trying to force both of them to grow, and trying out new things was a great way to do that. After a month of nothing but practice, he no longer had any trouble in day-to-day life dividing his attention. In combat, which required a higher degree of focus, he still got a little mixed up. But what else was to be expected? Bakugo stood confidently behind his stand instead of taking cover. Ready, Pepsi. Pepsiman stepped forward, then began throwing trash at M&M to confuse both stand and stand user, then kicked up sand. M&M flew up and out of the way, leaving Katsuki open. M&M prepared an explosion as a discarded shoe beamed Katsuki in the head. Hey, this is a stand fight. Stand fights can be won by taking care of the other stand user. Defend yourself. Pepsiman picked up the refrigerator Midoriya had been hiding behind, throwing the entire thing at Katsuki. Katsuki brought M&M to block the attack, coming in from above to stomp it into the sand, but then Pepsiman disappeared. Midoriya, too, was nowhere in sight. While Midoriya kicked open the refrigerator door, and Pepsiman punched Katsuki's stomach. Checkmate. Katsuki had all the air forced out and went to one knee, and for a split moment Midoriya's eyes cracked. Oh, sit you all right, Katsuki. M&M put its hand on his head. Chi check KKKI. Saw. Katsuki couldn't even say checkmate, but he already lost. This was just sore losing. If that punch had been to his throat, he'd be dead as hell. Instead it just all his air forced out. KATSUKI, you're a genius. I was focusing on the wrong part. He violently shook his bewildered friend. PEPSIMAN. Come, we have notes to correct. Guts to punch. Midoriya ran off, leaving Katsuki on the beach trying to breathe. Month 2, and Midoriya sat, breathing intensely. He no longer had to have Pepsiman give him a gut check every time he wanted to use Hammon, but it did take a while to get started. He took notes over the entire process for the future and for later study. He did this in the mess of the classroom but didn't have Pepsiman out at the moment. Hammon required too much focus, maybe later when he got better at controlling his stand and Hammon, but for now, he needed to learn to do it naturally. Thinking about controlling stands, Bakugo really was getting to grips with M&M. He now used kamikaze to blow up his sweat. Still didn't try the dead skin on his arms, like a coward, but sweat was a much more replaceable ammunition. Midoriya felt his body being washed over slowly as he started his Hammon breathing, with heat radiating throughout his body like when he unlocked his stand. He sat there for some time, content with the warmth. As his body adjusted to the rhythm, he began to work slowly, focusing most of his concentration on breathing. It'd take millions of repetitions to get the level of control he wanted, but he'd slowly learn to do it naturally. To make some cross-references, his total concentration breathing was becoming constant. Midoriya and Katsuki had, regrettably, signed up for the UA exam. Some people said they were finally committing suicide, and Midoriya wasn't sure they were wrong. He'd try to use his stand as little as possible to avoid anything actually amazing. Midoriya watched his bruises fade away, smiling. He might not use his stand, but he was going to give them a show either way. Just sit down and learn this. It's useful. Midoriya held his notes, slapping them with his free hand. It'll only take a month, and we need to get a move on. No way with that nerd sit. Ichigo could really live up to his name sometimes. What harm was there in learning how to use Hammond? It was exclusively beneficial. I need to better learn to use M&M compared to all those beaches who had their whole lives to learn their quirks. That was good reasoning. If Hammond didn't help with stand training, come on, it'll help you increase your stamina. Just read the skim notes version at least. We can get you started at least. No way in hell, I saw you punching yourself with pepsiment every time you wanted to train. No way in hell am I letting you do that to me. The real reason came out. He only had to do that in the experimental phase though, and for another week, every time he wanted to train as Hammond. But he didn't have to anymore. Shesh, didn't know you were such a... That usually would have made him explode and instantly do whatever was being talked about. But it seemed even Katsuki could catch on once in a while. Ain't falling for it. I'm not. Midoriya shook his head, watching their stand sort through the garbage. Think we'll get anything good this time. Midoriya finally found a folding table from long ago in the mess once, and ever since they kept searching for more stuff. It served as great practice too, since it gave Midoriya a chance to divide his attention while hitting things. He also started to accidentally unravel the mystery of his stand while doing this. Depends on what you call the good stuff. You like bikes? I've found 6 today. I like things I can use, smartass. Katsuki shook his head. Then M&M wiped more sweat off of him, leaving to detonate it. M&M was immune to its own explosions, so it didn't have to run around a lot at least. Treasure would be nice. So would a blowjob. Get realistic. Midoriya was making a habit out of being the voice of reason between them, something not easy for him. At least it meant he had to expand his own boundaries. He almost said finding a mermaid, but these days, he wouldn't be surprised. Logic left this planet long before the first universal reset. Do you have any plans for the UA entrance exam? Go in, blow sit up, go out, get accepted, and pass the written exam. Almost forgot about that. With his grades, Katsuki didn't need to remember little things like written tests. Katsuki could never study for a test but still pull out an above-average grade. Still, to get into UA, it was safer to go all out in every field. Not even gonna try hiding your stand. This was the major debate. Midoriya didn't want to show off their trump cards. And Katsuki, well, it wouldn't be much of a debate if they agreed. Nope. He leaned back, taking a drink. Don't get why you think it's so bad. People come after us. Boom. That'll happen to M. That might have been the most convincing argument he'd ever heard for showing their stands. We don't have to explain how we do it. Anyone asks if we have quirks, we say yes, and we just started being able to use them one day. Hey are you still gonna follow me? A genuine question again. Katsuki was just busting them out one after another. This really was a stupid idea, but Katsuki was the only person he'd ever consider his friend, so. To the end of the line, Bichigu. To the end of the line. Midoriya finished adjusting his shoe. You'd think they'd learn, Katsuki. You, got a little. On your lip, yeah, right there. Katsuki tapped his own lip, and Midoriya mimicked, then wiped the blood off his face. He then crouched down, leaning over one of his victims with a smile as he admired his work. It was a mess of limbs, bruises, and garbage, and you thought just fighting each other would be good enough. Where'd we be without some good all brawls? He stood atop the pile, smiling from ear to ear. His face was so innocent, but his eyes so disconnected. They were as clear as glass and alive as a butchered fish's. His uniform was in peak condition, save the red streak on the side of his face. How polite of them to help us practice, but I think we should excuse ourselves. Probably. Katsuki nodded along and followed Midoriya, who was still enjoying the euphoria from the fight. It felt good to get it out of his system once in a while. He'd had Pepsimin for 5 months now, and drilled his fighting experience to its peak. He could use his stand and Hammond at the same time now and was already researching his third technique, the spin. Only a few more months before the entrance exam. How long was Katsuki going to be fixated on that stupid goal? While Katsuki had been focusing on that UA sit, Midoriya had honed pickpocketing to an art form with or without his stand. He still mostly used his stand, though, since it couldn't be traced back to him. No one would be able to nail him for theft if no one could tell how he actually pulled it off. It should be an experience. He tried to phrase it nicely, but he wasn't quite good enough at this goody two-shoes thing to take the sarcasm out completely. Luckily, Katsuki wasn't paying attention. Once in a lifetime. Hey, do you think we'll both get in the same class? Another moment of a good question. Midoriya hopped over the nearest fence with Pepsiment. Does it matter? I thought you just wanted to get there. He could see Katsuki thinking it over before hopping the fence after him. For what it's worth, it's assorted by your grade usually, so if we both do as good as you say, we'll both get in 1A. That made his face light up. Jesus, how innocent could a guy like him be at this age? Hadn't they been dealing with the same bullshit all these years? Great. I mean, yeah, that's good to hear. Midoriya shook his head and kept walking. Right into a cop. Great. He could already feel the harassment coming. The cop began to shout at both Katsuki and Midoriya, but Midoriya tuned out with a happy smile on his face like he didn't mind. He was already thinking about how far he could shove her badge down her throat before she was on her third sentence. Midoriya sat alone with his notes. It was under a month till the UA exam, 7 months since he learned of the truth, but his pursuit of the truth was a little different than Part 10. Every day, he researched more and more about stands. There wasn't much to learn anymore. He was pursuing a chase that ended 100 years ago in dead ends. The leads hadn't run cold. They had decayed to dust and flew away in the wind. He could take some guesses over a few things at least. The stand arrows were made from a meteorite that landed on Earth, so all he had to do was guess where it would have landed if you adjusted the time. An hour's difference and it would have been in an entirely different country. It was probably on a mountain or something, so old and forgotten he might have to look for it himself in person. Jesus Christ's body would be hard to find. People tried to find it using the map in JJBA Part 7, but that map was only accurate in Part 7. There should have been a different map, calculated for this world. That would show the corpse part locations if they were in this edition of the world. He spun his pencil and took another glass from Pepsiment. He had learned from his predecessors, heard tales of fate so strong it held a man harder than gravity. Ways to reach heaven, then to go beyond it. Ways to go below the depths of hell, to either clear a devil's name or condemn him for eternity to infinite deaths. How to take a napkin, to become an ultimate life form, to live a quiet life. He heard of it all. He wasn't smart enough to know it all, not dumb enough to pretend it made sense. It didn't matter. He wasn't trying to break fate, but twist it. Maybe in his battle with fate, he'd understand his. He'd never live a quiet life. Such was the way of stand users, living all in mandem even if they didn't know it. They'd fight and fight, until someday they could fight no more. But that work was for another day. Right now, he had to concern himself with making sure his only friend made it out of this clusterf alive. He went back to studying UA itself. Neither boy was worried about the written exam. The only problem was going to be the practical exam. He wasn't sure what to expect, because UA never released footage of the past events. He just knew from budgets, leaks, and rumors about the past events. However, Midoriya wouldn't be surprised if the girls just teamed up to literally curb stomp him the second the clock started. He wasn't exactly what you'd call optimistic anymore. He learned from his mistakes. They stood side by side. Two idiots bonded together so well it was like they were chained together with platinum. At UA, for the entrance exam. Nope, that'd be nice. Instead, they were crushed on a metro, sharing a chair because they needed to make room. Each please. These FRs were leaving their purses and sit on the seats. The only thing they needed to do was knock a few teeth out with those stupid purses. Calm down, Izuku. Only Midoriya could make Katsuki tell someone else to calm down. He had refined it. With the smile, the body language, hiding his eyes by closing them, he truly looked happy as could be. This is why Katsuki knew he was about to hit someone so fast the shockwave might crack skulls. Just a few more minutes and we'll be there. Another problem. He didn't want to be there. FUA. They churned out heroines who were worth less than cheap heroin. He saw anyone there. He might snap and see just how many times he could punch their pretentious faces before someone managed to deck him. I'm feeling catchin'. He smiled wide, showing how happy he was, but his stand quivering with rage and almost choking out a woman showed other ideas. It seemed the happier he pretended to be, the more pissed off he actually was. This reached a peak when someone almost sat on them. Hey, whoops, sorry. Didn't know they let dogs on the metro, she quipped, flipping her hair. School uniform. Middle school. She seemed to be going to the same place as they were. Well, she would, if Midoriya didn't throw her out a window to see if she could make a quip about him breaking her neck first. It'd be odd if they didn't. They let you on after all. Katsuki stepped up to swing with his tongue, hoping that insulting her a little would convince Midoriya not to end her. What Midoriya did was no longer in the realm of murder. He made violence an art these days. She slammed her tail into the ground. Are you looking for a fight, you disgusting gimps? God, why do they let you even out of the house? Eminem had to restrain Pepsiment. who was trying his best to gouge her eyes out with his fingers. Don't know. Ask your mom why she still lets you into the house actually. With that smell, I'm not sure she does. Beach. They went back and forth over and over until Katsuki pulled Midoriya off at their stop. It looked like they were running away from the fight, but really, Midoriya had been about to try and rip her jaw off. Katsuki was doing his first real hero job and saving a civilian from getting murdered. Come on dude, just keep calm. We can probably get it all out in the tests. Maybe they'll test us on something you can hit. Or maybe they'll be over quirk usage. And we fail painlessly and effortlessly. Midoriya now had enough confidence neither of them would die of anything from the test. The other people were still a loose end. But he didn't want to use Pepsiment, especially not in any obvious way. Hey, remember, 1A, me and you. Use it if you have to. He patted him on the back, right before someone walked straight into Midoriya, punting him into a tree. Midoriya, oops, sorry. A girl with brown hair and pink dots glanced over. Didn't see you guys. You are shorter than I expected. She squatted to look at him, smiling. Aren't you a little early for the general course? Midoriya, you all right? He ran right past her, climbing the tree to help his best friend down. She looked annoyed at the lame reaction, releasing the first boy from her quirk. What are they doing here? Oh, I'm going to be late. She ran toward the building, leaving them to disentangle themselves from the tree. Katsuki, you need to be more specific. You're pointing to half the auditorium. Midoriya squinted. The girl with pink dots on her cheeks. Katsuki squinted, looking closer. Everyone but me or you is a girl. They came in late and got stuck in the back as they waited for everything to start. They were stuck between people, sharing a seat. Again, at least Midoriya wasn't putting on a farce of kindness or innocence right now. She's got brown hair and that's about all I remember. Brown hair, pink dots on her cheeks, shoulder-length hair. Not much to go off. Midoriya had felt himself go weightless before he was launched, so he at least knew her quirk to report her for harassment before they left. The report wouldn't do anything, but it was a fun thought while he was bored. President Mike started her speech, going over the rules. They had papers telling them where to go. Places from empty cities usually used for hero exercises were going to be used for the exams. Fighting a whole bunch of robots worth different points. This seems kinda biased. If more than 4 people came from a place, they can still team up, and any quirks that don't work on humans are automatically forfeit. Excuse me. A girl with, long blue hair. Not the girl who punted him. Whoever she was loud and tall. You say there are only 3 robots, but the handout clearly depicts 4. I thought UA was more capable than this. Please explain, and also, she made a lot of good points. He liked her. You 2 boys have been talking the entire time. This is for the hero course, not general education. Please leave. She talked a lot of sit. He hated her. President Mike went on to introduce the final robot in the practical exam. One that wasn't worth any points. ... So a budget waster. Where were the people's taxes going again? President Mike dismissed them to the testing rooms. They wouldn't be seeing each other for the rest of the time. Midoriya went to his assigned desk. They had given him a chair as a desk. All right, he said the stuff before was harassment. This was just actual harassment. There was no way in hell UA, who had 8 effing months to prepare for this, couldn't have gotten a desk size right for him if they had enough money to produce pointless robots for their tests. Midoriya was so pissed off he didn't even notice his surroundings, not even bothering to cheat for almost half the test when he realized people were looking at him. Pepsiment told him people all around were looking at him, laughing at him, and copying his answers. They wanted answers. Fine, he'd give them answers. For the rest of the time, Midoriya gave fake answers until getting stuck on the last one, until everyone around him turned in their own work. Then he quickly changed all his answers back to the right ones, turned it into Cementos as the only person to have such a wide, happy smile, and went on. He looked so happy that Cementos stopped him. Look, I know you've already heard this, but you probably shouldn't take the practical exam. You could be seriously hurt or ended. I know you don't have much time to make up your mind, she said, ignorant that he already made up his mind that he'd get in just to tell Bakugo this was a bad idea and hopefully drop out early with him. But please consider your own safety. I'm obligated as a hero to tell everyone this, but I'm worried for you. She didn't seem like such a bad person, but Midoriya's mood was already god-awful from this morning. Meaning, it looked like his mood was amazing to someone who didn't know him. Thanks, miss, but I think I still need to try. Thanks for looking out for me though. I hope to see you in a few months. He was so sunshine-vomitingly happy that she blinked, taken aback, and let him pass. He had to press onward, with his big stupid smile on his face, towards the practical. He wasn't going to take this exam, silly Cementos. He was going to effing murder it. Midoriya had to get changed in a corner, not even getting his own room to get changed in. Filing about harassment, he was just going to beat the principal to death through a wall. All his clothes had to either be custom made, old as F, or children's clothes. He was poor, so it was mostly children's clothes with a few gifts from the 2 older guys he knew. Maybe he should check with them to see if they knew about stands. He had to jog to get to the testing grounds on time. Then finally could start his stretching. There were a lot of people there who might end him. Torpedo hair, giant teeth, pink dot cheeks. Wait, he might know the giant teeth girl. Weight on the weight, pink dot cheeks, shoulder-length brown hair. She was doing a breathing exercise right now. He began to walk towards her, muttering under his breath, "Pepsiment, let's crush her." Someone stepped in front of him. "Excuse me, male." Who the F addressed people as male. "Oh, blue-haired dipset. That girl is trying to concentrating for the upcoming exam. Please, don't disturb her and stop wasting our time." Welp, the lion, the witch, and the audacity of this speech. She was the one wasting everyone's time. And she had the effing S to say he was wasting time. He was about to deck her with Pepsiment when an alarm rang, and the gates opened. He started walking before President Mike shouted to the rest of them, since he was used to needing to react instantly. "What are you waiting for, listeners? Go, go, go." Midoriya almost made it to the front of the crowd before everyone else started running, leaving him in the dust. He quietly jogged behind, not looking worried at all, and seeming quite happy, overjoyed, even. 2 guys this year, most in any year since, well, ever. Nezu laughed. They only had 1 idiot at a max usually. Quite the haul this year. We do have an ambulance on standby for emergency cases. Should we tell them to focus on the 2 cities with boys in them? President Mike asked, glancing to Nezu for confirmation. But Eraserhead shook her head at that idea. They want to be heroes. They'll learn to deal with it. She flicked a hair out of her face. This world won't be kind to them, so neither will we. ... But do tell Recovery Girl and send her towards those areas first. If they get injured, they'll just die in the ambulance, so it's better for them to get Recovery Girl instead. You can be kind, Aizawa. I knew you had it in you. President Mike shut up as the fist slammed into the top of her head. Eck. HMMM. Nezu looked from the reports to the cameras. It wasn't that there wasn't a lot to go on, there was actually nothing. They had grades, they had attendance, and nothing else. It smelled of a cover-up, and she'd know. They had a few in her time too. Well, no harm in seeing what did that boy just make an explosion? Bakugo ran forward, literally flying on his explosions and laughing. He saved materials for today, and he was going to use it all. No point in limits, no restraints, no holds barred. He slammed into another robot M&M first, the impact alone crumpling it, and another 1 bites sawdusto. Bakugo jumped off the robot, laughing. He recently discovered a new and exciting way to use his stand. His stand could be used as a launching platform to move even more quickly. He flew around the scene, blowing up 2 more and laughing maniacally. He had to prove to Izuku this was the right career for them, and that meant he couldn't hold back. He needed to get to the top of the chart, show these damn extras what real power was, and only then was he in the right position to lecture Izuku. He rolled when he hit the ground, then ran straight at one, as some redhead tried to go for the same one. What did that extra think she was doing? Another explosion behind him. And he flew into this one, using his stand to punch straight through its head. He rose off the toppled robot, laughing, then looked at the beach, trying to steal points already. She took a step back, heavily confused. He just snorted. Whatever, just what I expected from a weakling. He squatted again, flexing his hands before flicking sweat downward for M&M, then flying away. Can't do sit themselves. He was about 30 feet in the air, looking down at the scene and picking his targets. 37 points already. And this sit show wasn't even half over. This was gonna be fun. Midoriya lightly jogged around until he was free of the girls who might try to end him, then finished the last of his stretches. Didn't want to hurt himself while he worked. After all, Midoriya suspected that the teachers would cheat the test against them, especially when Katsuki showed off his power. They'd try to bring out their full potential, or try to flunk them deliberately not counting some of their points, or some other bullshit he didn't give a F about. Midoriya rolled his shoulder, right as his first victim rounded the corner. Heroine, you will be eliminated. So talkative. It pissed him off. Midoriya was almost always using the Hammond breathing. He couldn't be sure when he finally started doing it in his sleep, but any time he dreamed, it was the first thing he started doing. His arm filled with energy, the entire mass becoming harder. He took his pose, bored. It ran toward him despite having guns, clearly just for aesthetics. If these things had guns, almost nobody'd be passing today. It raised both hands up to smash him, lowering its guard. Bam! The hand came forward, hitting it in the chest. The metal dented inward, and the entire thing stopped as a hand, invisible to the common eye, entered inside the robot and crushed its insides. He held the pose for barely a moment, but with the power of Hammond Pepsiment, he completely stopped the robot's advance in one strike. He stepped backward, letting Pepsiment push it so it didn't fall on top of him. Only 1 point? This might take a while. He sighed, rolling up his sleeves. He put on a bright face, admiring the new robots rushing towards him. I don't know why a hero test would only look for villainous traits, but if it makes me do better, The blonde boy was in the lead, not just for villain points, but overall. His explosions tore through everything, and he flew around on them laughing like a demon. Come on, that all you effers got. How is this possible? It was obvious what was happening. The boy had a quirk. Midnight rubbed her eyes. All for one. Yami Toshinori leaned forward, shaking slightly. Her eyes looked hollow. That should be impossible. Well, so should a boy having a quirk. Nezu consoled her by patting her leg. But look, he does. So I guess nothing's off the table. Think aliens will be coming soon? We need to stop the test. Toshinori stood up. If he got a quirk from that thing, he might know where she is. Hush, calm down. Nezu shook her head, then returned to watching the screens. You're not seeing the whole picture, Toshinori. That we can recruit him in and ask him in person when he can't leave. A good guess from President Mike. Nezu took in the entire room, noting with satisfaction nobody saw it before her. That he's just the flashier one. Shouldn't you pay more attention to the green-haired boy? He just hit 20 points. Nezu pointed to the screen, where a tiny figure ran up one's arm, hitting the face of the robot in the eye and making the entire thing topple over, flipping off and jogging forward like nothing happened, looking for more victims. 23. He's picking up the pace. Midoriya used Pepsimin to pull himself out of the way of any dangerous attacks that he didn't quite avoid. He spun and flipped, dancing like the wind around attacks before boredly finishing off 2 more with Mario-esque Goomba stomps. He bounced off the second, then rolled as he hit the ground into a light jog. This was kind of boring. He had been trying to avoid everyone, so he went in a straight line forward but to the side hoping everyone would go straight forward relative to the gate. Unfortunately, he'd been too right and now had nothing to do but smash machines. Midoriya saw another robot coming and ran towards it while forming Pepsimin. Pepsimin grabbed Midoriya from behind and lobbed him underneath the robot's attacks, making it look like Midoriya dived out of the way. Pepsimin then reformed underneath Midoriya and helped lift him up as Midoriya sprung into a counterattack, punching the machine once in the body. While Midoriya's fist hit the metal and crushed it with Hammond, Pepsimin passed through the metal effortlessly and began to wreck everything inside the machine, making it seem like Midoriya one-shot it. He jogged forward for a bit, then slowed to a walk as he checked his wrist. It had hurt for a moment before Hammond healed it back up to tip-top shape, but this was still too easy. It was more boring than just going to school. He'd have to spice it up, maybe do some training since this was so dull. Midoriya grabbed a mask from around his neck, putting it over his mouth and nose. It restrained his air but was great for training. And that was all this really was, just extra training. He decided to limit himself, forcing him to try for once. He now walked forward, hands in his pockets, moseying down the street as 5 more robots came into view. Got a hand to UA. They might be total bastards and rotten to the core, but they make for one hell of a stress reliever. Midoriya rushed forward, giggling as he began to generate Hammond again. Midoriya thought he stopped trying years ago, but now he was redefining it. He'd never gone directly compared Hammond to quirks. And while he still technically hadn't, his Hammond Pepsimin crushed these weak metallic sits faster than these dumbasses and their oh-so-special gifts. Something was wrong, though, because even with Pepsimin's senses enhanced by Hammond, he could not find a single 0-pointer mixed in. He thought they might a secret enemy, like you thought it was a 3-pointer but a sticker came off and it was actually a 0-pointer, but no. Maybe it was supposed to be a civilian, though, then ending it should be worth negative points. Oh, maybe it was supposed to represent a man. That's why nobody cared if you beat it. He was back on the central road, checking the robots as he snickered at his own dark joke. He had 60 points already. He didn't quite care. Everyone else was in their 30s to 40s. His lead was cemented, and if he didn't get in, none of these failed abortions would. If he could check with Katsuki, he could compare his point total with a better reference. No doubt Katsuki encouraged others to try harder by seeing him fly through, crushing the enemy. He was inspirational like that, his will to fight so palpable it could spread to others. It had spread to him once. Stop daydreaming. Refocus. Let's at least use this as an opportunity to fight more with the current restraints. The points by Katsuki should have a higher average than over here. Still, it was only 10 minutes to fight. Nobody'd be doing that great. He took a moment to practice throwing rocks, imparting Hammond into them to make them hit a little bit harder before tripping up other robots, making them miss their attacks or collapse, allowing others to beat them down easier. He was bored, and if he was allowed, he would have done it to the other participants too. He sat atop a robot now, looking through it with Pepsimin. He never really got into robotics, since other than Strongheim it didn't have a large part in JJBA, but these machines weren't too complicated. They were made to shut down entirely if something went wrong, meaning all it usually took was one hit to take the thing down. To the body and head, at least. You took out an arm, it'd keep on trucking. He finished following the wiring around and trying to figure out what the more complicated bits did, jumping off the hunk of junk and stretching again. It felt like he had literally gotten stronger, probably because it was such a great workout. Hammon meant that torn muscles healed back faster so that he could get sick gains easily and retain them for a longer time. He checked out his hand, admiring his Hammon. Even restrained, it wasn't bad. If anything, it was more refined now, since he couldn't be sloppy with this Hammon. This was the next step, the type of Hammon he needed to make constantly instead of his weaker version. Be-woo-woo-woo. It was like a bomb siren, and came from every direction, even from outside the city. He had to put Pepsiman away for a moment, noting quickly that he needed to make a defense against loud noises, then looked around. They still had a minute left, so what was the siren for? A gigantic hand grabbed a building, crushing it like cardboard. It was a gargantuan, unearthly, enormous waste of effing money. That was the 0-pointer. It had to be 100 meters tall. How much electricity did it take to make that thing wiggle its fingers, let alone fight a bunch of teenagers? While Midoriya marveled at how stupid the whole thing was, most people were doing the sensible things of panicking, screaming, and running away. This was supposed to be a simulation, so outside of any foul play, none of them were going to die. They weren't boys, after all, hated by the universe and enemy of all things good. Midoriya wondered if there was any merit in taking it out. But for a boy, they'd just push it under the rug. No extra points for the human form of sin itself, after all. It was better to book it now, well, maybe not book it. It was better walk briskly away from the slowly moving thing and leave the giant in the dust. But, who the hell says ga? He turned to make fun of them. 2. See, a young Izuku Midoriya played alone with his action figures. He was only 3 at the time, so young, so carefree. Hey, a rowdy voice spoke up. He looked to see a blonde person, as short as him. You like All Might too. We're friends now. Midoriya blinked at the boy, whose hair seemed to explode out of his head, but nodded. They didn't fight at first, and they weren't always social pariahs. They just hung out, laughing and joking with each other. It was the best time of their lives, according to him anyway. Then they grew up, but not as much as everyone else. Everyone became meaner, and they didn't understand why. Until one day, when a doctor finally told them about boys. Boys didn't get quirks. Boys didn't get big. Boys didn't get jobs. Boys were worthless. He wasn't sure how he took it anymore, but he remembered seeing Katsuki look so frustrated. Hey, don't look so down, Kakin. I'll still play with you. He put on his best All Might-sized smile. Really, Katsuki didn't show a lot of people his fragile side. Yeah, to the end of the line. Midoriya stuck his chest out, proud. What's that mean? Midoriya didn't know what it meant really, so he made it up on the spot. That was the first time they bonded over the phrase. He was 6 when Katsuki got mugged, pinned down by their classmates, his legs held in place so he couldn't run. They beat him mercilessly, laughing as Katsuki struggled. They were laughing. Why were they laughing? Why would anyone laugh at something so cruel? Midoriya wasn't sure when his tiny legs started running, but he tackled one of them, throwing her off the boy. They stopped hitting Katsuki and hit him instead. He lay in the playground, staring at the sky. Quirkless freaks. The girls ran away, even though they won. Midoriya just lay there for a minute before slowly sitting up, looking over at Katsuki. His legs were still stuck in rocks. He remembered the look Katsuki had. It would stick with him forever. The fear, the pain. The young boy walked over, putting on his best smile. Don't worry, Kakin, I am here. He took a moment to look cool, then started moving the rocks one by one. You should call your mommy, Kakin. She'll get you patched up real quick. Hey, Izuku. Midoriya turned. That was the first time Katsuki said his real name. No titles attached. Those girls, they said They said some mean stuff. You're still with me, right? It was strange to see him so weak. They were 2 of the only 3 times he'd ever seen Katsuki show his heart. This time, though, he remembered his response. The concrete flew underneath him as he sprinted towards the pinned person. His arms pumped, his mask slid off, and he went full force, using everything in his body to go as fast as possible. To the end of the line. The robot would be easier to stop than to destroy the rubble and move the victim, so it came first. He needed to remove the ability for any forward progress, then stop any further attacks. The treads would come first. He moved past the girl, breathing out a quick one-liner. Don't be afraid. A hero is here. Pepsiman Hammond, Cola Overdrive. No one could hear him talking. He was speaking so quietly. He drove back his fist, then launched his first attack. The hit itself dented the metal, crumpling it like tin foil. Pepsiman took the Hammond though, hardening its own body further to increase durability and shattering the nearest engine, along with any connections along the way. His second punch was similar, but for the other side. The metal itself wasn't actually all that hard, all things considered, but the sheer amount of it made this faux villain difficult to deal with. The lead engines for the left and right treads gave out, and the connections to the rest were badly damaged. And that was only on the second punch. The third got even more distance, using the dent and torn metal to get closer into the machine, this time just ripping wires apart and finally stopping the thing as its treads disconnected enough from the source to receive inputs. His fourth, an uppercut, rose with him as he jumped off the treads and straight at the body. Black tendrils swirled around his arm, visible for only moments. Black blood overdrive. He hardened his entire arm, from skin to muscles, from blood to bones, using everything to make as hard a hammer as possible before slamming it into the frame and sending Pepsiman into the machine, who spun around like an arena, tearing and hitting everything it could inside the machine before the behemoth finally stopped moving entirely. Pepsiman put some wires into Midoriya's hand to act like he ripped those out. And that's what caused the major malfunction instead of a spinning invisible punchy ghost. Midoriya breathed out, feeling the newly acquired injuries in his arm slowly fade away. He shook his arm, checking the strained muscles. Most of them were broken by black blood overdrive, a move where he hardened and tensed his arms so much his muscles would tear themselves and crack his bones. This took a while to heal off. He shook his hand, slumping over. This took a lot out of him, and he didn't exactly have a lot in the tank before he started. He slid down the thing, landing with a rough roll but still getting up. He dusted himself off, moving one of the rocks, breathing heavily as feeling returned to his right arm. Stung like a beach. "Hey, are you Al?" He looked at the person he saved. She had a pink dot on each cheek, shoulder-length brown hair, and was making one of the rocks on her leg float. "Hey there, miss. Glad to see you again." His happy persona overtook his tired real self as he stood up with the rock. Hammond filled the rock, turning it into the perfect weapon to bash this beach's skull in. Right as he was about to do the world the best service he could, a buzzer rang. "Alrighty, contestants, time is oop. Please make your way to the exit if possible, where medical staff will be waiting." President Mike ended the announcement, leaving Midoriya will murder Blue S, a splitting headache, and an arm that felt like it had been shattered a couple hundred times. The world began to tilt and fade to black as he fell forward, the only motivating force keeping him conscious gone, pulled by the rock he was carrying. Son of a... Midoriya was lying in a sick, eyes closed. He was breathing very heavily, as if in great pain. His fists were red, his eyes closed shut. Most people there just thought he hurt himself and had failed the test. Only Katsuki saw the Hammond bleeding through, and heard the screams of Pepsiman. Midoriya was trying very hard not to grab the nearest person and beat them to death for the stupid-ass commentary they were making. Psst. Midoriya, what happened? Katsuki stuck by him the whole way. Dude deserved an answer, even if this was all his fault. Got distracted. It was the truth, even if he didn't say what distracted him. She wasn't even around for him to punch in the face with Pepsiman. Now that would have made him feel better. But it was time to redirect this conversation. How many points you get? 77. 13 more than him. If nothing else, Katsuki was getting in. That was double what some of the people by him were getting. Ew, a stack of points. Katsuki blinked at him. He sometimes forgot that one of them actually had a life. 64 points. Way to go. Katsuki gave him a pat on the shoulder. That's double what some of the beaches by me were dragging in. Trying to steal my points and sit. The heroes probably won't count all of our points. He needed to curb some enthusiasm early and taper Katsuki's expectations to be a little more realistic. Don't be surprised if our points are different from the ones we know we got. Katsuki laughed him off, and they went home stuck in the same chair on the metro again. Midoriya's arm was fine when he woke up, but all the Hammond energy he had built up was gone, and he didn't have a clue where it went. Midoriya wore the training mask almost all times now, forcing him to work harder to create Hammond and refining what he did make. He walked along the street, Pepsiman hovering behind him and practicing his punches. Pepsiman, like most stands, could punch at inhumane speed. With the right technique, though, he could go even faster. Midoriya drilled Pepsiman's jab until it was just a blur as he walked. He'd turn the attack into something he did automatically. 10 jabs was a second, 100 under 10 seconds. Pepsiman never tired, so his jabs never got worse. This helped Midoriya refine his left hand into something terrifying. He rebuilt his Hammond reserve slowly. It was something he could only do while conscious right now, but he'd refine it even more. But that was irrelevant. They already took the test and he had free time again. While practicing, creating a Hammond reserve was useful. It was only something he could do with his stand. Even if Katsuki learned how to use Hammond, he probably couldn't do it. Instead of just honing something that he could practice, he needed to unravel the next mystery, the infinite spin. He'd check ratios and diagrams, then combined it with what he already has. He even named the move already, the spinning jab. He'd have to turn his arm and force it to follow the spiral to hit the perfect ratio. But if he did, it should be able to pierce any defenses. He chuckled to himself as he walked, watching through Pepsiman the drill of jabs, each one seeming just the same as the last, but slowly becoming more compact and sharp. It was like music to his ears, helping him to relax after such an awful day. Everyone had their own fixes, and this was his. He ascended the stairs quickly until he reached his floor, using peppermint to open the door for himself and walking straight to his room. He already had food in there. He sat down in front of the tiny folding table he used as a desk, turning on his computer only after locking the door. He put the password in and checked his VPN, opening back up his files from this morning. There were many things, but the first one was diagrams of JoJo and the ratios used to demonstrate the spin. He checked it again and again, along with Araki's notes and supplementary stories. He drew his own figures and tested them with peppermint. He checked the lessons by Gyro Zappelli, then practiced by throwing a small plastic over and over and over. It seemed easy, but that was with a proper demonstration. It was even harder to master than to learn. Midoriya sighed, then checked the clock. Looked like he had more practice to do before he could fulfill his dreams and escape this world. So, if we look at these mountains, we can conclude that the Stand Arrow meteor landed in the Great Dividing Range, located near modern Cape York in Australia, or what used to be Greenland. Midoriya held up the pictures of the mountains in the wintertime compared to the pictures of JoJo. See the color of the stone? It's the same type. Mother Furia, I love you. You know that, right? Katsuki rubbed his eyes. I have actually no clue what any of this is. Just nod along for another minute. So, we need to go there and try to find the meteor ourselves, using our stands as a compass to find it and then grab a chunk to make 4 stand arrows. 2 to bite Zandusto ourselves, 2 to Rikiam ourselves. Midoriya had the arrow sizes and how much of the alien metal they'd need to use in each, along with guesses of how much they should purify the metal. They could experiment a little, after all. Come on, I got enough money for 2 tickets. We can bail right now and go get it. Won't we need to go to UA? At that time, yes, but UA was a waste of time, so this was a better idea. Compared to UA, trying to shove his head up his own ass was more useful. That's a sacrifice I'm afraid we'll need to take. After all, it's the way to get some of the most powerful stands in the world. He discovered this while surfing through comparisons for Part 7, where someone once said the drawings were accurate enough that you could tell what location they were supposed to be at in real-world America by the color and shape of the stones. This logic also held up to something else, something a little earlier in JoJo's history. You're just scared that we didn't get in. Katsuki patted him on the back, laughing. Don't worry, we got this in the bag. That was the problem. If Katsuki failed, he'd drop out in a heartbeat. But with Katsuki's score, he'd probably get in. Midoriya also had to get in, if just to rein him back in and make him see how terrible an idea this was. Midoriya rubbed his head but already had the location down. It'd be an 8-hour trip there. Searching would take a week at most if the material was as reactive to willpower as it was in JoJo. All in all, he just needed 1 weekish to try and find it. Katsuki laughed again and was so excited it made Midoriya want to puke. This was going to be the worst. This is going to be the best. Katsuki had Midoriya come over with his unopened letter from UA. Now they sat in his room, one a bundle of nerves but not wanting to admit it, the other a bundle of boredom and wondering if he could sell the seal for any money. Who used snail mail these days? Yeah, it's going to be something. Ready. It wasn't a question as Midoriya generated Hammond, using his fingernail like a knife to cut the letter open. Bakugo just tore it open, no style. Inside were letters and strange discs. Midoriya picked it up, looking for a button or something to turn it on while Bakugo dropped his. Midoriya noted the button on the bottom and opted just to watch Bakugo's. They should have been the same if they got the same things. Doubt they sent discs to everyone. IAM. Here is a projection. All Might appeared in the middle of the room. All smiles and muscles. If you're getting this, congratulations. Looks like you're getting into UA. HMM. This is for him. It looked like the letters were a little personal. All Might listened to the person to one side, nodding. Alrighty, young Bakugo. Congratulations on your performance into UA. With the highest villain takedown score across the board. Midoriya smiled. He knew his best friend had it in him. He was, after all, the best, even if people didn't recognize it yet. We'll have you come in early to be fitted for a uniform in 1 week. We don't know when I'll get this. What's the date then? Just add it in post then. On the date that should now be on screen, please come into UA. But until we meet again, welcome to your Hero Academy. That was 50 Shades of Shady. And complete bullshit. Everyone else would be mailing in their sizes. They could totally do the same thing. He suspected he might have a similar video waiting for him. Well, either UA is blowing all their budget on more stupid sit and paying All Might to welcome students, or they're blowing their budget on even more stupid sit and hired All Might to teach. Dude, I got in. You got in. We did it. And Katsuki didn't even notice. He hugged Midoriya, still stiff as a board, and cheered. Midoriya read the actual letter, checking the rules, and already forgetting them. All generic and pointless. Wouldn't stop the harassment anyway. Yup, we sure did. Seriously, Katsuki got the most in the entire school. He hoped that was hyped up, because otherwise, his score wasn't too far from Katsuki, and he hadn't even been trying. He did want to get into the same class as Katsuki, but he wasn't trying to stand out here. He reread the letter for anything he might have missed the first time but became too bored. This might take a while. Hey, Hag, I did it. We did it. Katsuki ran out of the room, bursting with excitement, while Midoriya tried to figure out their game. The excuse for clothes fitting was weak as sit. He'd check his own date, then head with Katsuki no matter if the dates were different. 7 tries later in his room, he had found a few issues with the letter he'd bring up. Katsuki couldn't be reasoned with, so he'd have to do it himself. It was now 5 days until they went in, and he finished organizing his thoughts. He still hadn't bothered to watch his video, but he was trying to find something he could practice while he watched. He could only hone his jab so far, and he was now trying to get his first use of the spin. He set it down on the table. When one of the buttons was pushed, the other side operated as a projector. Big waste of money. Maybe he could record over it to make it useful. He sat back, Pepsimon throwing jab after jab behind him. He watched All Might flounder through her usual lines. For someone who gave so many speeches, she really was bad at it. Could have been a comedy with how choppy she was. But then she cut out, and a weird rat started talking instead, talking about his score. He didn't get his villain points mentioned, but something entirely different. No, that's bullshit, that is bullshit. Why didn't they mention that at the beginning? This test is biased, Midoriya screamed, slamming a fist down in exasperation. So, spin less. Midoriya showed up at UA's gates beside Katsuki. No spin, tired, bedraggled, and still with some leaves and twigs in his hair from getting shoved off the sidewalk. Midoriya looked cheery as a bee in spring. Only Katsuki could see the black vapor radiating off him, see his stand twitch slightly within his body, a few fingers or a stomping foot becoming visible for half a second. Come Uin, Kakin. Midoriya flashed him a winning smile with closed eyes, walking forward as bouncy as the breeze. Katsuki wasn't quite sure what made his friend snap, but it was clear he was at his wit's end. Hello, boys. A tall woman with a mess of black hair greeted them. She was wearing what could be best defined as a mix between a dominatrix and a leotard. Everything about her urged Pepsimon forward, his fingers twitching to wrap around her throat and see just how kinky this beach was. Showing up to a school in that idiotic outfit in front of 2 boys. I'll be your guide today. Thanks, MS. Midoriya busted out his formal titles in the sing-songy voice. Pepsimon had so much Hammond that the black tendrils started to coat him, dyeing his arm black as he prepared to Kakayo in the speech. Katsuki wrapped an arm over Midoriya's shoulders and dragged him forward. Calm down, man. Midoriya flashed a smile and nodded, Pepsimon's quivering slowing down and the black receding. The quivering rage, however, wasn't sated quite yet. A little enthusiasm isn't bad, cutie. She winked at them, and Eminem had to restrain Pepsimon, who instantly dove to put his foot 6 inches into her skull. Midoriya didn't even bat an eye as they walked along at his attempt to probably murder the speech. After physical harassment and verbal harassment, some sexual harassment was pretty much inevitable. They got escorted down the walkway until they were inside UA itself. They took twists and turns, with Midnight making a flirty comment every other step. Eminem had to play defensive, grabbing and pushing down the weaker Pepsimon. It seemed Eminem was chosen to be the stronger just to restrain Pepsimon some days. Eventually, though, they entered a nurse's office and got split up while they got measured. They were only 1 room apart, and Midoriya sent Pepsimon through the wall to keep track of Bakugo if this sit went tits up. However, nothing bad seemed to be happening to his best friend. No, the things that were going bad for Midoriya. The person measuring him clearly didn't have a effing clue what she was doing, and this didn't seem to be her real job. He borrowed Pepsimon when no one came to Bakugo to get some more info on her. She'd probably go over to him next, judging by how she started asking him some questions. So, how'd you get in? Do you have a quirk? The woman asked Midoriya as she pulled her tape measure a little too tight, squeezing his ribs. He was fine because of Hammond, but a normal person would be endangered by just how dumb she was. Made him want to pop her once in the head. If you don't know how I got in, I shouldn't tell you, miss. He practiced phrasing things nicely, pretending to be kind and nice. But if she didn't see how he got in, there was no reason to tell her. Please be a bit more gentle, my ribs aren't invincible. She barely got any more gentle, still tugging him about this way and that. You heard of all for one. ... Yeah, the 3 Musketeers quote. He learned some of the more generic quotes like that when he explored the world of JoJo around the world. The next part is, and one for all. She looked him over and nodded. I think I'll have my coworker finish while I go get your friend started. I hope you enjoy your stay here at UA. Midoriya. She shouldn't have known his name unless she was told it ahead of time, and she wasn't told by him. She said she didn't know how he got in though and didn't know who he was, but with that little name slip. The devil was in the details, like the badge in her wallet. A detective, one of the only jobs more useless these days than heroines. He sent Pepsimon through the wall as a real clothing designer came in and redid all the measurements properly. The detective, Tsukachi, asked Bakugo all the same questions, but he didn't have as many reservations. Seriously, be a little more distrustful. The problem was he was still riding the high of getting into UA. It'd be a while before he came to his senses. He didn't even notice Pepsimon in the room, rubbing his face. This was annoying. But what was that about all for one? It seemed to be a code for something. A villain, an organization. Wasn't his problem. Midoriya recalled Pepsimon and refocused when the real clothes designer said she was done and left to properly measure Katsuki. He put back on his mask and walked out, adjusting his usual clothes. Nothing ever fit, so it was at least going to be nice to have that. UA would cost money though, and that'd take from his supply. He tore it apart, trying to work out how much he'd need to save to still make the trip to Australia. Maybe he'd just be better off getting a job. Hey, how'd it go for you? Bakugo finished his actual measurements. I had to wait forever for someone to come, and she sucked. At least her buddy knew what she was doing. Felt like the first hag was trying to crush my wrist. Yeah. Midoriya smiled and started to wander out. Let's just leave. The bar has a special. We should be able to get dinner cheap if we rush. Fine, but we're not getting pork again. Katsuki grumbled, following after. That'd be the 7th time in a row. We're getting some diversity in this diet. They wandered out, content to stick with their own worlds. Well, neither one seems to have any connection to her. You can rest well, Tashinori. Detective Tsukachi smiled as she put back on her coat. Midoriya was very straightforward and didn't want to talk, but did know about all for one only as the quote. Bakugo only knew of it through Midoriya, and misquoted it. Tashinori relaxed a little. And the quirk. Bakugo said his quirk came randomly, and he wasn't even aware of how it worked at first. He did it once, thought it wasn't real, and took an entire day before he made another explosion. Still doesn't know how he got it. All truth. Tsukachi could tell when anyone was lying with her quirk. Neither boy had lied once. She knew Bakugo was dancing around something though. Midoriya might be just a bit upset that his friend got a quirk while he didn't. It was pretty surprising, after all. Nothing from Midoriya. Nezu's ears flicked. Nezu was more interested in Midoriya than Bakugo. He's a closed book. Sorry, it was a detective's job to read people. But Midoriya was so focused on something else it was hard to read. He hadn't even considered her statements and entirely focused on something else. Probably her bad job. She wasn't in the infiltration office. After all, disguises weren't her thing. Tashinori didn't focus as much on the detective's work, instead confused about who they were even talking about. Why was the second boy here? Did he demonstrate a quirk as well? Did you see Midoriya's score? Detective Tsukachi had a little research over both of them, supplied by UA, covering their performances during UA's entrance exam, such as their scores. Bakugo had the highest villain score in the whole year, and even entered the top 100 to ever take the test. The other boy, though, Midoriya. You never had me make a video for a Midoriya. Was he the other boy who came in, the green-haired one? Tashinori had to make videos for every single student who got into the heroics course this year, a little bit of hype since she'd be teaching heroics now. She had to make a lot of videos, but she remembered that she only made one video for a boy, so why did the other one come in? Did he fail to get into the course, but still show some sign of a quirk? Nezu nodded at Tashinori's questions. Midoriya beat the exam with only his fists, but somehow managed to destroy the internals of every robot he came across. Engines wrecked, wires pulled, the frames torn. All with his bare hands. That raised eyebrows. That didn't sound humanly possible. He even destroyed he stopped a 0-pointer single-handedly. I was hoping he'd be a little more talkative. It sounds like he might have a quirk too. Tsukachi wondered if the remark about the Three Musketeers was to throw off the lie detection now. Bakugo referenced that he had heard the line from Midoriya before. So do you know what all for none is? First hag asked me about it. Katsuki couldn't even bother to remember it. Midoriya opened the carry-out package and pulled out the chopsticks he brought with him everywhere. Regular chopsticks that he had broken until they were his size. Not a clue. They set it between them and got to eating while their stands began practicing again. Well, M&M started practicing again. Pepsimon had never stopped practicing. He was getting closer and closer to honing it, but he was starting to think his wasn't good enough. Now, he crushed metal and beat it slowly into a sphere. It was slow going, but it took immense concentration. The metal even got hot as he hit, but that was nothing to a stand. He crushed the fragment of metal into about the size of what had once been a base from back in the day. He didn't even bother with the pursuit of the truth, a power that was used in Part 10 by Jesus Christ and the devil. That one would take much longer to unravel, and he'd be better off practicing with his spin. If he used the pursuit of the truth, he could become a holy corpse, but that wasn't high on his to-do list. He'd rather get the evolution of power that came with it, but that meant he'd need to acquire a lot of power before then. His stand, hammer, and spin would all need to be in top shape before he tried to find his truth. He tossed checking the weight, then got back into hammering it. Before stopping, His head twitched slightly. Someone's coming. Bail. Both grabbed their things and moved as people approached. It was annoying, living like a rat, always on the run from people. Midoriya watched from the alley for a moment as some teens arrived, laughing and causing a ruckus. He knew some, he'd scuffled with them. Someday, they'd see who would be running like rats. Someday. Bakugo stood up blearily. His vision was red, and everything felt shaky. The results got announced in class. And what? How did he get here? Who was crying? He rubbed his head and summoned M&M, looking around. They littered the floor, practically carpeting it. They weren't dead, hopefully. They weren't dead, he wasn't sure. Dozens of bodies. Some went to the same school as him, their uniforms torn. Not one was still conscious, not after meeting him. The deep breathing, the completely happy expression. His face was red from blood people had spit on him as he beat them. The difference from usual is this wasn't his usual smile. Izuku Midoriya was enjoying beating up 40 women. A twisted smile like a monster from a horror film brought to life. He didn't even use his stand, just his bare hands as he slammed a classmate's head into the wall over and over and over and over. Hey. Bakugo lunged forward and yanked on Izuku, trying to pull his friend away from his latest victim. She's had enough. I thought so too, but she still attacked you today. His body was hot to the touch, overflowing with hamon. ... And no one would have stopped them if they did that to you, you know. You would have. Bakugo pulled Izuku back, then glanced around and really took in the scene. This was way past a street fight. The police might be on the look for them. Just calm down. Let's leave. Bakugo had been so close. He was so close to getting Izuku to UA, to showing him a better world. Sure, some people might be jackasses, but Midoriya needed to see that not everyone was a jackass. Because, if he didn't, Izuku might decide to use his stand next time. And Bakugo wasn't sure he could stop him. Yeah, if you're fine, Katsuki. Izuku had a black eye and a broken left arm, but it didn't even make him blink anymore. He nodded, then followed, his face as blank as white paint. He didn't regret what he had done, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat. Sheesh, why'd those beaches even do that? He spat blood, then wiped his face. Some dirt was still on it. Jealousy. Izuku's eye looked better already, and his arm was at least straight even if the bones weren't quite healed yet. All those girls were in the UA entrance exam and didn't seem to make the cut. Izuku's smile turned vicious as a spark of joy crossed his face from the genuine thrill. I can see why. It was like swatting flies. Bakugo didn't try to correct him. He knew a few things from following Izuku, and the first one was that nobody beat Izuku Midoriya. Izuku might not win, but nobody ever got one over on Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya drilled his throw to an art. It was beautiful. It was precise. It was powerful. Problem was, for all the things it wasn't the spin. He checked the money he got from his last haul while Pepsiman picked back up all the metal S, preparing for another round. Midoriya counted the bills he found inside wallets while Pepsiman began to spin the S on a finger. He had perfected the throw, so now he was trying other ways to generate the spin. Right now was spinning like a basket. He lined up Pepsiman's fingers, then started spinning. This was the key to his beginning, a start so simple it had to work. He had then seen a single spark from something other than Hammond and set about recreating it ever since. It didn't need to spin fast to generate energy. It needed to hit the golden ratio. And that would be hitting the at a certain angle on a certain curve so it entered the ratio. He'd been testing this for a while, but for all Pepsiman's precision, he couldn't spin S forever. He did drop them on occasion, and that was what the spares were for. Midoriya took a moment to adjust his mask, then recounted his earnings. Pepsiman had to restart spinning A, focusing entirely on it when BZZT. It wasn't loud, but it made Midoriya's head snap to attention. It took at least 10 consecutive spins to generate energy. Otherwise, people might do it by accident. He'd given Pepsiman 20 to give a little wiggle room, and it had paid off. Midoriya's face broke into a smirk, then a full smile. He snorted slightly, then chuckled. He finally laughed. He wasn't sure how long he laughed for. The sit was coming together. Midoriya sat straight back at the graduation ceremony, where he was stuck between a bunch of beaches. As an upside, despite his kind expression, it was obvious that not one of them wanted to be there. They all leaned as far away as possible, scooted chairs away, and didn't say a word. He spun a medal on a finger. It didn't look like anything special because, at the moment, it wasn't. It was much harder to create the spin personally instead of doing it with his stand. Pepsiman never got tired and could recreate a motion over and over. Midoriya didn't have those luxuries. He was supposed to be paying attention, but couldn't cease it from his row. Even if he could, he'd just throw a brick at the beach in the suit. Perhaps it was better for everyone that he was so far back. The speech ended, the speaker died, or some other miracle happened because everyone stood up and they all got to leave. It was his last day that he was forced to be here. It was fun to be infamous. People parted for him instead of crowding around him as he picked up Katsuki like parent and child, walking out with a genuine smile on his face. What do you want to do today, Bichigo? or free men. A round of drinks would be pretty good. Katsuki laughed back. Midoriya smiled until he continued. But that could get on our records, so we'll have to wait until we graduate from UA to do that. And some people thought he was the... Did this guy really have a spine? Bakugo was going soft for effing school. Not something useful. Someplace ran by beaches for beaches to create bigger beaches. Did Bichigo not remember what those asshats had done? Jack and Sit. Then why bring it up Bichigo? He looked towards the heavens. Dio, Pucci, Jotaro, whoever the F was watching. Give him patience because if you gave him strength he was gonna smack a dumb bass. How about we get some more Coke and sit at our favorite beach? Yeah. Did you turn down beer for Coke? Seriously. What was this world coming to? Midoriya shook his head, but couldn't help smiling. His bud might be weird, but he was his bud. He wrapped an arm around Bakugo's shoulders, ruffling his hair as they went to the store. The alarm went off, signaling to Midoriya it was time to close up his notes. He stopped playing with the metal S, checking his clothes. It was a nice fit for the shirt and pants. His sleeplessness was completely hidden by Hammond, his body looking fit as a fiddle. He gave one last check through his notes and adjusted his mask for a more friendly-looking one. It was a big day, and he wanted to make sure that, if nothing else, Katsuki enjoyed it as much as possible. Just do it for him, Midoriya. He nodded, checking himself out with Pepsamin. Not bad, wouldn't reflect badly on Katsuki. He left his room bright and early, not even sparing a glance back for the voice that crawled at him. So, you got in. It tore him apart. His smile cemented, looking happier than ever as Pepsamin's arms were dyed black with Hammond. You won't last a week. Perhaps. She was right there, so close yet so far. Pepsamin was coiled like a spring, ready to explode. He was so overflowing with Hammond it might have been visible even, a storm of black lightning. He didn't even want to go. But if there was one thing he had to say that was good about this, it was that it went against her. But either way, I'll last longer than you. He shut the door behind himself, smiling as he walked down the stairs so early. That was funny, he didn't remember it raining. Why did everything look so wet? Midoriya knocked on their door and gave a big smile. His mask gone so his happy face was actually visible this time. Hey, Mitsuki. Katsuki ready. He should be Izuku. Hey brat, hurry it up. Your friend's here. He smiled. Their relationship was so weird. They seemed to hate each other so much with the constant shouting, but they were still so close. Mitsuki leaned down, smiling at him. He might be a minute. How you doing? Your mom. We're doing fine, thanks for asking. He got used to lying, came second nature now. It was one of the lightest things he did these days, but it was one of the hardest. Violence wasn't personal, maybe that's why. She's still working, and I'm just happy to get into UA. Glad to hear it, Izuku. She flashed him a smile. You ever need any help, you know who to ask. What the F is that brat I? Hurry it up, brat. Midoriyad didn't come this whole way to talk to me, you know. Shaddup hag, I quote him coming. Katsuki had custom fit his uniform to not fit. What a Katsuki move. He didn't wear the tie, and the pants hung loose. Looked like Katsuki was still doing a little sewing on the side. Yo, you're here early. What's up? Bam. Is that how you talk to your mother, you brat? Damn right, hag. You little piece of... Midoriya sat on the side, smiling as he chewed on a protein bar, watching the kerfuffle. It seemed fun. Eventually, they shipped out to catch an early train and not get crushed. Sorry, sirs, but I'm gonna have to ask you to share a seat. Midoriya smiled as he sat next to Katsuki. He couldn't make a fuss, not today. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to take her money and break her phone. They sat side by side, Midoriya in his mask with his steel S and Katsuki in his delinquent-looking outfit trying to look tough. Then, she got back on. What, you losers made it in. Guess UA. Standards are slipping. Tail girl. Midoriya formed Pepsamin and broke her phone as naturally as he breathed, but didn't otherwise do anything. In public, ignoring was the best solution. Obviously, they let you in. Still homeless. Katsuki snarled, smirking. They had the same uniform on, well, she had a skirt. Otherwise, the same outfit. It's fine. Don't worry. Midoriya laughed gently, patting his friend on the shoulder. Thanks for being worried about us, ma'am. Have a fantastic day. He's such a positive twist it completely threw off her rhythm. It was pretty fun to see. Almost made up for not being able to flatten her. She sputtered and stalled, unsure of what to do next. The silence was a gift from Dio himself, with no more stupid one-liners. Until more people got on it started harassing them. At least Pepsamin got a lot of money that day. They stepped up to UA's entrance gate, some of the first people there. Midoriya was suspicious of everyone and even had Pepsamin stop punching to be on maximum alert. Some girls came by to laugh at them, but there weren't many people there. The looks of disgust were like music to Midoriya's ears. At this rate, he could get Katsuki to give up in just a week. The joy and hatred both made his smile bigger, even if you couldn't see his eyes. He walked confidently to their class, to find the door was too big to open on his own. The boys exchanged glances. "You up?" Midoriya got on Katsuki's shoulders, grabbing the door handle and opening the door finally, then sliding over Katsuki's head and landing inside the room, walking in like nothing happened. Then, those F'ers. Blue Beach with her hand chops was dominating the scene. The tail girl was there as well. Bakugo came in and both squinted for a second at the doorway, too short to be noticed. "We could still leave for Australia. Be on the plane in under an hour." Midoriya helpfully chipped in, but Katsuki walked straight past him to their new desks on the front row. They had custom seats for boys, but they looked like they were for effing babies. The classic high chair model that was designed to sit tall. Katsuki sat in his, then kicked his feet up. Not bad. It was at least better than their old chairs. Katsuki had taken the window chair, so Midoriya was stuck with the next chair over. Midoriya tested his, then began sorting his stuff right as people started giving them sit. "Aren't you two boys lost?" Tail girl snickered. "This is the hero course, after all." "Yup." Midoriya didn't give that one the time of day. That sit was obvious. He got back to practicing with his steel S, spinning two at a time to double his chance of success. You were the boy from the entrance exam, correct?" Blue Beach spoke now. He'd never gotten to beat someone up with a pair of glasses. Maybe he could break them and use them like a shiv. "Yup." Pepsimin rose like steam off his body, moving with a relaxed nature. He lined up his hand and began to search for her wallet. "I am very sorry. I did not understand the entrance exam as well as you did." She bowed from the hip, nearly headbutting him at the same time. It was obvious that a hero exam wouldn't just entail fighting, but in my rush, I completely missed the point. He blinked. Was this what it felt like when he pulled his innocent act? It completely derailed him. For a second, he was never without an answer. That was why he was Izuku Midoriya. Don't worry about it. You still managed to get in somehow, so what you didn't know didn't hurt you. Truly it was somehow. He knew his ranking in the class but didn't actually know his scores. But judging by what he did know on his end, getting in took a lot more than hitting a bunch of robots. More people came in and all took a glance at the two boys. Some looked at them with unfiltered disgust. Others more like they were looking at a pair of puppies than humans. He hated those looks. He could crush those beaches in a second without Pepsimin, and they had the gall to look at him like he was the weak one. Pissed him right off. Oh, another person came in. Midoriya didn't bother checking. If he saw one more pity face, he was going to end a beach. Izuku. That's the hag that shoved you in a tree." Katsuki fiercely whispered in his ear, pointing. Midoriya stopped for half a breath, then took another deep breath. Hammond filled him in Pepsimin, and his neck turned robotically. The person who just came in was a girl, obviously, but she had shoulder-length brown hair. A pink dot adorned each cheek. She had big wide eyes that just made you want to gouge them out. She was doing a nervous little dance, looking at him. He put on a big smile. This was great for him. After all, he didn't think he'd ever see her again. How was he going to beat her senseless if he couldn't find her? It's ... you. Midoriya took off his mask to show that big smile he practiced. But for once it was genuine. Clearly, Dio was with him. Was this fate? Had gravity pulled them together for this incoming beatdown? "Yup, it's me," Pepsimin informed, taking note of her address. "Damn, that was far. F that, he'd just beat her up in an alleyway." "Great, now that you all know each other, can you stop talking?" A third person spoke from the doorway, the floor in front of the doorway, to be specific. A yellow caterpillar was eating a woman who looked like she had only heard of sleep in strange tales. No, wait, that was a sleeping bag. It took you 20 seconds to get quiet. That's 20 seconds of my time you wasted. She stood up and ditched the sleeping bag as everyone hurried to take seats. "I'm Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. Now, we're supposed to have a welcoming meet, but that's another waste of my time. We're doing physical exams. Put on your gym uniforms, see you outside. Changing rooms are down the hall on the left for girls and for boys. There's a bathroom over there too. Use that." Midoriya took another breath out and added another face to the list. "Aizawa, right. Isn't this so cool? Sharing a one-person bathroom to get changed. We're actually here. It's actually a pain in the ass." Midoriya and Katsuki were crammed into the closest bathroom together. They were doing this to change into their hero uniforms because Yue didn't think to build a male changing room for the two boys in their hero course. Was Katsuki seeing something different from him? Everyone they hated and wanted to hit was here, and every new person they met he wanted to hit just as much. Midoriya shook his head and slipped into the uniform, noting that they didn't get lockers so they'd have to leave their stuff in the classroom. Whatever, he'd just rob anyone who touched their sit. He was already used to this. The annoying part was that, while most schools could fall back on the fact it was too expensive to design facilities for both, Yue was stacked. These bastards deserved whatever violence he could inflict when they started hero training. And even if he got kicked out on the second day, he'd make sure they suffered. Come on. Think we'll get to fight on our first day." Katsuki was excited as a kid in a candy store, and could still make Midoriya break out into a smile. He hoped not. He didn't want to get kicked out on Katsuki's first day, and he wasn't sure he could restrain himself well enough. Maybe Bud, maybe. Midoriya wrapped an arm over Katsuki's shoulder and walked out with him, side by side. Whatever Shicho Yue had planned, they'd crush it. They were in a big sports field, the kind for playing base or something. Midoriya looked over the scene, trying to guess what they were supposed to do. A friendly game of catch on their first day was unlikely. "All right, everyone," Aizawa spoke up while holding a. "You've done physical exams. Great, you already know what we're doing today. Difference is before you didn't get to use your quirk. But you're going to become heroes. You get to use your quirk this time." All the girls looked pretty happy at this, but Aizawa wasn't done. "Oh yeah, and whoever gets last is gonna get expelled. Don't stop on my account. Let's get this over with." "What? Oh thank God." The boys had the biggest reactions out of the students. Katsuki was some combination of nervous and infuriated while Midoriya felt confident, watching over the scene. All he had to do was get a better score than Katsuki. And if Katsuki got last and was expelled, Midoriya'd drop out in a second so they could ditch and do something actually useful with their lives. The problem was the other people here. He wasn't sure how good these other losers were. Women were naturally stronger, but some of these people looked like real losers. Seriously, if some of these people wanted to ever win in a fight, they'd need to hit the gym for a couple of rounds. They started off with running a timed dash, doing 2 people at a time. Midoriya and Katsuki were partners, possibly to show just how bad they were compared to the rest of the group. It was no surprise who was the slowest, especially when one of them was barely trying. Side-to-side jumps, grip strength, tons of things that favored the bigger girls. It was hilarious just how rigged it was. If Midoriya wasn't trying to get out, he might do some unfortunate things to the beach who was supposed to be teaching them well. Since she was such a beach, turning her kneecaps into history wouldn't be that unfortunate. Finally, the end of the test was coming. Midoriya was in 19th place and Katsuki was stuck in 20th, which was actually sad, since Midoriya was trying to fail. Izuku. Katsuki looked like he was having an existential crisis as he stared into infinity. Why's this so hard? Like, to do or to do well? Be more specific. Midoriya was smiling, but he was already picking out the girls who were laughing at them so he could tax them later. Nobody laughed at his buds and got away with it except him. They're all so good. Katsuki gestured to the final test. Throw. Everyone was getting triple digits in distance, showing just how good they were. Nah, this whole thing's just rigged. All of it favors physical quirks, but it also favors just being bigger. Plus, unlike the girls we're used to, these people are here because they're good, not because they were born in the same area as us. Midoriya kept to the facts, so that way he could better hide how badly he wanted them to fail. He was sorry, but they should fail here to succeed later when Katsuki was thinking clearly and had given up on the whole heroes thing. They could have nearly infinite power if they went on that trip Midoriya had planned, but instead they were here, bored out of their minds and getting discriminated against on their first day. Rigged, huh? No, Katsuki, don't do that expression. No stands. Remember the plan. Katsuki. Midoriya couldn't say anything though, because then it'd be obvious he was trying to throw the match if you could call this mess a match. He was stuck, smiling politely as Katsuki stepped up to the plate, picking up a that was too large to throw properly. He was glad he got their teacher's name because he was gonna pay her back for humiliating them like this. Katsuki held the with 2 hands, tossing it up and down to test the weight. Some of those girls were gonna pay for this sit, the hyenas who had the ass to laugh at his effort. Kinky, tail girl. Each one was going to throw hands with Pepsiman on their way home if he had anything to say about it. Eminem. He stepped forward, holding the with 1 hand. Eminem formed behind him, helping him holding their hands overlapping. Hand grenade. Barely anyone knew what he said as he took the final step and launched. First because of how quiet he was, but second because there was a big F-off explosion that sent the rocketing away, leaving the laughing girls and Midoriya shocked. Katsuki was forced back a step by his own force, his hands smoking from his stand power. He had detonated his sweat so much, he accidentally burned his hand a bit. How was that, hags? Katsuki looked so smug as he walked back, laughing and shaking his still smoking hand. The girls were still shocked, trying to figure out what just happened while Midoriya tried not to strangle Katsuki. He had one thing that he didn't want to do. That way they wouldn't put them on any watchlist or take them seriously. Katsuki had done it in the entrance exam, and he'd done it again here. It looked like he'd never be free of this sit. Bakugo smiled widely as he walked back beside his best bud. Izuku gave him a slight smile, encouraging him. Bakugo's own smile grew bigger as he patted Izuku on the back. He knew Izuku didn't want them to use their stands, but they might not get in if he didn't. All their work would be wasted. His hand hurt like a beach. He should have just used sweat probably, but those extra 200 meters bumped him up quite a bit. He'd experimented before and was getting pretty good at controlling his stand. Otherwise, he might have blown up his entire hand. All his work was paying off now. Izuku shakily checked the scoreboard, shaking with amazement. Bakugo knew the feeling. He had just shot up to the 5th best at shot put or whatever this was called, and his overall position went up 7 places, mostly because there were 5 people with a massive point advantage over everyone who had been soaking up all the big points until now. But hey, Izuku was quivering with excitement. Bakugo gave him another big smile and a pat on the back. Go get him, dude. Show these extras how good we are. Midoriya was shaking with rage. It was big, flashy, and everything he hated. Another plan went up in smoke, pun partially intended. He took robotic steps up and grabbed looking at it. The thing was about a foot in diameter and way too big to throw normally. Excuse me, he spoke with a smile and a sing-songy voice. Can I get a smaller? I can't properly hold this one. And I don't think that's the point of the test. By pointing out that the point of the test wasn't how well can you throw this, but how well can you throw an object. He could point out that the equipment was inadequate for him. Wasn't going to point it out for Katsuki. But it was too late to try and make him lose. Nope, that's the only size we have. Oh, I can make you one. Some big-titted beach stepped up with eyes glittering, all big smiles. Annoying. He couldn't even pin the school's uselessness against them because of her. He'd seen dozens like her, and every single one of them was pieces of shit in the end. She created a smaller from her arm for him and handed it off, then gave a new controller thing to the teacher. He tossed the around while the teacher and student talked, getting a feel for the weight. Pep, no, I don't need you. He didn't need to rely on outside powers to win this garbage. His effort alone could pull it off. Hours of training to make this as easy as possible, ensuring that this wouldn't look half as flashy as Katsuki's big boom. No one else was in touch with the spin well enough to see the sparks as the spun on his finger, generating its own energy before he even bothered to throw it. He didn't bother pulling out Pepsimin as he stepped up to the plate, the spinning on his finger already. Midoriya squinted while the rabble talked, trying to find something to throw at or some UA property to break to get back at them for the sit they were putting him through. Sensei, can I go now? Sure, Midoriya. She wasn't even subtle with not remembering his name. She was definitely doing this on purpose since she remembered Big Tit's name for some reason. He just slapped on a smile and faced forward, stepping up and launching. It looked way less impressive than other throws that day, but it was measuring where the stopped, not where it first hit the ground. This was for those quirkies, like the tail girl who hit with her tail. The spin ensured they kept on going for a while after what seemed a good throw. The best part of being compared to everyone else was how lame his throw looked. The spin was invisible to the naked eye, so no one could tell he had done something to make it go extra far. It wasn't flashy. And following the wonder that was Katsuki's performance, nobody paid him attention from shock. Those who were still talking weren't even talking about his throw, but about Katsuki's magic hands. He also went up a ranking, going from dead last to third to dead last. After making such a big jump in rank through such hard effort, he rejoined the rest of the students, smiling his best at their big teacher. What was her name? She was so forgettable and annoying, he already forgot. Everyone lined up to look at the finals with bated breath, although anyone who could do even basic math could tell where they were. Sensei Hypocrite said she didn't want any fanfare or whatever. But here they were with a dramatic reveal. Lying Beach. They stared up, and sure enough, Midoriya was still third from dead last. Who knew basic math would save the day? He shook his head and wondered if he could pick up a round or two on the way home when Sensei Hypocrite earned her name again. Oh yeah, nobody's getting expelled. That was just a ruse to make everyone try their hardest. Everyone was confused but mostly happy outside of one greenette, who was immediately grabbed by the closest thing he had to a friend. I knew this wouldn't be so bad. Right, Izuku? Katsuki had the good sense to stop when he saw Pepsimin rise from Midoriya's body, cloaked in Hammond. Midoriya's eyes stared out for miles. His and Pepsimin's arms twitched slightly. Roos, that beach was gonna expel us and she's got the S too. Oh, that edgy sit stain. Eminem had to restrain Pepsimin before it broke their teacher's neck. I calm down. Katsuki quieted down as he held Pepsimin and Midoriya back. They both readjusted, uniting and breathing deeply, while Midoriya couldn't give a flying F about getting in. This beach had the audacity to pretend she wasn't about to fail the guys if either got to the end. There were sexism and bigotry. And then there was this beach. He wondered if there were any clock towers he could punch her into with his stand, leaving a nice, big hole in her. Now, she pretended nothing would have come of it because nothing had gotten the chance to. She moved straight on and told them to get back into normal clothes and to go back to classes with nary a glance backward. What? She thought she was too good for them. Midoriya had his eyes closed tight to hide all the ending intent that he could barely restrain. While most people went off to get changed, he stayed behind to look at and see where it actually ended up. In a small ditch, there was a still spinning like a top. Through Pepsimin's gaze, he could see the energy radiating off making it easy to find. It must have been 2 whole minutes after the throw and it was still spinning. Incredible. If he could have gotten this good of a spin while he actually had free time. It was a shame it took so many tries to generate though. He had tried to create the spin at least a dozen times before he found his rhythm and threw the for real. Midoriya squatted down, smiling as he imposed a new spin on the, disrupting its old one and resetting it. With the spin disrupted, the wound down until he could safely pick it back up. Midoriya's smile this time was genuine as he studied, marveling as Pepsimon saw the energy that once had been overflowing from it pulled back in to fuel the spin before it finally ran out of energy and wound down to a stop. He only lifted when the energy was gone, marveling. The spin had many miraculous properties, and he'd need tests to find them all. Midoriya smiled to the sun, then refocused on tossing it into the air before heading back. Even if this sit was because of some edgy insomniac, something nice still managed to come out of it. His patience and sanity for results. That was a good trade. He stopped staring into the clouds and rejoined his classmates, still playing with and sporting a calm, casual smile. As soon as they got back to class, a certain someone was Mr. Popular. Everyone surrounded Bakugo, filling the once quiet spot that only had confusion and mocking comments before the exam with excitement. To his side, completely abandoning him, was Izuku, who just smiled and waved at him, completely cutting ties with the doomed boy while secretly laughing his ass off. He couldn't fool Bakugo. He knew when Izuku's grin was sarcastic and when it was sit-eating. And this was definitely the latter. These annoying extras were stopping him from talking with his best friend. He wanted to tell them all to piss off and die, but none of them could even hear him. He already said it 6 times, and nobody seemed to care. They were supposed to get to know each other better, but everyone was only looking at him and not even listening. Damn hags. Damn Izuku. Damn it. Midoriya had purposely moved his chair and desk away from Katsuki's for a bit of light punishment for dragging them into this sit. He had a small smile on his face and his eyes barely open, just enough to see the sit-storm Katsuki had set for himself. He had made his bed. Now it was time to lie in it. Midoriya's gaze switched from the boy that boomed to the surrounding women. Big, idiotic women. He loathed even touching them, so this did feel a little too cruel, but Katsuki didn't have as strong of feelings as he did, so he'd be fine. Pepsimon rose up, studying each of them in greater detail while he faked sleeping as to not be disturbed. His own senses went dark as his stand moved around inside his range, observing them and trying to get a read on each person while he, in his real body, took notes while pretending to be trying to sleep. He was able to get a good chunk of them before someone bothered him, who he elected to ignore rather than talk to, namely because his mood wasn't good enough yet to ensure he wouldn't end anyone. Besides, it was Pink Cheeks. If he had to talk to her, he might turn her face pink, black, and blue for punting him into a tree. She had the good sense not to bother him, just looking him over for a minute before moving on. Pepsimon was ready to deck her in the face before she left, watching her leave until slinking back into a neutral position and checking the time. The class was supposed to stick around and get to know each other, but he'd been through enough hazing in his life, thank you very much, and would be leaving early. Midoriya slid from his chair, picking up his bag and making a beeline for the door while signaling to Katsuki with Pepsimon. Since no one else could see stands, using them to talk to each other was the perfect way to never be overheard. Katsuki struggled to bail, the popular bastard, but with a little unseen help from Pepsimon discreetly shoving people around, he managed to give them the slip and break into a run, catching up with Midoriya, who both sprinted away. Is that why you wanted to use kamikaze, Mr. Popular? Somebody's loved by the ladies, eh? Midoriya couldn't help giving him sit for the classroom scene. It was just too well set up. Not making fun of him, for it would be a violation of everything Midoriya stood for, which wasn't that much all things considered. Oh, shut up. Katsuki looked pissed, which just made it funnier. Normally, nobody would have thought they could outrun the girls, but those beaches hadn't been born running. They hopped through the stairwell railing, catching themselves with their stands for a safe landing before readjusting and continuing to run. They went from their classroom to the front path in under 2 minutes, sprinting all the way. Come on, catch up or give up, boomer. Midoriya kept taking potshots at Katsuki, making sure to always stay close while just slightly ditching him. This pissed Katsuki off and made him run even harder. Talk big all you want. I'ma beat that dumb smile off your face when we get to the beach. That made Midoriya laugh harder, which pissed Katsuki more, and so the cycle continued. They sat at the beach, each to his own can. Katsuki drinking cola while Midoriya had a light beer, shaking their heads at their friend's choice. Aye, not bad for a first day, huh? I knew you enjoyed being Mr. Popular. Aye, that's not what I meant. Katsuki had stood up to shout, but simmered down while sitting down. It wasn't too bad, right? It was god-awful. I want to cap every one of those beaches. Midoriya didn't beat around the bush, playing with his beer can. Total horseshit, and rigged against us. If they want to get rid of us, let's beat it and go somewhere people give a shit about us. Let's make them give a shit about us. Bakugo, I love you. You are a closer family than my own mother. Please, for the love of God, shut up. If we do good enough, they can't help but see we belong there. I might want to see how they teach students to fight. Midoriya took a different angle since he could see this wasn't getting anywhere. Could be useful, I guess. Yeah. When Midoriya threw him a rope, Katsuki quickly latched on. We'll learn all sorts of cool shit together. Just you see. Today, we will be doing combat training of heroes versus villains. All Might laughed hysterically, and Midoriya watched to punch her in perfect teeth and see how her confident smile looked then. Combat training. Martial arts. Nothing. Pepsiman and Midoriya twitched as they stared up at her. Is this a school or a deserted island? Because it's got the same level or organization. Go put on you hero outfits and meet me at City B Girls. Oh, and boys. All Might then blitzed off, leaving Midoriya to stew in his rising indignation. He tried to take deep breaths, but only generated more Hammond to beat everyone senseless with. Second day here, and already they wanted them to fight. No training in their hero training class. No going over the rules in the classroom before they hit the streets. His old gym teacher had a better handling of her class than this, and she hated his guts. Ka-chan. Midoriya slid from his chair, sliding an arm over Katsuki's shoulders and pulling him close as they went to get changed. I hope we're gonna be together. Why? Katsuki could feel the heat radiating off Midoriya as he generated more Hammond than his body could store, letting it radiate off him underneath his coat. If you looked closely, you could see a thick darkness radiating from under his shirt, eating the light with his black sun technique. Cause I'm gonna need you to make sure I don't cap a beach. Midoriya's smile seemed genuine as it spanned ear to ear, showing teeth. He couldn't wait to topple these giants. Midoriya could take potshots about how this would be rigged before the almighty moron even finished reading the rules out of the goddamn book, proving she had no clue what she was effing doing and just following instructions from someone else. 2 teams of 2 people. One had to defend a bomb and the other had to attack. Winning meant either grabbing the bomb or taking down everyone on the other team. If you thought about it too hard, only doing one side was unfair. It was much easier to be attacking and only have to reach the bomb or take both people out than defend the bomb and take 2 people out. Defense had more ways they could fail. And some people would probably only have powers that were good for one side. They should have switched sides after, or done the opposite side the next day. That way they could see how good they were offensively and defensively, getting a grade over both and being told how they could improve in different fields. But that took 10 seconds of thinking. And if these beaches were gonna put in that much effort. Midoriya already knew he'd either be with or going against Katsuki. It was rigged for sure, and they just wanted the dynamic dipsits to fail. If they kept doing good though, they couldn't. Normally, Midoriya'd just take the fail and bail, going off to do more important things and end anyone they sent to investigate them, but this was just taking the piss. If he went versus Katsuki, he'd drag down his teammate so Katsuki could shine. If he went with Katsuki though, he'd help him shine while taking the backseat. Nobody would even remember he was there until he broke some dipsit's teeth. He just shut up and listened, working out his plan. Team A, Izuku, Midoriya, and Katsuki Bakugo. Don't throw out our first names like that. You don't know me, we're not buddies. Even just her mentioning his first name pissed him off. Midoriya would have glared daggers at All Might, his eyes were open. But instead he was smiling like $1,000,000 as he thought about cutting off those stupid bunny ears of hers. They didn't even bother hiding how rigged it really was, with them getting put together first before any of the other groups. Now, for the matchups. Midoriya zoned back in, hand unconsciously patting his notes from before. He listened and watched the beaches in his class F around all day yesterday, and had the gist of what everyone's SH tick was. Everyone used their powers for their physical exam, giving him plenty of material to study. He had a page at least on everyone, and now he was going to use it to tear these dumbasses apart. Team D versus Team A. He glanced through the groups, eyes locking on Tenki and Biki. He tapped Katsuki on the arm and pointed with just a nod to the targets. Katsuki tapped him back once to show he saw. Gruppa was playing the heroes, so they'd have a minor advantage at least. He intended to take full use of that advantage. All right, everyone else, to the observation room. Villains, to your places. Heroes, wait 5 minutes, then enter. Good luck, girls. She didn't even bother to include the guys that time, leading the class away while the villains took time to set up, and the villains with licenses were stuck outside, waiting on their asses to do anything. Midoriya didn't look happy at least. He just looked bored as paced around the building with the papers the hero team was given, checking everything thoroughly through his binoculars. Katsuki leaned back at the side with the most windows, keeping a bead on the last sighting of the girls so they could guess what floor they were on. I haven't seen them move on from the 6th yet. It's possible they're leaving the bomb there, but only if they're stupid. Since we know they are, it's easy to follow through with that logic. Midoriya bashed the girls as casually as he breathed, enjoying the fact they didn't have earpieces small enough for the boys and Big Tits didn't volunteer to pull more technology out of her ass, so they could say whatever they wanted. They're putting it as close to the top as possible, so we'll enter through the roof. We won't even need to set foot on the ground to win this. How we gonna get to the top? Katsuki was smart, but he was a practical thinker with little experience. In about 2 or 3 months, tops, he'd be able to answer that question easily. remember how you said you could fly with M during the entrance exam? You're gonna get up there with this rope and throw it down for me. It should be 100 feet, so it won't go all the way, but it'll be good enough. Midoriya took the equipment out of his bag and handed the rope over, cursing that it wasn't the kind he ordered. Damn cheapskates. The two were wearing their outfits for the first time. And by God did Katsuki's look hilarious. It was just M's outfit with Robin's mask and spiky hair barrettes. He had some small grenades at his sides that he slipped small parts of himself into, finishing the design himself. The whole design was pretty bottom-heavy, missing M's signature giant grenade arm guards, but it was probably much more functional for a real human to skip those. They didn't even do anything, so no reason to copy them. Midoriya's outfit was just a jacket, a backpack filled with useful stuff, and his breathing restraint mask, way easier to replace if damaged, lighter, and interchangeable depending on the season. He made sure the jacket was so thin and light it didn't get in his way while being made of organic material for, well, those beaches were about to learn some lessons about Hammond. While they planned out where to go, Midoriya generated Hammond to put into his storage. The Hammond BR. That was annoying. The breather forced his Hammond to be more pure, full of more energy for every single breath and helped him develop his lungs. He had even gotten Bakugo to wear the thing a few times since it wasn't that painful. The big baby. He shook his head, smirking, and checked the time. It was time to get to work. Move it or lose it, Bichigo. See you in a minute, Motherfia. Bakugo took a running start and then blew straight to the top. It was fun to watch, he had to admit. He checked the timer, wondering if they should take a snack break before crushing the other team, but no. He'd do that when he finished up. Maybe he'd just ask if he could go to the nurse's office because of a stomachache. Then just punch people with Pepsimin for an hour for kicks. That always brightened his day. His thoughts of how to waste his afternoon in this sitcho were cut short when the rope came over the ledge and dangled. It was 100 feet long and the building was 6 stories tall, which meant he'd have at least 60 feet to climb. 28 feet in a floor and all, with those tall jackasses. It was looking more like he had 80 feet to go through, but he could work with that. Midoriya took a running start and jumped onto the building, releasing Pepsimin to help him climb. Pepsimin would appear above or below him, either grabbing a support structure to anchor himself and grabbing Midoriya or anchoring then pushing Midoriya higher and higher until he reached the rope and climbed the rest of the way up. So, by putting the bomb on the second to top floor where the boys will have to run through almost the entire length of the building, the villains are ensuring an easy victory. The boys will have difficulty in even getting up the stairs, defeating the girls, or investigating the building. Combine all those difficulties. Momo left the rest unsaid, looking back at the screen. Oh, yes, I COULD and have said it better myself. All Might really couldn't, because she didn't think that far ahead. Momo's analysis was so focused not even all the students understood it. Hey, Momo, you analyzed everything right. Mina squinted at the cameras, checking each to make sure she didn't miss anything obvious. Yes, I believe so, but to analyze everything is quite difficult, so I most likely missed some minor details. Why? Where are the guys then? They didn't even put cameras up here. Midoriya had broken into his fair share of buildings, and through the roof was always an easy start. He lay on his back now to give Pepsimin as much room to explore as possible inside, checking for entry points for them and scouting the place. It seemed that the beaches weren't on the 6th floor, but they were close. Pepsimin could hear them from its position, talking. However, this was a chance to give Katsuki sit. He couldn't resist. He physically couldn't. You were off by 1, Bichigo. They're on the 5th. Shut up, Motherfia. Damn, his nickname was long. Ichigo and Bakugo were pretty close, but his nickname was kind of a stretch. They'd have to work on it after they won. Go to the bottom and make some noise, and the match will be over in a minute, tops. Midoriya stood up and chose his entry point, dropping 1 floor and catching the ledge with what seemed casual ease. In reality, though, he just summoned Pepsimin inside the building and had the stand catch his real body while he grabbed the ledge, using his stand like an anchor or grappling hook to make sure he didn't fall off the building. Then Pepsimin opened the window from inside while Midoriya pretended to fiddle with the window and entered the building, going straight for the AC system and out of the camera's vision. It was easily big enough to crawl through if you were willing to break some collarbones. And with Hammond, that wasn't even a question anymore. 2 snaps and he was in before the cameras even got a glimpse of him. Bakugo caught himself from faceplanting and entered the main door, pulling out M to power walk beside him. They were the same height, wore the same clothes, and walked the same confident stride. Together, they'd blow this whole floor to bits. He glanced around, ing a finger and checking an imaginary wind while M prepared for the boom. He paced the room, trying to find the best starting point. While Izuku had done tons of experiments with weird sit, Bakugo had been nailing down how to use his stand effectively and safely. There were places to put explosives for maximum impact, and he wanted everyone to feel this so Izuku would know when he started. They didn't have headsets for people as small as them, so he'd improvise. He picked a support beam and placed the Ed finger against it, bracing his arm as Eminem entered the scene and punched his hand. Eminem's hand went through his, hitting the spit and kaboom. The building shook at the first impact, the support beam being mostly blown apart with a little bit still standing. Bakugo tapped it, enjoying that he couldn't hear the teachers yelling at him like they probably were. He might be a fan of All Might, but she definitely wouldn't like this. It was unnecessary damage. Well, it seemed unnecessary, but it was really essential. He had to get those beaches' attention so Izuku could work his magic. He had no doubt Izuku would pull it off. He just needed to hold his end up. Bakugo worked his shoulder, glancing around, then at his other finger with casual ease as he put a hand to his ear to listen for anyone coming. Nothing. Nobody. Time for another bomb then. Midoriya crawled through the air vents, admiring the lack of dust and attention to detail. He had assumed once he saw how much effort they put into the cities and robots for the entrance exam that these holes were just burning their money. And sure enough, the level of detail here was beyond perfectionist. It was just pretentious. Made his plan even easier. Pepsiman hovered through the halls below him, constantly looking this way and that for the girls. He found the two of them by the stairwell, debating which one should investigate the explosions downstairs. You can run down quickly, take down the blonde one, and then come right back. Perhaps I can, but his explosions seem formidable. Besides, will you be comfortable guarding the bomb on your own? Kiki was still doing hand chop motions, outlining where they hid the bomb for Pepsiman. They were so considerate when they weren't trying to be. Pepsiman strolled on over to that bomb like it was a nice Sunday afternoon and grabbed it, checking the weight. When he was confident he could move the hollow bomb, Pepsiman glanced around the ceiling to find the nearest vent out of the AC system and into the room, then slowly moved the bomb underneath it. Didn't even take a full minute. The girls didn't even leave the room yet as he undid the vent, quietly sliding down until he was on top of the bomb. He hugged it, wrapped the capture tape around it, and even started to write his name in it when the girls finally started to notice something. It's not like the bomb is going to move itself. Ada, don't worry. Just go quickly and I'll stay here with the bomb. Both girls looked at Midoriya, who had a calm and lazy smile as he rested on top of the bomb. Dodgy, and they had to end the stupid test then. Katsuki got to flex his power while Midoriya sat in the back, taking it easy. The girls hadn't done anything at all, since they underestimated their opponents too much. Think they got any good footage of us? Katsuki asked, pulling behind the very confused beaches to talk with Midoriya. Probably not. I was trying to avoid cameras most of the time. Some of us don't show off everything we can do, so people just have to do a little research, after all. His fake smile let Katsuki in on exactly who he was talking about with that one. But you should be talked about at least. Looks like next time we might get those earpieces, and this might get a little harder. A little, Katsuki smirked, lightly punching him in the shoulder. So every word out of your mouth is bullshit. You're just figuring that out now. Midoriya's smirk became just a touch genuine as he wrapped an arm around Bakugo's shoulders, messing with his hair. Least you figured it out. These beaches wouldn't get it if I told them to their faces. Remember, Katsuki, it's just you and me. Don't lose sight of that. Midoriya made eye contact with that point, drilling it home. This whole adventure might be fun and all, but at the end of the day, it's still just me and you. I know. Katsuki laughed it off, smiling. Might just be you and me, but it can be a fun trip with just us anyway. Midoriya nodded, patting him on the back and standing straight. Speaking of fun trips, O'Reilly's got a special on those pork rinds. No more pork, no more bacon, nothing from a pig. Katsuki started shouting at him, extremely passionate about this. We've eaten enough pigs for a whole farm. We're gonna eat something else. Except bacon, actually. Bacon's fine. Damn straight. For a minute there I thought you went nuts. Midoriya and Katsuki exchanged jabs as they went back to their class, laughing all the way. Midoriya didn't even try to pay attention as they got to the observation room. These fights could give some good information, but he could predict how most of them would go. And besides, he had Katsuki to throw under the bus. Hey, Katsuki, can you record the next fights? I'll let you choose where we eat next. Deal. Katsuki went in while Midoriya stayed back. Sensei, I might go to the nurse's office after that difficult and challenging fight. He spoke just loud enough for the cameras to catch it, even if the almighty dipsit couldn't, turning on his heel and leaving without ever going in. Hey, you're ditching me again. You're getting a meal out of it. Enjoy it. He wasn't the least bit guilty about this. Katsuki wanted to be a big famous hero. Then Midoriya would make him so famous Katsuki himself would come running to him with how they should beat it and make some tracks. He moseyed on out of the observation deck, going back to the main body of the school with a song in his heart. It was a beautiful day, and nobody would really notice if he cut class. All he had to do was leave the campus instead of going to the nurse's office. Well, whoops, looks like his legs took that thought as an order. Shame he didn't have any reasons to refuse it, trying and failing to whistle as he walked to the front gate. For all the magic bullshit he learned how to do, he still hadn't cracked how to whistle. Damn shame. Hey, what happened? I don't know. The green one was just on the bomb. I don't even know when he got there. Classes was still doing the hand choppy sit, couldn't even be bothered to remember their names. He was trying to be optimistic here for Izuku's sake, to show him the better side of the world. But his poker face was leagues worse. The green one. Holy sick glasses. It's amazing someone who looks as much of a smartass as you can be such a dumbass. Now that Izuku wasn't there and he wasn't recording audio, he could say whatever he really wanted. He made sure his phone had a good angle of the screens, not even looking at glasses as he spoke. No wonder he didn't need me to do anything. Either one of us could take both of you extras down. Hey boy, shut your mouth. You didn't even do anything. It seems he also managed to avoid the cameras, so the best they would have gotten was the sound and the shaking from his attack. He pried his eyes off his phone, looking over everyone to find who said that. Tail girl. He saved her life twice now. He could spare a second to get even. You want to fight? Just step out and throw down. He was frozen like a statue except for his eyes, burning a hole into her. Didn't want to mess up the footage, otherwise Izuku would F him up as much as he was about to F this beach up. Hey, she wasn't scared, just amazed at how idiotic it seemed. He did show some weird power, sure, but she wasn't afraid of what she didn't understand. Damn shame. I got a match next. But when I'm done, I'll be happy to show your ass to the nurse's office right after your little buddy. Katsuki scowled, not at the comeback, but when he realized Izuku was definitely not going to the nurse's office, since he probably didn't even know where that was. The dog-tailed beach left, right as Katsuki realized that he had no idea what kind of creature actually had a tail that looked like hers. Midoriya made it all the way to the gate before he noticed the edgy sensei. That didn't rhyme as well as he planned. He'd have to work on it. Maybe if he mashed the words a bit, like saying edgy sensei, then it rhymed. Yeah, that would work. Midoriya was barely paying attention to what's her face as he tried to walk straight past her without giving her so much as a shred of attention. But he ran into an outstretched leg. He innocently looked up, flashing that winning smile he patched together through trial, error, and way too much time in front of a mirror. Sensei. He just said the edgy part in his heart, but even without that little dig at her, she looked pissed. Why? She was the one who was a total beach, blatantly trying to get him and Katsuki kicked out, but she managed to F even that up. This beach was lucky there were cameras or else he'd give her a first-hand experience in flying without a plane. Mido. It's Midoriya, I knew that. They both had a nice, long stare down. Well, she had a stare down. Midoriya stayed focused and just kept trying to move around her, but she blocked the whole way. For a girl, she was doing a great job at being a D. Do you want to say something? Yesterday you were trying to get us to leave, now you're not letting me. He didn't have to say specifics, they both knew what he meant. The way he said it felt like a joke, but he was taking serious jabs at her. Harassment wasn't supposed to happen, especially in a place as big as this, but since God hadn't come and fixed everything with a snap of his fingers, it still did. It's not safe for boys to be heroes. I've seen a lot of things happen in the field. That was horseshit. She was 22. And that meant she'd been out in the field for only 4 years, with 3 more years under her belt if you counted her time as a student at UA. She might be tired as F, but he had stolen her license and knew her age, despite her ungodly appearance that suggested she only heard of sleep in abstract tales and myths. Things go wrong, and people get hurt if they're lucky. That was true. She was very unlucky, cause she was picking a fight with one of the only 2 guys he knew who could whoop her ass with all his limbs tied behind his back. Look, I'm supposed to be a hero. I don't like people endangering themselves. I know that you have your first fight today and you might think it's unfair, but you shouldn't run away. There will be more fights ahead. And it's better if you quit now. She could read his bewildered expression. Did you already fight? Is the other boy all right? Or is he in the nurse's office? Her facade of boredom cracked, showing the genuine concern that was hiding underneath. Midoriya laughed, more genuinely than he had in years. He patted her on the leg, walking straight past her. She did prove that the thing was rigged, since she knew that if Katsuki and he would be paired together despite not knowing how their match went. Don't worry, Teach. We already won. Thanks for the concern though, miss. He kept laughing as he walked out, thinking it over. He got about 20 yards before she stopped thinking over his words and realized he was skipping school. I'll have to check to make hay. Hey, get back here. Bakugo got a good laugh out of seeing the not dog-tailed beach losing in a literal instant. Just one shot and she got froze in place. Funniest sit he'd seen all year. Aw, the dog got the sniffles. He took exchange jabs with her, snickering as he kept on recording for Midoriya. That match was even shorter than theirs with a one-shot victory. One of their classmates freezing the entire building in barely 10 seconds. He would have to keep an eye on that half-and-half girl for his bud. Shut up, boy. No snappy one-liners this time as they focused on the screen. Well, as she shut him out and refocused on the screen, the next group had the nerd with big tits in it, so she suggested they start heading out early and pick the next team when the current one came back. Bakugo, on the other hand, didn't care about watching some idiot set up defenses and instead looked around the room. He wasn't big into tech. It wasn't built for people his size, but this sit looked pretty advanced. Most people were talking with each other, focusing on the screens and the matches ahead, or not paying attention to exercise at all, just sitting back and talking to each other. What was the point in coming to UA if you were just gonna sit in the corner and not pay attention? A few people noticed their homeroom teacher come in, looking over each person before locking onto him. He stepped on his urge to scowl and tried smiling at her, but he knew it didn't work out well. She walked toward him, looking extremely angry for some reason. They didn't even have her class today, so what was pissing her off? You're not injured, are you? She gave him the once-over, but he was fine other than his fingers being a little crispy from his own explosion. He'd have to check up with the costume department on that one later. No, his homeroom teacher nodded and turned, locking onto All Might with that piercing glare and stomping over to discuss something. They whispered back and forth for a minute, gradually getting louder before their homeroom teacher got louder and All Might got defensive the longer the conversation went. It almost turned into shouting before their homeroom teacher stopped dead, looking across their class while scowling. When this class finishes, we'll finish this conversation. He was really trying to remember her name, but he kept drawing a blank. Oh well, Bakugo wasn't too concerned. He just had to focus on recording the fights, not on the drama behind the scenes. Aizawa glared down at All Might, not bothering to hide her contempt. So, could you or could you not see the boys for their entire battle simulation? Well, we could see the She snuck a glance at her roster, checking names quickly. We could see Bakugo at the end. At the end, Aizawa crossed her legs and arms, staring All Might down as she glared at criminals when she was interrogating. So you only knew where one of them was for half the time and didn't have a clue where the other one was the whole match. Aizawa didn't try to hide that she wasn't learning their names. She didn't think they'd last, even if she didn't understand how one created explosions from his hands. That was currently being investigated by their mutual boss, although she didn't know what they were looking for. It made sense to her. Quirks had arrived randomly and been given to women. Now the flip side was happening and men were starting to catch up. Soon, men might evolve the same way women did. But that would be generations down the line. For now, Tenya Ada could snap one of those boys in two with one kick. Did you know that? Her eyes narrowed as she snarled at All Might. They could die from a lot of things and are at constant risk. You need to be in control of the situation from the word go. You should have told the boys you couldn't find them and postponed the fight. Toshinori, why are you finding your shoes so interesting? They didn't get communicators. Toshinori, who couldn't be considered in any way, shape, or form All Might at the moment, was finding the floor fascinating as Aizawa chewed her out. She could see out of the corner of her eye as Aizawa leaned forward. Not only couldn't you find them, not only do you not know how the fight went, you couldn't even talk to the boys. Toshinori wasn't in her muscle form anyway, but Aizawa seemed to involuntarily activate her quirk, either for effect or on instinct. Are you trying to get them ended? I do know how the fight went. The blonde one blew everything up. Well, yes he did, but that was on the first floor. The green-haired one somehow got to the bomb in the first minute and captured the bomb. Aizawa blinked and thought back to the little devil who'd been trying to skip classes. The green-haired one. Did you see him use any special powers like the blonde one? He had been oddly confident when she asked about the fight, and it made sense that he had a quirk too. Both boys managed to get into UA, and had gravitated toward each other. Did they know each other outside of school? She had been so concerned about the boys' safety, she hadn't properly investigated their background. I don't think so. You don't think so? Ugh, this is pointless. I'll just check the footage. Aizawa leaned backward, rubbing her head. Next time Toshinori, just think, alright. Step back, take a second, and think. An excellent idea, you two. Nezu popped up from beside the two girls, a big smile plastered across her small face. She was one of the only, she was the only person in UA, smaller than the boys. Remember both of you, Class 1 has 20 students, not 18 students and 2 special cases. I don't want to see any prejudice against those boys. After all, they worked harder than anyone else to get here. Nezu made eye contact with the two teachers as she spoke to drill home her message. Besides, those boys, whose names are Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya, might surprise you. They're not as fragile as they might appear. Midoriya ambushed Katsuki at the front gate, wrapping an arm around him, shoving the drink in his hands. Hey, you survived. How was it, Mr. Popular? You beating them off with a stick yet? Oh, shut up. It's your fault, you know. Katsuki rolled his eyes, pointing the can at Midoriya before opening it. The can burst open, Midoriya's plan backfiring as he got splattered with soda. Tasty. Midoriya laughed it off, keeping his momentum going forward. What? People asking you about the power you were so happy to show off. Isn't that what you wanted? You know what I mean. Katsuki shook his head, focusing ahead of them as they walked through the crowd of people. You ditch me the second you get the chance. What gives? I told you, I don't want to show off. I made my plan, and I plan to follow the plan. Should have planted your plan more firmly. Or better yet, planned a plan. Now you're just effing with me. Damn straight. The two fell quiet for a moment as they walked before exchanging glances and snickering. Katsuki broke the comfortable silence first. You're gonna need help cleaning off. That uniform might cost a pretty penny at the dry cleaners. I'll just hammer it. No harm, no foul. Already, Midoriya was using Hammond to force the liquid out of his clothes before it could stain. Seriously, people who said that the spin was better than Hammond were nuts. You got good enough at it and you basically had a liquid manipulation quirk for free. He used Hammond to collect the liquids, forming a string of soda that he played with. It took a lot of Hammond to sustain, but wasting tons of Hammond for the F of it was great practice. He began to create a cat's cradle with the cola, spreading out his focus. Hammond had to be released from a certain part of the body, and the smaller the point the better. For example, for the liquid string trick, he'd get as small a point as possible on his finger and release the Hammond from there. The cat's cradle forced him to release Hammond from multiple points and fine-tuned his control. Took a lot of focus to sustain, and even more energy. Seriously, how are you doing that? Oh, wanna learn Hammond now, Katsuki? Keep dreaming. Here in reality though, I get to choose the next place we eat. Midoriya rolled his eyes, but followed along, playing with his soda string as Pepsiman kept moving in the background, picking loose change in loose pockets. Midoriya was relaxing in Katsuki's living room, playing with a medal and trying to get a good spin going. But after 17 tries wasn't getting even a sit spin started. Pepsiman looked around the room checking for Katsuki while Midoriya talked to Mitsuki. Out of all the people he had to put up with, she was both one of the most violent and one of the nicest. It was an odd balancing act, and he wasn't sure how she pulled it off so well. Heard you're planning a trip already. Go anywhere fun with anyone fun. She smirked as she elbowed him, but he just modestly smiled and shook his head. Just hopping Katsuki could come with me right now for a fun buddy trip. We'd be gone for a week, and I've got all the finances already planned out. So responsible already. Inko's raising you well. He smiled, lied, and nodded along. Whole week, and how don't you have a girl yet? You're a guy, and unlike somebody your personality isn't doxit. If she only knew. Oh well, maybe someday. You shouting about me, hack? Katsuki shouted from the stairwell, hopping down with his signature scowl slapped on. You're late to come down, you're late to this conversation, and you're late to leave. Don't you know how to read a clock, brat? They shifted into arguing like most people shifted into their beds, without so much as a second thought. Midoriya meandered over to the door, slowly leading the other two over so that they could get a move on sooner. As fun as this was, it was a little awkward to just sit between them while they argued. Eventually, they slipped out and Midoriya could start messing with Hammond again. He picked up some of the dew off the grass, forming his liquid string and spinning it around while they walked. Izuku, how you liking UA? Here they could have had a nice quiet walk to school, and Katsuki had to run his mouth about something stupid like that. There's still time to back out and go to Greenland. Just 1 week, and we wouldn't have to put up with this blatant bullshit. None of our teachers want us there, and I agree. Midoriya shared his real thoughts for the first time in a while, taking his eyes off the liquid string and locking onto Katsuki to hammer his point home. Yeah, it's pretty bull. Katsuki couldn't run from that fact. Midoriya smiled a bit now that Katsuki was acknowledging it, but he wasn't born yesterday. Katsuki wasn't agreeing. But that's why we gotta deal with it. That's why we've got to change it. We're the only ones strong enough to change it. Seriously, we haven't graduated yet. At least keep off the cheesy speeches until you get your license. Midoriya rolled his eyes, hopping onto the metro to ride down to school. With a little luck, they'd be one train before the tail girl, but with a little luck, they'd have been born 200 years earlier. Midoriya kept out of their arguing since Katsuki was so good at it. He knew when his friend needed help, and that wouldn't come in a battle of wits. For every insult Tail Girl could think of, Katsuki had 7 more. Didn't hurt that they both had heard all of Tail Girl's material before. If they heard it once, they heard it 1,000,000 times. At least the arguing made the trip there much more fun and gave him plenty of time to swipe more cash while people around them were distracted. Seriously, even when Katsuki didn't try to help Midoriya out, he still did. What a bro. Midoriya only used Pepsiman's arm for stealing because anything more would be excessive. He was trying to have some finesse with his use of Pepsiman. He didn't want to be like those heroes who just threw around their powers with no concern, but have complete control at all times. A weak but well-controlled power was by far better than a strong but rampaging power. That finesse was why he was constantly multitasking, so he could work under stress with a calm and collected mind. Micromanaging while everything was calm would make it easier to do in moments of distress. That's why he was still trying and failing to spin this stupid metal that kept slipping as the train rocked up. Seriously, Gyro could do this on a horse goddamn. This wasn't impossible. He just had at it. Midoriya glanced between Katsuki and Tail Girl, counting all the people who donated to his funds to go to Greenland. It was their stop next, and if they weren't ready for it, they'd probably get left on the train. Not like anyone would care. He gave Katsuki a quick tap on the back as he stood up in the chair, stretching. It was a long ride and he hadn't managed to get a single good spin going. He couldn't do it on the moving train and without Pepsimin's help, as lame a stand name as it was. Giving up already, ding. Tail Girl got interrupted by the arrival announcement. As funny as her expression was, Midoriya dragged Katsuki through the doors before they could get caught in the crowd and pulled him through the people preparing to get on. He ran like experience trained him to, like if he got caught there was going to be a fight. The threat of pain made him an excellent runner, even when he didn't need to be. Slow down. Midoriya let go of Katsuki only when they were outside of the station and could begin slowly walking to school. I was destroying her, you know. Yup, I heard. Great comebacks. Maybe next time you'll start on the offensive. Midoriya laughed it off, adjusting his own book bag. You keep letting her dictate the pace. You aren't winning. You're just keeping pace. Katsuki didn't have a comeback for that one, instead deflecting and laughing it off. For all his bravado, Katsuki seemed to be incapable of pushing the envelope on his own. He was fine matching someone, but that meant he was always playing catch-up. At least he had Midoriya who he could match. Midoriya made sure that he was always the one pushing the envelope. If he pushed the envelope as far as he wanted it to go from the start, they could operate in that field for as long as they wanted. It was taking the napkin all over again. At a fancy dinner party, with the silverware all laid out pretty and shiny, which napkin did you take? The one on your left or the one on your right? The answer, the same one as the one who acts first. The person who acts first sets the pace. They get to set the rules. Katsuki couldn't grasp that principle, and couldn't grasp the napkin. It was up to Midoriya to take the lead and make sure everyone else followed, but he didn't want to. Katsuki wanted to take lead and change the world, while Midoriya wanted to beat up some people who F'd with them in middle school and then retire to a cabin or something. Ironic, Midoriya was pushed out of his edgy Google philosophy by getting kicked in the back as they turned the corner to UA. A kick that launched him 5 feet forward. Oops, sorry. That was. Hey, it was Pinky. They were in class together. He made a mental note of her and waved it off with a smile while Pepsimin put another crack in her phone screen. Pettiness wasn't next to godliness. It was practically the definition of godliness. Look at that Old Testament guy. Ending people just for worshipping a rock like a bunch of idiots. Show a little sincerity bit ... She's gone. Katsuki didn't even have time for a rebuttal with how quickly she left. What a shame. He kind of wanted to hear Katsuki chew her out. Maybe he could convince Katsuki to use M&M to blow up something in her bag. Now that would be funny. What's with the crowd? At the same time they realized that the crowd standing outside of UA wasn't made of students, but a whole bunch of people with cameras and microphones. Izuku think they're here about us. Maybe as a B-plot. No one cared about boys, so writing an article about them was sure to get ignored. Probably. If not, life going forward was going to be annoying and filled with him breaking reporters' legs until they learned to F off. All Might, remember, it was way more likely that they were here for the #1 heroine. That was actually interesting and most people would care about that. Listening in through their stands showed that All Might was the correct guess. Midoriya relaxed slightly when he heard them questioning everyone about All Might. Even if it was his theory, he might have believed it would be about that almighty idiot. But even the chance that it was about them made him worried, especially since someone decided to publicly show off his stand. Midoriya embraced his hamon, feeling it fill him like a fire engulfing his body as he latched onto Katsuki again, dragging him through the crowd without a single word. Being so small no one even noticed them moving through the crowd until they were at the gate, and by then he already swiped money from over half of them. Hey, excuse me. Pepsimin and M&M stepped up to deflect the last people trying to grab them just as a pair of hands grabbed both and pulled them through the gate. Midoriya was surprised someone pulled him forward because that was through UA's gate, a place that stopped the reporters dead in their tracks. Holding on to both of them by their shoulders was their homeroom teacher, Edge-sensei. Yeah, that name Ed. Stop disrupting class before it's even started. Whatever her name was, their homeroom teacher had a death glare that Midoriya couldn't help but admire. The way it tore through everyone in front of her was simply amazing. Now he actually felt bad for not catching her name. This is a school. Keep harassing the students and we'll call the cops to haul you away. She walked away from the gate with an arm still on each of them, not giving a glance backward at the shouting crowd. You two all right? They didn't harass you. Katsuki was shouting at her to unhand them, but Midoriya was fine to play with their teacher, giving her a smile and the answers she wanted to hear. Nope, thanks, sensei. He still said the Edge part in his heart, but out loud he shut up and paid attention to her face. She kept her stony expression, but she seemed satisfied with their answer. Good. If anyone does, let me know. She leaned forward, locking eyes with both of them. Anyone, students, teachers, doesn't matter. Tell me. Got it. Midoriya nodded and, with Pepsimin's help, so did Katsuki. Their homeroom teacher did what some would consider a smile if they had a telescope trained on her face and a PhD in psychology. Good. Stay safe and I'll see you in class. Their teacher went back to the gate, setting up and glaring down the crowd. Midoriya and Katsuki stood staring at her for a second. Is that? Yup. Tsundere. Thought you were the last one, but I guess there are two. Hey, Midoriya smirked, wrapping his arm over Katsuki's shoulders and pulling him further into the school. What, come on, let's see what our Tsundere-sensei has planned for us today. Could be pretty fun. Oh, so now you're fine with this. I see how it is. Katsuki shouted but let himself get dragged along. Even in jokes, he just couldn't manage to grasp that napkin. A shame. Midoriya was still trying to get a good spin going as he sat at his desk, messing around with his steel. On a solid, unmoving surface without Pepsimin's help, he could get it off in what seemed to be 1 out of every 50 spins. He stared at it, took notes on it, was absorbed into the spinning motion of that his carefully trained eyes could trace down to the surges of energy coming off of it. For classwork, he barely ever paid of attention anymore. He could and chose to use Pepsimin to answer every question without thinking about it, and if it worked in middle school it would probably work here. He wasn't worried. What, did you have somebody with a stand who could spot any cheating attempts? As far as he knew, the world of stands was a secret world that he was trying to keep secret while Katsuki fed everything up for both of them. At least he wasn't giving out details left and right. Girls so far seemed incapable of gaining stands like boys were incapable of getting quirks. But what about stands that could be given to others? Were there quirks that could do that? Was there a quirk that could give stands? What about a stand that could give quirks? All theories with little to go off of. It was better to focus on the here and now, get through this trial, and gain as much as he could. Pepsimin looked over the classroom at each person inside. Tail Girl and her constant beaching, Pinky and her phone that he added an extra crack to out of instinct and pettiness, and that effing brat who threw him into a tree. He owed her a few body blows for that. He wasn't here to learn well, not to learn traditionally. With stands, regular jobs were irrelevant. He could make top billing as a hitman or something. All he needed to know was how to do his taxes. Instead of getting a traditional education, he was just here to learn how to use all of JoJo's legacies in a real-world scenario. In a place like this he could test the limits of Hammond, the spin, and best of all, stands. Pepsimin floated above everyone, seeing the entire room without any eyes. It could use Hammond to sense their life force and help develop working theories going forward. For example, he wasn't sure women would ever be able to use Hammond properly. They were just too big. The amount of air you needed to use Hammond increased as you got bigger, meaning technically for best results you should just stop growing at birth. On the flip side, it meant women could basically never get enough air to actually use any of the Hammond techniques. That made his day a little bit. Pepsimin sensed the tiny amount of Hammond inside living beings and could follow them with that, in addition to finding people through the normal method of just looking at them, which he didn't really understand how Pepsimin could do. His whole head was just a silver dome with no eyes. There were weirder things to hyper-focus on. Midoriya's main focus switched back to his own body, his vision focused on the spinning steel. Right now he was trying to dip his toes in as many pools as possible and get used to as many reliable techniques as he could. He could focus on stand power after he figured out how to regularly use the spin. He stopped the steel, then tried to get another good spin going as their teacher, Edgei-sensei, came in. Yeah, that was a little better pronunciation. Took you 6 seconds to get quiet, wasting 6 more of my seconds. Hurry up and get seated. Tsundere-sensei glared over each and every one of them, skipping right past Midoriya who waved hello with a friendly smile plastered to his face. God, messing with her was fun. We're picking a class representative. I don't care how, just do it and do it quietly. Get to it. A normal activity. That just felt overly dramatic. What was this supposed to be, a gag anime? They were in high school. They had to do some normal high school stuff. Technically, the activity they did yesterday was a normal activity for the hero course. These idiots didn't think ahead. Just made all the times he was robbing them feel more justified. Like right now. He wasn't pickpocketing them. He was putting a tax on idiocy. Everyone started arguing while Midoriya kept on playing with his essay. That was a good one. He should tell that to Katsuki. He always gave great reactions even when he tried not to. It was fun to mess with him. Midoriya snickered at the thought, his smirk blossoming into a full smile as the steel began to spin with supernatural power. Let's vote for it. He tried to figure out who said that. Some girl with giant tits. His eyes glazed back over, his smile becoming fake again as he passed the spinning steel from hand to hand. Everyone agreed, but this was going to be a pretty sorry election by his accounts. Everyone wanted to be class representative, and that meant everyone would vote for themselves. This wasn't rocket science, but sure, yeah. The class erupted into cheers. Breaking the second rule, Tsundere-sensei said of doing this quietly. They got a box, everyone got out paper, and everyone prepared to have their dreams dashed while Midoriya thought out ways to rig the election because it was pretty easy. In this battle, God, even pretending this was a fight was stupid. The winner would be whoever could get support. If anyone could get anyone else to step down and vote for them, they would win. Fights were won based on who was stronger, but people didn't really know what that meant. For example, base power or pure power, strength, speed, the things that made you who you are. Next off was technique, the knowledge to apply base power to make it go further than you could naturally. Then came items, things that you could use to help you win. Finally, there was what this battle really came down to, support. In a real fight, support was anyone besides you who could help win or lose the fight, from a sidekick to the police officers who arrested criminals once captured. Each of the terms were pretty vague and could be broken down more, but for a power system, vague was pretty good. Meant it could be expanded on, like if you added quirks or stands to the equation. In this stupid little battle, everyone had a base power of 1 vote. Everyone had the technique to vote once. Everyone had the item that allowed them to vote once. However, no one had support to let them win. You couldn't both win the fight and supply support to someone else, forcing everyone to choose one or the other, and therein lay the problem. Everyone would get 1 vote for themselves and they'd be back at square one. No one else seemed to realize this, judging by the first reactions Pepsiman saw. It read everyone nearby's answers and spoke aloud. Katsuki, how do you want to do this? I don't want to win, do you? Well, he said no one had support, but there were 2 people who did and they were the problem. Midoriya didn't give a flying F about being responsible for this city class and wasn't going to vote for himself. And he was pretty sure Katsuki followed a similar train of thought. I'm here to be a hero, not to take charge of these extras. Eminem gave his words a slight accent, like talking over a crackling fire. As long as whoever gets picked stays out of our way, I don't care. And the problem had restarted. There were 18 contestants in the running and 2 supporters up for grabs, but nobody thought about that. If they did, they would try and convince their classmates to vote for them and sweep up the 2 supporters, winning them the vote. Midoriya chuckled at the thought, looking into his steel as it spun. 18 people to choose from, and Katsuki didn't care who they voted for, meaning he'd get to choose how to tilt this. How fun. Some of his classmates gave him weird looks as he laughed, but he didn't care. He had to finish analyzing the world's least dramatic fight to find out who would win. Oh, Pepsiman hovered over one of their classmates, the only one who didn't put down their own name. Todoroki. Something. He didn't memorize names he intended to forget, had written down someone else's name. See? Now in fighting terms, this was the unexpected twist that would take the fighters by surprise and upset the balance. With only 1 person having support, she'd win easily, and then they'd revote for the second position with 1 person who couldn't vote for themselves, meaning someone was bound to win. 1 more scan to check each of their classmates. No one else was going the support route. And Midoriya had an idea so devilishly deish he couldn't pass it up, a way that they could ensure maximum confusion inside this little waste of time. Pepsiman just told Katsuki what to do while leaving out the details. He might follow Midoriya's instructions if he knew what was going to happen, but not telling him would make the twist reveal funnier. Midoriya wrote down his answer, sat back, and smiled. This was gonna be fun to watch. Their teacher gathered their votes into the box and counted them out, not caring to even check if it was rigged. He knew he should have put a spare vote in with Pepsiman to F around even more, but he wanted a draw to confuse everyone. If the max vote was 2 people, he could pick someone and Katsuki could pick another, making a 3-way tie. Then they'd re-elect from the given people and waste more time. Tsundere-sensei finished tallying the votes and started writing the winning names on the board. Almost everyone got one, so she only wrote the winners to save time. This was good, and further played into the fight dynamic. Fights generally had rules, and it was the knowledge and manipulation of these rules that could be the ace of technique. While items were useless in this fight and support was the method to change the fight, it was the technique that turned it into the surf Midoriya wanted to see. Technique wouldn't win the fight, it would just make it more fun to watch. Rules had to be laid out in advance. For example, this little scuffle had rules against voting multiple times and nothing else. No rules about bribery or who you had to vote for though, and this freedom was the thing Midoriya intended to do to annoy someone. He could have gone for a 3-way tie. He should have gone for a 3-way tie, but instead, he wanted to have a little fun. Alright, shut up and listen. Edge-sensei finished writing the 2 names and stepped backward, tapping the board to get their focus on it. According to this, your winners are Momo Yaoyorozu and Shiho Todoroki. Figure out who's the representative and who's the vice representative. Well, it seemed Big Tits was named Yaoyorozu by how she stood up and started thanking everyone like this was amazing. She hadn't seen the votes to find out she only won by a whopping 1 vote compared to every single other of their classmates. Todoroki didn't even notice that she had won until someone nudged her. What? How? Todoroki blinked, confused. One of the rules they forgot to put out. That really would have shown who was a supporter and who was a fighter. Was you were supposed to volunteer yourself to be voted the representative. Todoroki would probably just turn down the responsibility though, and they would have a revote. But that moment when she woke up so confused was priceless. He made sure to take a picture for future memories. You tied with Yaoruzo. Decide which one of you is going to be the class representative already. She can, I don't care. And just like that, Todoroki accidentally signed herself up for vice representative. Was she paying any attention? This sit was hilarious. Midoriya managed to keep a straight face by releasing all of his joy through Pepsiman, who was rolling through the air with laughter. Katsuki exchanged glances with Midoriya, both of them on the same page. Eminem wasn't laughing like Pepsiman, just confused while Pepsiman spun in the air with laughter at just how little Todoroki noticed. She was fun to mess with, and that was pretty unfortunate for her. Bakugo shook his head at Izuku as they walked out for their lunch. Seriously, they both had 3 votes. I thought together she'd win for sure. Izuku just laughed it off, taking out a can of soda, not Pepsi. He never drank Pepsi. Izuku hated that stuff, which made his stand more confusing. Oh well, should be fun anyway. Todoroki definitely won't get in our way if she can help it. She was too lazy to become the rep, and too lazy to refuse. She definitely wouldn't get in their way or go out of her way to F them over. Bakugo had seen what the teachers had been doing, deliberately setting them up for failure, and he wanted someone who wouldn't give a flying F about that. From what he saw of that half and half emo, she was competing with Izuku to see who could care less. Bakugo opened their lunch for the day, leftovers from the last time they went out to eat. It was a little cold, but with a wave of Izuku's magic sunlight stuff it was warmed and ready to go. Bakugo busted out the chopsticks while Izuku took out a spork and both dug in. All we gotta worry about is the other girl now. I don't know much about her. Creation quirk seems useful. Did she do anything interesting in the matches yesterday? Big tits. Made some barricades. Hit the purple-haired chick with a metal pipe. It was pretty funny. Izuku wasn't done watching the videos he recorded then if he didn't know that. No, like things out of the match. I only saw her on the sports day. Oh yeah, Izuku abandoned him like a D. Well, Mother Fia, she answered almost every question All Might asked. Hell, she was better at teaching than All Might. Speaking of All Might, it was pretty cool to see her in person. She was as impressive as he thought she'd be. He got lost in thinking about All Might while Midoriya thought through what he knew about their class rep. She seems pretentious. I'm not sure I like her. Izuku rubbed his chin as he organized his thoughts and announced his first impression of her. She came off as pretty smart, but outdoing the teacher on their first real day together was a little weird, Bakugo had to admit. As far as first impressions went, she wasn't doing great, but she probably didn't care about their opinion yet. Well, then we'll get to know her soon and then we'll find out just how good or bad she really is. Bakugo forced himself to be optimistic again. He wanted Izuku to be here, and even encouraging the idea that their class rep was going to be a pain in their asses wasn't helping. He tried to pull this conversation back into a more positive direction. She's at least pretty smart. ... Yeah, I got nothing. Problem was he wasn't actually good at being positive. That had been Izuku's thing. Bakugo now strained his memory trying to think of any other good qualities. She's good at thinking things through. So she's smart. Yahoo! Izuku smirked and took another bite. Don't force it. The best positivity comes naturally. Besides, she's got other good qualities, like great tits. Hey, don't drag me to your level. Izuku snickered. He was definitely effing with Bakugo now. He had instinctively agreed because he thought Izuku was being positive, but now he just looked dumb. Midoriya laughed it off but stepped back. Didn't want to be too big of a D to his only friend. They were sort of stuck together, being the only guy the other can relate to, but it wasn't good to test that bond. He'd rather build it up and get closer than test it out and get further. Seriously though, I guess we'll find out going forward what's she like. All we can do right now is take random guesses. He took another bite of food. Yeah, it's kind of weird though not being attacked. I can't sit right. I always feel like something's just about to happen. Can you feel like $1,000,000 next? Panic spread across the cafeteria like a wildfire as that alarm rang. And holy shit, it was funny as F to watch. Midoriya turned his chair to get a better view as he ate. This is the best entertainment I've seen in years. Are you seeing this man? Katsuki looked worried, but he wasn't panicking, at least. Shouldn't you be a little more nervous? Come on, come where? Midoriya took another bite and sat back. We're in UA, and I'm still Izuku Midoriya. Anything short of a nuke and we'll be fine. Midoriya's confidence in his abilities was astounding, bordering on idiotic. But he had good reason for it. This was the most secure school in Japan, and he was pretty sure no matter what was happening outside, they'd be safe. This was UA. After all, the most likely place in Japan to have overly fancy and complicated security systems. Besides, they had stands, magical invisible punchy ghosts. How could you beat something you couldn't see, hear, or touch? Simple, you didn't. Pepsiman floated up to check their surroundings and nearly made Midoriya choke on his food when Pepsiman decided to check outside, peering its head through the nearest wall. Katsuki, it gets better. You're going to stop stealing other people's food. Maybe. But don't wish for miracles. Wait, no, it's reporters. Midoriya laughed harder, tapping the wall. I take it back. Yue got beat by effing reporters. This place is as secure as a grocery bag. Really? Wait, really? Katsuki's expression shifted from skeptic to surprised as Eminem stuck his head through the wall. How did they get in? Who cares? Yue, creating defenders of humanity, gets beat by effing reporters who can't even use their quirks. Midoriya had to admit he was enjoying this too much, but come on. This was Yue, the pride of those stupid quirkies' world, and it got beat by a bunch of idiotic reporters. That was pretty funny. Out of all the villains that could get in, it had to be reporters. Actually, thinking about it, that was pretty impossible. Alright, I'm starting to think I care. How did they get in? How would reporters get in? By beating the security system. How did you beat the security system? Hacking or a quirk, and both were illegal, meaning a reporter couldn't do it. But a villain could. Plus, those idiotic reporters made a great cover. They didn't even realize they were the cover story for something a lot stronger going on in the background, which was still pretty funny. People trying to find a big scoop becoming the big scoop while the real work happened in the background. It didn't really matter either way to him. Pepsiman would beat the shit out of anyone that tried to cross him, regardless of if they were hero, villain, smartass, or dumbass. Just something more fun to keep an eye out for. Besides, now that he knew what the problem was, he wasn't going to leave the lunchroom. Pepsiman brought over some more food for him that he got to munch on while watching the show. We could tell the crowd and calm them down. We could. We should tell them. Definitely. Go get him. You're insufferable. Thanks. They won't die. There's no harm right now. Better to let the idiots sort themselves out when there's no danger than in a real fight. Midoriya was watching people climb over each other in a strange version of wrestling, slurping on his juice to get the most out of the show. Who knew the next time he'd see this many idiots gathered in one place? And once again, Katsuki couldn't grab the napkin. Midoriya shook his head and put down his juice box. Don't worry, the announcement should explain what's happening soon and the sheeple will go back to eating grass or whatever. Cause holy sit this food ass. Our perfect little school is just effing up in every way possible. But it's fun to watch. Shouldn't we be going somewhere to meet up? As a class? Yup. Where? Well, Midoriya began, trying to hold back laughter. We're a first-year class. According to the emergency plan, first-year classes meet inside the cafeterias during break-ins. Do you think Tsundere-sensei will give us bonus points for remembering the plan? Then where are they going? Katsuki nodded to the rushing swarms of people. Good question. I think either they're classrooms, to find an adult, or they're just going with the flow. Not everyone knew. Hardly anyone knew what was actually happening. Midoriya could make the correct choice because he could see through walls, but you'd normally need to find a window and be on the correct side of the building to see what was happening. He was just being hard on them because they were a bunch of beaches, and they kind of deserved it. They'll figure it out when the announcements come on. Let's enjoy this while it lasts. Attention students, we are having a non-dangerous intruder incident. Please report to the designated areas for your class, and ask your class representative where you should go. Maybe I should feel like $1,000,000 next. Bakugo and Izuku did have to walk a bit to meet up with their class, and Izuku brought their food over so he could keep eating. Izuku could eat enough for 2 people when he was physically training, and it gave away when he was secretly practicing new moves. Right now Bakugo could tell what Izuku was training, at least, messing around with a steel in one hand and eating with the other as they did roll call. Did you shorties get stepped on? Bakugo wasn't sure how to respond honestly, because admitting that they knew the problem the whole time and did nothing was a D move. He was trying to get along with these people. It was just a shame he was so bad at it. Did you doggy? Saw people climbing over each other. Were you the stepladder or the monkey? Not his best material, not even good, but it was what it was. He'd work on it going forward. At least he knew how to butt heads. Even if his one-liners weren't the best, he always had one. He glared down Tail Girl, only stopping to respond to roll call. Izuku handed him his portion of their food and sat back, going back to his training. You, green-haired boy. Izuku didn't even look over, concentrating entirely on trying to get a good spin going. He'd been trying for all of lunch and only got 7 off since he was trying to do it one-handed. Bakugo focused on who was talking big tits. Great, Izuku already had a poor opinion of her, and she was about to make it worse. This is an emergency situation. Please stop playing with that and focus. No, that was the opposite of not making it worse. ... And Izuku didn't even notice she was talking to him, being completely absorbed in his work. Well, at least it wouldn't get worse. Bakugo nudged him, trying to get his attention before someone could piss him off. Midoriya watched the spinning steel with a careful eye, watching it tilt as it spun. That was the problem. It was tilting and going off course. It was hard to tell when it was tilting because, well, it didn't exactly have a definite top or bottom, but the slight tilt was ruining his spin. Because the was tilting, extra parts of it were hitting his hand before the spin could get started, which threw it off and stopped it early. He'd need to practice with a different object to master the spin. This was a revelation that hit like it was from Dio himself. He had thought people learned to use the spin with their steel ass, but who learned swordsmanship with real swords? People training would start with tools design to create success so that they could get a feel for what it was supposed to do before gradually using harder and harder objects. He needed to design a new training tool to best emulate the spin. I'm talking to you, boy. Huh, that's weird. He was positive someone just grabbed his head without his permission. With barely a sound, Pepsimon slid out of Midoriya's body as he turned around, prepared to uppercut whatever idiot was holding his head. Yes, Midoriya put on his biggest smile as he looked up at the girl he was gonna turn into a corpse, the class representative Big Tits. What, did she want a real emergency? He'd give them a real emergency. Pepsimon's body sparked as Midoriya started to generate more and more Hammond, staring up at. He forgot her name again. You shouldn't be playing around in an emergency. They were just talking about her and now he couldn't remember her name. That was a little rude of him. How was he supposed to make a gravestone without a name? Pepsimon already knew the areas it would attack. One punch to each leg to bring down the head and then a clean uppercut to the chin. Would hurt like a beach. Playing. His words sounded playful, but there was an edge in how his eyes were closed and just how wide his smile was, showing off how fake it all really was. Emergency. They said this wasn't dangerous. Midoriya did at least put the away now that he knew it wasn't good training. No point in trying to use a tool he wasn't ready for. He didn't want to fight over something as stupid as that, so he just made a mental note of who it was. Big Tits. And planned for the future. They might have said it wasn't dangerous. But as tomorrow's heroes, we must treat every threat with the utmost seriousness. Midoriya and Big Tits' heads shifted to look at the third person in the conversation. The blue-haired beach with the choppy motions. Why was she butting in here? However, I don't see how waiting while paying attention is beneficial. Well, at least would it be Bloody? At least the Bloody pointed out everyone's problems equally. He might have been messing around, but right now, there was no reason not to. They were safe and had downtime. Plus, if anything went wrong, it wasn't his fault. There was no reason to get mad over this unless you were looking for a reason. Furthermore, we're supposed to avoid stress, so playing with it to relax should be beneficial. Why are you calling him out on this class representative? He remembered a little tidbit he didn't care about. When the Bloody didn't get voted as the class rep, she seemed pretty torn up about it. Made sense. Someone who paid as much attention and was a stickler for rules like her would make a good representative. I suppose you're right. Carry on, where'd he go? The class rep agreed with Bloody, but Midoriya was pretty sure if Katsuki made the same argument it would have been dismissed on the spot if anyone bothered to pay attention to him. He didn't bother getting me out now though. He had walked away from the conversation at the Bloody's second sentence and was now sitting beside Katsuki, stealing pieces of his food. Hey, get your own. I did, and I ate that too. Midoriya stopped deeing around and reheated the food for Katsuki, pulling out his notes while pulling away from the group of students. Like Katsuki said before the alarm went off, he could never feel safe around so many people, not yet anyway. If he was just a little bit stronger, if he knew that he was really safe, he might hate being in groups less, but if he wasn't in control, he was in danger. Midoriya brainstormed ideas for the next method to train the spin in his notebook. It needed to be an object he could clearly tell if it was tilting, which was pretty easy. He could just put a dot of paint on an ordinary object to achieve that, but he wanted something easy to see at a glance and something that, yeah, a top will do. A top was designed to spin, so why bother reinventing the wheel? Just a normal top was probably what most people learning the spin would start with, increasing in complexity as they got better and better at it. He now only needed to find a top, learn how to create the spin regularly, and while he was wishing on a star, figure out how to stop overthinking things. Hey Katsuki, I need to go out and get a top. You need anything? The rest of my lunch would be nice. Should have eaten more while you had the chance, he gave Katsuki sit, but he'd try and remember to give him a larger portion next time they went out. Alright, so you want to go out to eat today? Maybe, but we've still got our heroing class today. Alright everyone, classes are cancelled for the rest of the day while we investigate what happened. Tsundere-sensei came bringing tidings of great joy, or at least, she did to Midoriya. Most of the students looked upset to be missing the class where they could legally beat the shit out of each other. But Midoriya could get into fights just by existing. The thrill of the fight wasn't just gone anymore. It had completely retired and sent postcards. That metaphor was dumb. He should learn some better wordplay from Katsuki. Everyone should go home while we investigate the scene. Stay in groups and stay safe. You heard teach. You still hungry, Katsuki? I think we can pick up some shaved ice or something on the way to the beach. Midoriya jumped to his feet, dragging Katsuki up with him. Maybe Peps and Miz can have a little action if the beach is clear. Shaved ice. In this weather, I'm not as hot as you, dipsit. Katsuki slipped from his grasp but was considering what he said. Yeah, let's go straight to the beach after we grab our bags. Race to there. And already Midoriya took off, leaving Katsuki in the dust. For 2 seconds before he ran into an outstretched leg. Hey, we're supposed to leave in groups, not as we please, boys. Big Tits was glaring down at him and Midoriya forced out a smile, closing his eyes while he stepped back. Everyone, organize yourselves based on where you live. A class rep started giving orders while Midoriya slipped on his Hammond breathing training mask so he didn't have to keep smiling, focusing on that instead of on whatever bullshit the rep was trying to get them to do. Hey, at least she's looking out for our security. Katsuki was being as optimistic as he could be, but this was just a waste time. 2 people were a fine group, especially with a fight record like theirs. This was either pretentious or she was looking down on them because they were boys. And both options pissed Midoriya off. Izuku slid the mask on, a definite bad sign. Bakugo didn't really understand anything about Hammond, but he did know. Izuku could only generate his favorite black Hammond with the mask. Izuku said it was something about a more refined breathing method to create that weird Hammond. Plus, Pepsimin. You could always see what Izuku was really thinking through his stand. And right now Pepsimin couldn't be stored in Izuku. Pepsimin's body would appear for moments, from the constant stomping of his foot to the way his fingers twitched. The signature black began to overtake Izuku and Pepsimin's fingers before Bakugo intervened. Hey, we live next to each other. We'll go home together. Eminem tried to hold back Pepsimin, but his movements and writhing were so fast it was actually a little bit difficult. Bakugo needed to calm Izuku down and he needed to do it fast before Pepsimin started rampaging. A pair of boys. No way. That instantly got a reaction out of Izuku and Pepsimin, the air becoming just a touch warmer as the Hammond concentrated through all of Pepsimin's body, lifting Eminem off the ground and taking slow steps towards Big Tits to shut her mouth for good. I live near them. I can go too. Thank God that was quick. No. Tail Girl stepped up to be the third person in their group. And the last person they needed was someone else Izuku was pissed off at. He wanted someone random that they could ditch without giving a shit and they didn't know. But he knew what was going to happen next. Good. See you 3 tomorrow. Whatever. Saya Suun. God have mercy. Please God have mercy. Just this once. Bakugo stationed himself firmly between Tail Girl and Izuku, making sure they couldn't physically get to each other. It might look like he was protecting Izuku from Tail Girl in case she attacked. But really Eminem was up and ready from the word go to block any attacks from Pepsimin. So, shut up boy, I'm just going with you until we pass my dojo. And then I don't give a shit what you two do. You were just on the way there. She didn't want to F with them, she just wanted to go to her class in peace. If Tail Girl got stuck in a group of real people, they might not let her since everyone was supposed to go home. Izuku and Bakugo, however, had made it loud and clear they didn't give a shit about that by how, not even 10 seconds after they were told to go home, they started to plan going to the beach instead. Yup, have a good time. Bakugo reevaluated Izuku's current emotion through Pepsimin. Pepsimin was definitely angry, smacking anyone who crossed him on the street with quick jabs, but he didn't seem to care about their annoying classmate. Thank God. Izuku once snapped at a couple of their classmates, and he didn't see them for a while. Wait, did he ever see them again? He had some questions for Izuku later. Midoriya's thoughts were far from the city situation he found himself in, planning out all the steps going forward. He'd learn the spin then go straight into learning more about stands. Hammond training was just a war of attrition and would take enough time while stand training took active attention, so he'd just check in with Hammond training every once in a while and update his schedule as he saw fit. He idly tapped his current breather, a mask that cleared the air for him, and strained it, forcing his lungs to work harder to produce results. Eventually, he'd need to up the ante and get a stronger mask that restricted air even more. The best part of Hammond was that, for training so far, it was just a numbers game. He'd up his numbers and get more results. He'd work his muscles to generate Hammond, his muscles would tear, and Hammond would heal them back stronger. An infinite loop that he could practice anytime, anywhere. Hurry up you effing men. God, you two are so slow. He could feel his signature Hammond generating as his blood began to boil. But that wasn't a metaphor. Normal Hammond breathing filled blood vessels with Hammond energy, which spread the Hammond with the oxygen to the rest of the body. Black Blood Overdrive was just an overdrive that focused on overfilling his body with Hammond, forcing his body to move so fast it broke itself. Blood vessels moved so fast they crashed into things. Muscles got so strong they broke themselves. It was basically just Hammond plus in a style he generated on accident while trying to heal himself. It was also his default attack. Hammond helped end pain, which was why he didn't hesitate to break his own body to win. Like how his fingers should have been in pain as the black ink like Hammond coated his fingertips. Midoriya coated his fingertips and stepped forward, ready to stab this annoying pain in his ass in the leg. Hey, we're going as fast as we can. Why don't you just make tracks and ditch us already? Katsuki stepped in right next to Midoriya on the same side that he was trying to stab from and pulled him close, smothering his stab and stopping it before it started. Seriously, this whole going home in groups thing is a effing waste of time. What, did she expect us to stay together all night? Have a effing sleepover? Ugh, you might be weak as shit, but you're right. Weak. Pepsimon dove forward to liberate her from that stupid little mouth that was going to get her ended by him one of these days, but was stopped short by M later. He watched his prey slip away, unaware of the fight that she barely slipped away from. 10 hits. That's all it would take. Start by kicking out one of her legs, probably the right one. She'd tip forward, unbalanced, and he'd grab her by her hair before she could regain that balance. Pull her forward into the right side, the same side as the kicked out leg, so she couldn't stop the fall. While she was on the ground, he'd stomp her unconscious. Probably. Bakugo didn't debate it, staring out into the distance. But 10 hits, that many. I thought it'd be 5. It was designed to stop his train of thought, making him instead go back and think old thoughts before he decided that he really did want to try out those 10 hits. You're right. 3 hits. Start with the leg kick still, but then follow it up with an uppercut. The leg kick would make his prey fall forward, her own weight adding to the impact as his fist would strike her chin. Then he'd grab her by the hair and slam her head into his knee, breaking her jaw and probably knocking her out. Probably. Bakugo pointed down the road. Wanna go to the beach now? It's still pretty nice out, and we could get some good practice in. Yeah, Midoriya spun what could only be called a top by someone having a fever dream. But what did he expect? Nothing was his size, and this was the best he could get. He needed materials to practice the spin, but once he learned it, he'd switch back to training his stand's special ability. Hey Katsuki, you sure you don't want to learn the spin? It's perfect for you. No pain involved, and you can practice whenever you want. However, that was when he was done with the spin. The spin, once he got the hang of it, would be something he had to make sure Katsuki learned, with how easy it was supposed to be to learn when you had a teacher who could use it. Nah, I'm good. I'll just stick to blowing sit up. Another explosion as M slammed both of its hands down, crushing a washing machine in one hit. Besides, how much power do you need? Just use your stand pow. My bad. Katsuki backed off when he started talking about stand power because Pepsimon didn't seem to have one so far. M made explosions. The world stopped time, but Pepsimon just punched things. Or at least, that's all Midoriya had shown so far. With Katsuki being such a blabbermouth and not thinking this whole hero thing through, Midoriya didn't want to give him too many details that he might let slip. Besides, Pepsimon's stand power wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was almost impossible to notice, shown by how Pepsimon had been using its ability from day one, and it had been so weak nobody noticed. More power isn't a bad thing, you know. It's a safety net. Why did everyone villainize people trying to get power? Power was great. It kept you safe and let you do cool new things. If you're not training to get more power, what are you out here training for? Whatever. Katsuki couldn't think of it, but the right answer would have been something along the lines of training for more control. Midoriya always wanted more control over the powers he had, but he wanted to have lots of powers to control first. Kind of counterproductive. But hey, he was only human, and the life of a greedy bastard was a fun life. He played around with the top and took notes, slowly but surely getting progress on starting a good spin. From getting a good spin every 50 tries to getting one every 10. Midoriya whittled away at his problems slowly when they presented to his face, with nothing else to do like escaping prison by just kicking the wall every day. It would take time, it wouldn't be fast, but eventually, something was bound to happen. Actually, you'd probably break your leg first, alright? Bad example. We should have a fight soon. A real fight. Katsuki broke the comfortable silence with good news, at least. Someone planning to jump us. The pink beach with the black eyes who kicked me today. Not that kind of fight, a school-sanctioned one. Katsuki threw a piece of trash at him, beating him in the side of his dome. Like the one we did against Glasses and Dots. So, aren't you gonna use your stand then? It'll be pretty obvious something's off when you pull that out. Katsuki was worried about his plans. Midoriya always knew deep down that Katsuki was listening, no matter how reluctantly. Hey, who knows? I'll just keep supporting you probably. He probably shouldn't fight too much with just how violent he was. Midoriya wasn't sure any of their new prey classmates could survive a real fight with him. Besides, what's the big deal with fighting? Aren't heroes supposed to save people? Yeah, but that's usually through fighting. Then I'll be fine. He was one of the best people he knew at fighting. Midoriya might not have started good at it, but experience had molded him into a stronger man. He probably had been in more fights than some teachers at UA. I've survived plenty of fights without throwing one punch. It'll be a cinch, don't you worry. Midoriya laughed it off, but was already wondering if he should try to get them both expelled or something in a fight. That was a safe route, but it might damage his friendship with Katsuki. No, he'd find a different route going forward. He'd get them out of this UA hellhole in some way that Katsuki would accept. He just didn't know how yet. Whatever, let's just hope they've got something good planned for us tomorrow. So, as an, oh god, who wrote this? Unforeseen twist today we're going to the unforeseen simulation joint. Nezu definitely wrote this. The edgiest sensei crumpled the flyer she had to read to the class with barely disguised disgust for Nezu's wordplay. Grab your costumes and bags and meet me out front. We leave in 10. Still no changing rooms. Gonna take that as a no. Midoriya slid from his chair, grabbing his bag and making his way over to his costume. Boys, the class rep was glaring at them for some reason, with a very smug tail girl standing right next to her. Midoriya was pretty sure he knew the reason, and if what he thought was happening, it better not be. Anjiro told me that you two ditched her on purpose and went to the beach instead of going home. He would be pissed off. He definitely should be pissed off, but the betrayal was so well thought out and so well played he just had to admire the conviction. He had guessed she'd try to get them in trouble yesterday when she wasn't a raving beach to them, but this was pretty funny actually. Yep, Midoriya replied with that sickening sweetness he used so much as Escapism grabbed his hero costume, pulling it out just far enough that Midoriya could grab it with his own 2 hands. Katsuki did something similar, both not giving Big Tits even an ounce of attention. It was a great time, and the sun was shining. That's not the point. You two could have been in serious danger. Midoriya's eyes were shut tight as he calculated how much danger Tail Girl was in. Verbal harassment, getting in his way, and now being a tattletale. Snitches got stitches, and while he wasn't mad at whatever her name was, he did have a message to send. You need to think things through and... Sorry, but we've got 10 minutes to get changed. Midoriya's sing-songy nature continued right out the door as he skipped away. Saya later. That beach. I should have known something was suspicious when she wasn't acting like a beach. Beach. Yep, I thought all of that a minute ago. Just get changed already. Probably. He checked his backpack, making sure no one messed with his things while he was gone. And that representative beach. Does she think she's a teacher or something? What a pain in the ass. Midoriya was pretty sure he had thought the same things a day ago, down to the pain in the ass section. He didn't say it aloud though, so did it count? Probably. Midoriya slipped on the rest of his costume and adjusted his breather. Hopefully we'll get to fight some people today. I can use a good punch out. Yeah, Katsuki was so pissed off by being double-crossed. He forgot to be optimistic. This could be fun for him going forward, with his leash a little less tight. Midoriya gave him a pat on the back as they walked out to the bus. This USJ sit better be good. And furthermore, ignoring a direct order from your class representative. Didn't you two hear what I said yesterday? Big Tits was still talking. Damn, did she just like to hear the sound of her voice? Midoriya played with his top, spinning it in his palm while he waited for her to shut up. They were sitting outside the bus waiting for the class to gather so they could get on the bus. Katsuki was worse off than Midoriya. Midoriya had spin practice to distract himself from the class rep's ravings, but Katsuki just had to grin and bear it. Midoriya did feel bad for his butt, but he felt worse for Tail Girl. She ratted them out to the class rep and she was gonna pay the price. He was thinking just breaking a few bones would be enough. How about a thumb? It's not like that would both hurt like a beach and inconvenience her all the time. Midoriya was good at hiding his anger but not so good at hiding his joy, getting a small chuckle as he picked what to break on Tail Girl. The class repetitive, however, didn't know what he was laughing at, so she started living up to her new nickname and repeated herself again. Are you laughing? Why aren't you taking this seriously? You two broke the rules and the least you could do is, the bus is open, hurry up. Hey, stop walking away when I'm talking to you. Midoriya and Katsuki didn't hesitate to leave this conversation, amazed at how little power managed to get to their class rep's head. Midoriya was seriously kicking himself for not picking someone else to be the class rep. Midoriya and Katsuki sat at the front of the bus, purposely sharing what was supposed to be the one-person seat so none of their classmates could sit by them. Unfortunately, those classmates could still sit behind the duo, like the class rep did as she continued to scold them. Isn't this everything you ever wanted? Midoriya spoke through Escapism, using him so only Katsuki could hear his real thoughts. Midoriya should have pissed off with all these people getting in his way and wasting his time. But it made his point crystal clear. These idiots were ensuring that he'd get to leave UA early and Katsuki would give up his stupid hero fantasy. It was a win-win. It'll get better as we go. Katsuki spoke while staring dead ahead, unable to convince himself and knowing damn well his facade would crack if he met Midoriya's mischievous gaze. He couldn't get rid of his playful smile, his eyes shifting back to look and make sure Big Tits was still talking. As we go. What's supposed to change as we go? Escapism rose from Midoriya's body, gesturing to the class rep who was slowly figuring out that nobody was listening to her. Is the change gonna be that she learns to shut the F up? Now that would be a great change. We'll show them how good we are and earn their respect. Katsuki spoke with so much enthusiasm you'd think he was talking about Hammond training. At least he was starting to face reality. And it was only the 4th day. They hadn't even had a full week of school yet and Katsuki was starting to give up. Greenland, stand arrows, look out cause they were coming soon. They're still not listening. Yaoyorozu huffed, glaring down at the two boys. The green-haired one was at least looking at her occasionally, but the blonde had totally tuned her out. Did he even want to be here with his enthusiasm? Isn't the problem that they weren't listening? Her accidental right hand. Todoroki didn't bother to look up from her phone, scrolling through social media while trying to find something more interesting to listen to than her representative's words. While all of Yaoyorozu's words were true, they were wasted on those boys who didn't seem to care. If they weren't listening in the first place, why would they listen now? You're right. Thanks, Todoroki. Now, how do I get their attention? The light returned to Yaoyorozu's eyes as she started thinking of how to get those troublesome boys to listen while Todoroki plugged back in her earphones. Todoroki just wanted her to stop talking though so she could hear the news about the Soba special. She didn't really care all that much about the boys. They'd fail the class in a month anyway. What was the point in focusing on them? Aren't they so weird? I've never seen boys before. They're really light. Mina jostled into Todoroki, but the tall girl didn't respond. Only wondering how Mina knew the boys were light. Hey, how do you think the blonde one makes the explosions? Do you think he's the experiment of some mad scientist? Probably some genetic defect. Maybe he was supposed to be a girl or something. Genetically, he might have a quirk if he was an XXY, but with males being so rare these days there wasn't much proof leaning either way on if it was possible. The girl who spoke out, Suyu, glanced at the two boys. Neither one was speaking, with the blonde staring ahead with a death glare while the greenie making faces at him. It was like they were having a psychic conversation. You could practically hear the green one making fun of the blonde one just from looking at them. Hey, Mina, have you talked to them? Kirishima whispered to the pink girl, who just laughed it off. Talk to boys? No way, why? Mina smirked, leaning forward. Why, you interested? They're boys. Just flex your quirk and they'll probably come running. No, I just wondered how you know stuff like they're light. So someone else was also interested in that line. Todoroki paused the news to hear Mina's response. I just kicked the green one. You should have seen how far he went. It was amazing. Seriously. What does he think he's going to do in the heroics course? The pink girl was, unfortunately, on her dad's side. She didn't even see the creep of ice until it started to envelop her. Hey, as so cold. You kicked one of them. Why? Todoroki's gaze was colder than her ice. She at least could start to figure out why they weren't taking. Yaoyorozu, seriously. Is it that important? Jay, just stop freezing me. So it was for no reason. Well, that just pissed Todoroki off more. What, did people think hurting men was fun? Now she really wanted to freeze Pinky solid. You shouldn't randomly attack other students, Mina. Todoroki, please unfreeze Mina. Todoroki cooled off and switched sides, slowly melting out Mina. Why would you randomly attack another student when we were having an alarm about students being randomly attacked? What were you thinking? Hey, this was before the alarm happened. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Causing trouble was the least of the problems. But Todoroki didn't think anyone else cared. She sunk back, turning up the volume on her phone and trying to block out the new rant as Yaoyorozu chewed out a different classmate. Eventually, Big Tid stopped yelling at them. It was refreshing, like rain letting up and setting you free. Still wasn't quiet, but Midoriya would take what he could get. He watched the top spin, generating sparks of energy on his fingertip while Katsuki played with M&M. The humanoid fire was practicing with its detonation fire, quickly spreading and retracting it. M&M could probably make small explosions on its own, but it needed Katsuki's body parts to make blasts big enough to do some real damage. Technically, M&M should be able to detonate itself since it was a part of Katsuki, but Midoriya didn't want to tell Katsuki. Some things were best discovered on your own. Hey, sensei, still said the Edgei in his heart. It was now immortalized as part of her name. What are we doing at the unforeseen simulation? What was the last word again? Joint. Everyone calls it the USJ. And good question, Midoriya. Midoriya, did everyone hear that? The sleepiest sensei looked over all the students who definitely didn't hear what Midoriya said. We're coming to the USJ to practice rescue and saving techniques with number 13. I want all of you idiots on your best behavior, including she zeroed in on Mina not punting your classmates. I shouldn't have to tell you this. What? They're just boys. So for our demonstration, Midoriya and Bakugan are going to be performing a rescue attempt on Mina. She glared over the students, daring anyone to say anything stupid. Am I understood? Hey, that's just mean. Mina pouted. The irony of saying that after she punted Midoriya clearly lost on her. He was getting a good laugh at least. This rescue attempt would be fun. You hear that, Bakugan? He elbowed Katsuki to get a reaction out of the stoic blonde, and noticed the sound of grating teeth. He sometimes forgot which one of them was usually more hot-headed. Yup. Heard. Just fine. Midoriya didn't notice or know when M&M stopped practicing spreading its fire to create invisible explosions and instead concentrated its heat. The whole bus was becoming hotter as M&M's fires became more concentrated. While Midoriya did like Katsuki getting pissed off, stands were one of the only things that could end him, and while he'd rather die than become a hero, he'd still like to live and just switch careers. Alrighty, how about after this you and me go to your place? It's been forever since we played any video games, and I've been dying to get even with you for last time. Just like how Katsuki calmed Midoriya down by switching the topic, Midoriya tried to change what Katsuki was focusing on. Katsuki was probably listening to the idiots in the background while Midoriya had been practicing the spin, so Midoriya brought him back to just the two of them. I won't point out how much you look like your mom this time. You just did. By saying you weren't, you did. Katsuki at least safely snapped, getting it out of his system by just having a nice long shout. Well, it's true. Do you really have to have even the same hairstyles? The comparison is natural. The rest of the bus ride was pretty fun. Once the beaching stopped. Shut up. Well, the rest of the bus ride was fun for one of them. Midoriya was the first out of the bus, dragging Katsuki behind him on instinct. He made sure he had a good distance between them and the rest of Wana before stopping, making sure they had a nice safety bumper just in case anyone pulled some shady shit. He had got kicked a few too many times to trust those idiots. Why are you always dragging me everywhere? Katsuki worked the same arm Midoriya had latched onto when he dragged both of them out of the bus. Remember that time we got jumped by that slime monster? Remember how you just stood there like a dumbass? Midoriya gave Katsuki a second to process this and come up with a response. When Katsuki didn't say anything, Midoriya took the silence as the blonde's response. That's why. D. Worse, an honest D. But still a D. Katsuki lightly punched him in the arm, but now at least he was smiling. Stop dragging me off. We're both tough. What, do you think roll call's gonna be that bad? If Big Tits is in charge. Definitely. Midoriya wrapped an arm around Katsuki as they walked back to the class, smiling. Hey, you remember what we get to do at the Pink Beach? We could get a little fun out of this after all. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.